A young man charges straight at a massive red dragon that spews fire, and scorching flames blast toward him as fireballs streak in fast. Then he explodes off the ground, sword ready, leaping right at the beast. Then boom, a blazing light erupts from the dragon's chest, and the young man rockets away while the other warriors stand frozen in shock. At last, he's slain the monster that crushed everyone for 3 years, and he's earned that hero's victory for just 3 months. Right when the young man who defeated the dragon reels back in victory, his virtual reality glasses suddenly slip off. Turns out he wasn't in another world at all. He was just playing a video game on his computer. He crashes out of his chair, the keyboard skitters off the table and lands beside the desk where the computer sits, and his face twists in agony. He grabs his chest like it's on fire. The young man can't stop thinking about it. There was a time when his life was totally normal. Suddenly, the doctor slammed the truth into him. He had a heart condition, his life was stuck at 3 years, and his survival chances were basically zero. Because once the clock ran out, the young man would die. The moment he heard the news, the young man stormed out of his job and threw himself headfirst into his dream. Broken Balance Online a video game. He sunk hours into that game until he shot to the top, but the disease kept battering his reflexes. Then all that hard-earned know-how finally paid off, and the young man crushed the boss nobody had beaten in 3 straight years. The young man finally understands the cruel truth. He wants to live, but his illness is already ending him. And as the life slips away, he breaks his heart, bids the other players goodbye, thanks them for everything, and dies. He clings to the idea that true happiness is waiting for him in the next life. The hero jolts back to consciousness and finds himself sprawled on a bed in a bright, roomy chamber. Suddenly, he's hit with his entire life all at once. Tiny kid in the past, growing up, learning how to talk to people, and living out every single day leading to this moment. The young man is blown away. He can remember almost his whole life from another world right up to right now, and then one terrifyingly important truth clicks into place. He remembers wishing for happiness in another life, and then it hits him, this has to be reincarnation into a whole new world, and somehow he's kept every single memory. The kid stares out the window of the building where he just woke up, lost in thought. Then he locks in on the problem and clocks his own reflection, realizing his name is probably Eldo now. The huge estate he's trapped in, it's his family's land. Eldo's the 4th son of some minor noble from the backwoods, and to the noble family, he's barely a person at all. The only one who even keeps in touch with Eldo is the eldest brother, Raidu, the fair-haired golden boy of the family. While everyone else views Eldo as nothing but a burden, shunning him, coldly ignoring him, and spitting out nothing but contempt. After Eldo was born, the crops failed for 3 straight years, and the kid got branded the god of plague, so people started hating him. Because yeah, he can't stand this whole rumor. Eldor finally gets it. He's been allowed to stay in the manor only because he hasn't hit adulthood yet, so his parents never kicked him out, but the next day, he turns 15 and officially becomes an adult, and on top of that, he's forced to face a coming-of-age ceremony. Even though Eldo knew the moment the ceremony ended they'd throw him out, he didn't hold back. In the end, he got it. This world was basically balance in real life, and the broken online/Eshiro proved it. Both worlds line up in wild ways, like how the game has its own coming-of-age ceremony too, and it's packed with magic, skills, and even professions. People with real jobs got split into carpenters and builders, but over time folks started calling them magicians and swordsmen, because the titles and wild fantasy stories just stuck. Even the moves from magicians and swordsmen matched what you'd do in the game. Swordsmen start with the whirlwind strike, while magicians learn the magic ball first. In the world Eldo lands in, the way skills work matches the game he used to binge in his past life. He figured it out the moment his older brothers started bragging about their powers, and now he realizes his current gig is basically entry-level, perfect for anyone who hasn't landed a real normal job yet. Eldo stares out the window with pure grit, realizing he has to move now, because even the rookies already have skills. He smirks, clenches his fist, blurts out self-healing, and then tests the next move to see what powers up from there. A blazing light snaps into his hand, and Eldo doesn't even blink, because he knows self-healing is a basic skill anyone can learn no matter their profession. So Eldo figures it out fast. If he can use it, then the world system is the exact same one as the game. But Eldo spots the real shocker in the blink of an eye. The new world is nothing like the game world, because its people barely even know what magic or skills are. Take Eldo's self-healing skill. It's weak enough that basically anyone could use it, yet Eldo has never run into a single person who actually has. Eldo flashes back to that girl using herbs to heal the boy's knee, and he's totally stunned, because she didn't lean on the healing skill or even the plant medicine skill. Eldo finally understood he couldn't cling to a minor noble's house. Then a hidden blessing hit him like lightning. He snapped with confidence and chose to stop trying to grab pieces of the family property. Then he stormed out and vowed to get way stronger. Rato bursts into the room and tells Eldo, "Today's the big one, your coming-of-age ceremony. Then he leans in and asks, "Are you ready?" Eldo snaps his head toward him. Rado can't believe it when Eldos drops the bombshell that he won't show up for the coming-of-age ceremony. Like, what? Rado tells Eldo to stop fretting about the ceremony's cost, even if his dad and the rest of the family refuse to spend a dime. Yet Eldo shuts him down fast, saying it's not really about the money at all. He says he doesn't even want to sit through that ceremony. Eldo finally figures it out. Getting a profession comes with two routes. First, you run the coming-of-age ceremony, which means coughing up payment to a priest on your 15th birthday. As far as Eldo can tell, the first method is basically the game's pick your profession route, and it comes with a brutal catch. You can't choose for yourself. Once you're stuck with it, you'll never change it, so most people end up with a low-tier profession. But there's a second route in the game. Head to the church in the kingdom's capital, because it's the best in the whole realm, and you can score a high-level profession there that you can't get anywhere else. Elder refuses to sit through the coming-of-age ceremony and is plotting to sneak out of the settlement before it even starts, while Rado's furious, yelling that his father won't stand for it and pushing the question. Does Elder really want to stay a newbie forever? Eldo tells Rado not to sweat it, says he's got his own plan, then leans on his older brother to tell their father the ceremony's been cancelled. Because Eldo knows if he tried explaining it himself, their father wouldn't even hear him out. Ildo stares at his brother like he's already won, but Lieto returns the look with pure doubt. Then he finally caves and admits he'll tell their father that the coming-of-age ceremony is getting cancelled. The very next morning, the estate erupts with screams. Eldos jolts awake and hears someone yelling for him to get up. And it's his own father standing there barking orders, clearly seething with anger. Eldo jolts upright in bed while his father's angry yelling cracks through the room, and he blinks awake, still half asleep. Eldo remembers the last time he talked to his father was about 3 years ago, and then it hits him hard. He can't even remember his father's name. All he can scrape up is this faint, half-remembered echo that sounds like Geldo. Eldo's thoughts get yanked mid-thought when his father hurls a bag straight at his face, but the thing slams to a halt right before it can hit the hero. Thanks to his lightning reflexes, Eldo slaps the bag out of the air with his bare hand. Then his father rips into him, furious, demanding he keep his word, insisting that by canceling the ceremony, Eldo at least managed to save the family in some way. Eldo's father caught sight of his serious face, flashed a cruel grin and barked for him to get out of the house, right now before anything could get worse. Eldo swallows his pride, takes his father's scolding like a blade to the soul, nods for one last goodbye, and then finally storms out of the estate. Eldo stares at what he's got for the road and you can feel the heartbreak. No one shows up to see him off. All he's left with is a rotten sword and 10,000 gil, the new world's currency, and back in his old life, each gil was worth a single yen. As Eldo storms out of the estate, Reito steps in front of him and demands to know, "Are you really walking away?" Eldo slams the brakes and tells them he doesn't belong in the manor, then blurts that he wants to chase a new city and become an adventurer. So Reito, confused out of his mind, tries to put newbie together with adventurer, and basically realizes it makes no sense. Eldo doesn't even blink at that. He smirks and says anyone can become a seeker as long as they can swing a sword like a pro, even if they're brand new. Rado can't wrap his head around why Elda ditched the estate as a brand new face to chase the life of a seeker, when he could have done it the smart way, after landing a proper profession first. Suddenly, Rado thrusts a bag of 100,000 gil into his brother Eldo's hands, tells him to spend it however he wants, and demands he find a real source of income before every last coin is gone. Eldo stared at Rado and realized, whoa, he'd actually got a truly awesome brother. Aldo shuts down the offer, grabs his pride, and tells them he's grateful, but his savings are more than enough. Rado swallows his pride, nods at his brother's refusal, and vows to tuck the money away just in case Eldo ever needs it. Then Eldo grins and says he can't imagine he'll need a single coin. Eldo struts out of the estate with zero doubt, and Rado just watches him vanish down the road. Because Eldo knows the dangerous, thrilling adventures ahead are real, and he's dead certain his choice is the right one. Eldor barrels through the forest, then realizes he needs a guild in the city, so he snaps his sights on that city and heads straight for it. Because the Adventurers Guild is a national powerhouse, it can point you straight to the smartest path to raise capital, and this is the perfect shot for Eldo. Elder finally realizes he's stuck with a lousy sword, and he panics, because if he runs into demons right now, he's done for. Eldo spots a wolf crouched nearby in the forest, and his whole body snaps tense, because he's not about to fight today. Before Eldon can even react, a raging demon wolf barrels straight toward him. Newbies can barely sense enemies, so the second they spot one, the enemy spots them back, bam. Eldo stares at the wolf, frozen, not knowing what to do next. Eldo says the wolf is a demon wrapped in a wolf's body, and yeah, it's one of the weakest enemies in the game. But since this is Eldo's first fight in the new world, he can't afford even a second of loosened guard. Eldo clenches with pure determination, remembers gripping a sword in his old life like it was yesterday, And he knows the truth, skill is everything when the fight begins. A wolf lunges for Eldo, but the young man doesn't flinch, he charges in two, and the fight with the demon finally erupts. Eldo knows that since he remembered every single thing from the game, winning this battle is going to be a breeze. Eldo lunges at the wolf, fully sure he can take down the demon too, so his attack hits harder and his courage surges with every strike. Turns out if you land a hit at the perfect moment, the whole system stacks the damage and multiplies it again and again, just like the hero remembers from the game. After crushing the wolf, Eldo finally starts believing in himself, but even with that victory, he can't let his guard down. He realizes the game's rules aren't just code. They're the world's laws now, and every move the hero used back then becomes his lifeline in this new life. Eldo knows one thing for sure. In this world he's landed in, he'll carve out his place and take control of it using everything he learned from the game. Eldo stares at the fallen wolf and realizes the truth. Back in the fight, his body moved like it was someone else using him, too smooth, too natural, like it was him all along. The young man realizes that if he dials his power to 70% or higher, he can slam out multiple critical hits and get stamped as an experienced player like it's obvious. He figures it all comes from the skills and instincts he sharpened in Broken Balance Online. Eldo makes a bold choice. He pits the new world system head-to-head with the game. He grabs the defeated demon with the gathering technique. Collecting is all about digging useful materials out of monster corpses to forge equipment, but plenty of people hated it. They said it was disgusting and totally not worth the trouble, calling the whole system pointless. Because collecting had such a brutal reputation, a brand new skill was forged, auto-collect. The power to snatch materials on its own, so Eldo decides to test it right away and marches up to the wolf's body. He slams the skill into motion, but it does nothing, because if it had worked, the wolf's body would have vanished. Eldo clocks that instantly, and the young man goes for the last decisive move. Eldo clutches the wolf fangs in his hand, unleashes the cleanse skill, and watches the fangs come out spotless. Then he grins, realizing this power is insanely useful. Eldo realizes the world he's trapped in looks just like Broken Balance Online, the game he knows. Yet something's off, like the universe is smirking at him. Eldo finally bursts into a city called Ilya. The city roars with life, merchants swarm every corner. Eldo swings his gaze around the streets and spots a flood of people rushing to get their jobs done. Suddenly, a weird stranger shouts at Eldo, asking if he's lost. Eldo snaps back that he is, then demands where the guild is. The man sizes up Eldo, spots the sword and the money pouch, then smirks and spits out some nasty jab, calling him just another young aristocrat who dreams of playing adventurer. The man snaps that Eldo's gear is garbage, then grins like he's already got the paperwork. Eldo's getting kicked out of the guild the second he walks in, and the smirk says the person who handed him that stuff probably wants him dead. Eldo snarls that they truly meant to kill him, and the man answers, "Sounds like you had a rough time," then gives the boy advice. The man tells Eldo to drop the stiff, formal talk, because every adventurer out there speaks nothing like him. Eldo goes wide-eyed at the advice. The man bluntly warns that if even one bandit overhears how Eldo talks, they'll instantly spot him as the leader. And he explains that adventurers dumb things down on purpose so nobody can figure out the hidden pecking order inside their crew. The man says that if adventurers overhear someone talking like that, they'll clock the mistake instantly, think they've got zero clue, and then just burst out laughing. Eldo heeds the advice and works on how he speaks, and the man nods like, "Yeah, now it sounds way better." Then he points him to the guild's location and sends Eldo off with a good luck. Eldo strides toward the guild, shaking his head like, "Seriously, adventurers don't talk formally at all." And he recalls how they'd never spoken that way in front of their father or the feudal lord. Eldo barrels into the guild, eyes locked on it, and he's 100% sure every move of his plan is already set in stone. Eldo steps into the guild building and sweeps his eyes around, then strides straight down the corridor. On one wall, the young man spots a world map, leans in, and realizes the capital sits on the next continent, across the sea. He knows hopping to a whole other continent is exhausting, but it's not even that far, so he's determined to head there now. Eldo stares at the board, scanning the requests meant for the guild members. Staring at the requests, Eldo clocks the pattern, each one matched to the monster type he's hunting, and with that in hand, he maps out his whole journey. He spots a request to kill a C-rated wolf, and he can't believe what he's reading. Turns out every request gets ranked from A to F, and killing a wolf lands as the third toughest job on the board. Eldo can't believe a beginner can drop that monster with one critical hit, yet it's still ranked that high, and the hero instantly knows something's off. Eldo says he decided to hunt down any F-rank requests, the kind you toss to someone taking down wolves. Then he stares at requests for a kicking rabbit, a biting rat, and a wild boar, and it throws him for a loop. Eldo spots the D-rank and lower monster requests and freezes. He's never seen monsters like these in Broken Balance Online, and they look brutally weak. Turns out he's never seen monsters like these before. And now he's stuck wondering if the wolf he just killed even compares to the other beasts listed on that request board. While Eldo is mulling over selling the wolf fangs he just killed to the guild, a cute blonde girl he's never seen before steps right up. Turns out she's the guild administrator, Teresa. And she straight up asks Eldo if he has anything he wants to sell. Eldo says he wants to sell the monster's fangs, but he admits he has no clue what kind of beast it was. So Teresa's jaw drops, and she instantly figures he must be a total newbie. Teresa says you can't fight an enemy until you know who they really are, because one wrong move could cost you your life. Eldor fires back that Teresa's right, he's still a total newbie, and he hasn't even gotten around to registering yet. He just prays they won't shut him out from selling the materials from the slain monster because of it. Teresa tells him he doesn't need to worry, she can sell the materials. But then she makes one thing crystal clear. How fast they cash in depends on the monster, so there's no promise Eldo will be able to move those fangs. Eldo bared his fangs in front of Teresa, held them up like proof, and said that this was exactly what he wanted to sell. Teresa stared in shock for half a heartbeat, then indignation slammed into her face. She marches up to Eldo, calls out the lie, and demands to know where those fangs came from, while Teresa snarls that shady folks smuggle them in from other shops. The girl then points out the brutal truth. If Eldo sells something like that without the guild's request, it won't count as an achievement at all. And she watches his face as she asks if he gets it. Eldo starts replaying the monster he just crushed. He's pretty sure it was a wolf. And then he remembers how Teresa thought he was chasing easy achievements, but he can't wrap his head around how wiping out something that low counts as a real win. To shut Teresa up before she calls Eldo dishonest, he claims he just wiped out a monster, and swears it isn't C rank, not even close. Teresa shoots back that it is asterisk C rank because the guild's bestiary says so. Eldos claims this monster must have been way weaker than the others, but Teresa snaps back, monsters at the same level can't be that far apart in strength. Then she circles his earlier words. He said he'd killed it recently, so why are the fangs still spotless, like they've never even tasted blood? Eldo shrugs off the whole question of who killed the monster. He's done caring, because all he wants right now is to make some money. Eldo can't stop wondering how much gold he'd rake in from those fangs if he can still sell them. Teresa shuts it down hard, saying it won't count toward the achievement, but she still lets him sell them. Then she drops the number. 32,000 gil because those fangs are so spotless. Teresa blurts out that she can cough up 34,000 gil for the fangs, then turns to Eldo and asks what he thinks, and the hero immediately decides it's a solid offer. The young man insists everything's fine, and pushes to sell them, then adds that he wants to register with the guild. Teresa just smiles and says it's not complicated. You take a quick little exam and pay a 5,000 gil exam fee. Aldo says, all right, then I'll register right now. And Teresa fires off, I've got you, everything's handled, then hands him 29,000 gil, already counted down after the exam fee is taken out. Teresa leans in and asks Eldo what he does for work, and Eldo admits he's a total newbie. Then Teresa snaps that if he bombs the exam, there won't be a single penny of compensation, and she makes him confirm he understands. Eldo asks if the guild will turn him away, and Teresa answers, other guilds might, but not us. She explains that everyone in their guild insists you should at least go for it. If you fail, you switch paths and try again, because they're convinced it's the best thing for you. Eldo shoots back, asking if this exam is really meant to be easy, and Teresa grins. Yeah, easy, just not for beginners. Then she shoves a form into his hands and tells him to pick the option for the exam. Teresa tells Eldo he'll be treated the same no matter what he picks. But then she warns him that every choice demands unique job skills. So if he walks into that exam with a novice job and no skills, he's basically toast. Eldo weighs every single option and finally picks an exam that gives him a one-on-one training duel against a swordsman examiner. The hero realizes this demand is wildly unusual, and he knows he won't pull off a win against an experienced opponent by using beginner skills, weak stats, and sheer hope. Eldo knows his level has hit a dead stop at 1, no matter how used he is to battling in broken balance online, because a real pro opponent almost never shows up weaker than him. Then Eldo snaps to it, losing won't ruin him, not really. He's only on the hook for 5,000 gil, so he grits his teeth and decides he's going for it. Eldo finally makes his call and hands Teresa the choice he picked. She scans it, then tells him the exam is going down right in the training area. Teresa tells Eldo to wait, and as he stands behind the guild administration desk, she storms off somewhere out of sight. A little while later, she rushes to apologize for the wait, then begs Eldo to come with her to the training room. Eldo bursts into the training room and spots a young powerhouse of a man waiting inside. The man leans in, glares at Eldo, and demands to know if he's the new guy trying to be an adventurer. Eldo's stomach drops. He can tell he can't win, and he quickly begs the man to go easy on him. The man scoffs at Eldo's request and basically says, "You're asking for forgiveness, huh? Yeah, but I'm not making it any easier." Then he sneers that a green newbie who becomes an adventurer will only end up dead in some pointless, meaningless way. The man stands tall and declares with total confidence that it's his duty to stop a death like that from ever happening. Elder clocks it right away. That guy doesn't want the hero anywhere near this exam because the examiner's skill is way beyond his, and if Elder even so much as trades blows with him once, the hero is finished in a heartbeat, while that man would wipe the floor with him without breaking a sweat. Even after everything, Eldo decides to walk into that exam with everything he's got, and he flat out begs the examiner, "Please don't seriously hurt me." The examiner tells him to chill, he's a pro, no need to stress. Then the man grins and swears he'll beat Eldo without landing any real damage. Aldo knows the examiner won't spare him for a second, so he asks if he should grab one of the training arena swords, only for the examiner to shut him down flat. The man tells Eldo, if you've got a sword you're used to, then you can finally swing with your own weapon. Eldo snaps back, I only have a sharp blade with a real edge, but the examiner just smirks, no worries. You won't land a single hit on me. Eldor insists he still wants the wooden sword and blurts out which one he's allowed to grab, and the examiner shrugs it off and says it doesn't matter, while Teresa just watches in quiet silence. Eldor grabs a wooden sword because it's lighter, and when you're not hunting an enemy, that kind of weapon comes in clutch, so he picks one and sticks with it. The examiner leans in and asks if the hero has picked a sword. Eldor snaps back that he has. The examiner steps up to Eldo and declares, all right, time to start. Teresa warns, I'll be the judge, and the girl immediately fires back, asking if those men are ready to throw down. The examiner nods, saying he's ready. Eldo grins back, ready to throw down anytime the fight starts. Teresa blasts out that the competition is officially underway, and the examiner strides straight toward Eldo, while Eldo locks in his plan on exactly how he'll strike back. The hero realizes the strength gap is monstrous, and the only way he even gets a shot at winning is if the examiner breaks out a skill. Eldo knows that the swordsman's real technique hits way harder than a normal strike, but once he starts that attack, he can't steer the swing back or change where it's already headed. A powerful cut can smash like a monster. If you've got the skill to finish it, you surge forward, but right after that swing during the next half, or even just 0.7 seconds, your guard drops and you're left wide open. Eldo knows this. If the examiner refuses to use his skills, Eldo can't change a thing about his own strength or ability. The examiner charges straight at Eldo, aiming to smash him to pieces. Eldor clocks the examiner's plan to smash down from above, so he tries to parry it. But the moment he goes for it, he realizes he'd be crushed for sure. Eldo even figures this out. If some guy swings at him from above, he doesn't panic. He just shifts a little and the attack slips right past. The examiner yells the skill, Defense Crush, and charges Eldo, and that name slams into the hero's memory. He gets it now. This power only shows up when the moment demands you smash through the enemy's defenses. Eldo can't help but respect that examiner's bold play, because if you swing at the hero from that spot, you're also gambling your own skin the second you try to counter. The hero slips out of the examiner's strike like it's nothing, dodging with pure ease. Suddenly, the hero snaps to it. The examiner isn't blocking him at all, he's actually letting him in. Elder decides this time the man didn't just fall into danger, he purposely throws himself open for the strike. The young man realizes that if he doesn't land a decisive strike the moment the enemy turns their back, he's dead in the water, and that's why he commits right now. Without wasting a second, Eldo rockets in from behind and lands a decisive game-changing strike on the examiner, sending him crashing back several meters. The hero snatches the weapon from him, and Teresa, watching it all, can barely contain her joy. The examiner gets slammed across the ground after Eldo's strike hurls her several meters, and just like that, she calls the whole thing off, saying, "That's enough." Eldo gets it, and still can't believe he actually passed the exam. He silently thanks the instructor for treating the hero with way more patience than you'd expect. The examiner, stunned, demands again. How could he possibly soar away from a punch delivered by a beginner with zero skill? Eldo's face lights up with genuine joy. He's insanely grateful to the instructor, convinced it wasn't an accident at all, but a deliberate move to help him. The hero's like, wow, what an amazing person you are. And he shoots the instructor a sincere, grateful smile as he reaches out to help him. Eldo stares the instructor down and asks, "Did I pass?" The examiner looks genuinely stunned, blurts that he did, and then grumbles that he's really not happy about it. He demands where Eldo learned to fight like that, because Eldo's still just a beginner. Eldo answers with a calm smile that he's self-taught, but in his own head he admits it. He can't honestly claim he learned every last fighting skill just by playing Broken Balance online. He remembers how in his past life he basically lived in that game, never once getting bored as he kept swinging his sword, and even the battles never could hurt the hero for real. Eldo still tells his friends for hours, breaking down which battle techniques hit hardest and why. But the hero snaps back that the instructor's dead wrong. He claims he only beat that man because the instructor barely tried. and if he'd actually taken it seriously, he would have wiped the floor with Eldo in an instant. The examiner, still reeling, demands how Eldo could have held back in that fight, and Eldo snaps back that the instructor's guidance was crystal clear. Then he admits he unleashed the defense-crushing skill on purpose, just to give the hero the opening. The instructor's eyes widened with pure confusion and clear irritation as he snapped, asking how Eldo could even say something like that. Even after everything, the hero still can't get it, because the examiner wasn't acting for even a second. Eldo can't help but think what kind of soul this instructor has, still choosing to play the weaker opponent after the fight is over. Teresa was beaming, and you could tell she was thrilled. She rushed over, applauded Eldo for crushing the exam, and declared that starting today, he's officially a full-on member of the guild. Teresa thrusts a card into his hands, explains it proves Eldo is a legit guild member, and then boom, he thanks her and grabs the card. Eldo snatches a look at the card, there's his name and right beside it the rank, and the inscription doesn't hold back, he's labeled an F rank. Teresa leans in and asks if Eldo wants a quick intro to the guild, then tells her membership doesn't need it, though she strongly recommends it. Eldo grinned and said he'd love a short intro course, and Teresa jumped in right away, saying they should start with the big thing, an adventurer's obligations. They lay down the rules hard. Don't file fake reports, don't spill a client's private info, and don't break the laws of the country where the scammer is operating. She says those are the deal makers, the non-negotiables. Eldo leans in and asks what could possibly happen if he breaks just one of the rules. Teresa shoots back that it all hinges on which rule got broken, then lays it out. Punishment can mean a suspension of an adventurer's card or even getting thrown out of the guild, and if someone messes up the law, they'll have to face the authorities. The girl snaps that worst case, the punishment could even be the death penalty. Eldo's stomach drops at how brutal that is, and he blurts out frantic, whether Teresa has made sure he knows every single demand. The hero can't stop asking himself if he'll have to step in with emergency help, because back in the game those urgent requests were there, and you couldn't just refuse them. So if that system exists in this world too, joining a guild might be a trap waiting to spring. Teresa shoots back that the guild never drags anyone into requests, not even emergencies. There's only those 3 non-negotiable rules she just listed. Eldo claims he's got it all figured out, tells Teresa to keep going with the briefing, and she nods as she steps up to lay out the time limits and penalties for finishing every contract. Teresa breaks it down. Every request gets a strict time limit, and if you miss it, the job turns into a failure with a penalty fee you have to pay, so yeah, urgent tasks hit way harder with massive consequences. Eldo blurts out, what happens if I pull it off in time but I don't report it? Teresa fires back that the deadlines are set by how long the report takes, depending on where the request comes from, and she demands you never, ever forget it, or the whole task gets marked as unfulfilled. The girl declares the briefing is done and shoves a copy of the introductory course into Eldo's hands, then leans in and asks if the hero has any questions. If he does, ask away. Eldo stares at the paper like it holds the key, and when he confirms everything's right, the hero decides to dig deeper. He asks the guild if they've got a bestiary or fencing manuals. Teresa shoots back that they're in the library, and she'll grab them later, then makes it crystal clear. Nothing leaves this building, so if Eldo needs that book for real, he'll have to buy it. Straight after, Eldo begs for a bestiary and a manual on hand-to-hand combat. Teresa leans in, listens hard, and breaks down exactly what kind of popular books the hero needs. Then she points out that if Eldo wants to hit the road for real adventures, he should read Monsters of the Outskirts of Ilya. The girl hands the hero the book and he blurts out his thanks. Then he notices it's ridiculously thin. Teresa just grins and says adventurers don't crave thick volumes, so almost nobody writes enough to fill one. Eldo nods and decides to kick things off with the bestiary. He stares hard at the monsters in the bestiary and spots a kicking rabbit, a biting rat, and a sand mole right there on the pages. Then it hits him. The F-monster section is packed with creatures Eldo has never seen before. He realizes he's clueless about a chunk of the E and D ranked monsters too. Then the hero spots something on the book's pages out of nowhere. Turns out Eldo was staring at C-rank monsters, the wolf, the scorpion, and even the vampire bat, and he immediately asks, so these are low-level ones. The hero's jaw drops. How on earth did they get a rank that high? It feels like the universe is laughing at them, like this has to be a joke. He stares at a wolf picture labeled Angry Wolf, with B rank stamped beside it. And in Broken Balance Online, it turns out that once you kill monsters like that, you don't just level up, you instantly stop being a newbie. Eldo's jaw drops in real disbelief, because he can't wrap his head around why the guild members only go after A-rank monsters. Elder decides to dig into the A-rank list, then flips the pages and finds them totally empty, and for once the hero lets out a breath of relief. There isn't a single A-rank monster anywhere. Eldo grabs the Adventurer's Combat Handbook and starts from page 1, diving straight into combat all the way to advanced level. He flips open the first page at the elementary level, and there it is, straight-up instructions for keeping weapons in shape and grabbing trophies from monsters. And he freezes because he realizes he's already got all of it down. Next, the hero cracks open the first level chock full of weapon basics, class-by-class magic, and even reconnaissance tactics. And Eldo already knows it all, so he just skips the chapter. The book's middle chapters teach timing tricks for skills, dungeon tactics, and how to pin a lone enemy in place. So Elda's been around this stuff forever, and now he's convinced he's still stuck in the first level. The hero cracks open an advanced level, one built for strategy against a swarm with brutal human attacks. Yet Eldo swears he's starting on the tutorial, until he realizes with a jolt he's already in the advanced stage. He blurts out that this can't possibly count as advanced know-how. But then his real hunger kicks in. He wants to know where the info on one-on-one battles lives, and he starts forecasting every enemy move like he's reading their mind. Eldo suddenly spots a report called ***, Miraculous Strike, ***. It says when someone fights, their weapon can sometimes unleash ***, multiple damage at once, like pure luck turned into power. And people have tried to copy it over and over, but every single attempt has failed. Turns out, according to one theory, even Gillard, the strongest adventurer around, only had a brutal 20% shot at pulling off those attacks. Even with the strongest man in the world only getting a 20% shot at landing a critical blow, the hero's still stunned, and he decides one thing. Gillard is the only guy in this world who's done being a rookie. The hero reels in shock, stunned that in this new world, even the people around him can't deal real critical damage. Turns out all you have to do for a critical hit is loosen your grip the moment your weapon taps the enemy. Then boom, you can keep landing crit after crit non-stop. Eldo figures if someone can't even wrap their head around how critical hits work, then a 20% shot at success doesn't look too awful. Unless the villagers don't know that basic stuff at all, in which case they're clueless about everything. So the hero clocks it. The new world has zero book culture to pass down advanced knowledge, and that's why nobody reads. Eldo gets it but still decides he can't fully trust the bestiary. Teresa asks whether the book helped Eldo, and the hero instantly chooses to lie, saying it worked. Because admitting it's too simple and basically useless would expose him. Eldo tells Teresa he's trying to reach the capital and straight up asks her how to get there, and Teresa's stunned like, wait, what? Eldo asks why, and Teresa fires back that the ferry seats are mostly locked up for guild and government bigwigs. Sure, the rest can ride too, but the cheapest seat will set you back 3 million gil. Eldo leans in and asks if there's any other route, and Teresa fires back, saying there are options. The hero could get hired by a huge trading company, slip into a powerful noble family with ties in the capital, or land a top job inside a guild. The girl can't help but stress that Eldo could just swim across the sea, but he shuts it down fast, insisting it's smarter to hold out and save those 3 million gil. The hero figures Minaton's coastal city isn't too far off, but because he's never faced monsters before, he chooses to hang around Ilya for a bit, training up to fight better and raking in some money along the way. Eldor says he'll take the request, then asks if the guild has anything for newbies. Teresa hands it to him and asks if the hero's in, and Eldor answers with total confidence. He'll definitely take it. Teresa shoves a slip of paper into his hands, demanding the extermination of lower E-rank wolves, and then tells him she's picked this exact job for him. Eldo asks the girl, can I handle E-level requests even if they're coming in under an F-Danish level order? She grins and says the request doesn't spell out any rules or limits, so there's zero reason to worry. Eldos clocks that 4,000 gil for a job like this is a goldmine for someone at his rank, then shoots back, why are you paying so much for this? Teresa grins and says, yeah, this query costs a fortune, because it's brutally hard to pull off, adding that it's basically knocking on the D-rank door. Eldo's excitement crumples as he shuts down the request. Then, to Teresa's shock, he flips it around and asks for a plain, regular F-rank job instead, saying he's in no rush and won't touch anything way above his level. Teresa reminds Eldo he already beat the instructor, so mowing down weak monsters is beneath him. And Eldo fires back that he only won because the instructor didn't go all out, and he just got lucky with a truly miraculous hit. Teresa barrels into the moment and tells Eldo the instructor couldn't possibly give in, his whole job is to smash the new kids down. Then, when she hears them talk about a miracle blow, her shock hits hard. Eldo backs up everything he said about that miraculous strike and admits that without this technique he never could have taken down the examiner. Then the girl blurts out, wait, if you can use the miraculous strike, you're not a beginner anymore, you're an expert. What? Eldo reels from those words. He knows even a punch that can knock someone out can happen by accident, even with a special technique backing it up. So Teresa snatches the moment, thrusts him into a new task right away, and beams as she tells him all about it. The girl grins and hands him a request to kill a C-rank monster, and Eldo's not buying any of it. This twist makes him furious. Eldo's gut tells him Teresa wants him dead, and the hero snaps. He decides to pick his own job and tells her straight up. Eldo rips down a job request from the board. Someone wants boxer rabbits exterminated, and it pays a sweet $1,500 gil per head. Eldo grins because this gig screams perfect for me. Charlotte's eyes light up with a wild idea and she snaps, I'm in. And if Eldo wants the job, he's getting it. The hero's still trapped inside the guild building when Teresa shoves a quest sheet into his hands. His request is already processed. She tells him all he has to do is wipe out the rabbits in Ilya's second forest, which means Eldo is safe. Teresa suddenly locks eyes with the thoughtful hero and says, there's no such thing as too much caution, get ready for anything. Eldo's grinning because Teresa finally hands him a normal job, and he's sure she can handle things when she puts her mind to it. The hero leans in and asks how to reach the right place, and Teresa lays out the route step by step. Eldo storms out of the guild building, clenching his resolve as he heads straight to finish the job. On his way to the mission site, Eldo runs into the instructor, and the guy beams and calls him the hero, the strongest man around, then fires a question. So you're really going to take on that mission? The hero rejects the idea that he's the strongest, then leans in and admits he took the request to wipe out the monster rabbits in Ilya's second forest straight to heart. The instructor's jaw drops at the wild assignment the young man picked. Eldo nods, points out that the administrator swore there aren't any other monsters in the forest, calls it safe, and pushes a high-level quest his way. But Eldo refuses, then demands something else, something easier. The examiner lets out a heavy breath and admits he understands every single thing. He whips around, throws Eldo a wave of luck, then strides off, and the hero fires back, see ya, promising he'll give it his best shot. Eldo plants another step toward his goal, convinced that for any newcomer, rabbits aren't cute. They're deadly enemies you can't afford to underestimate. The hero pushes deeper into Ilya's second forest, scans everything around him, and swears to himself that he's finally arrived at the place he's been chasing. Right then, Eldo spots a sudden twitch in the bushes ahead. His guard snaps up instantly. The hero can't stop staring at it, box or rabbit. Something feels asterisk off because that rabbit looks way too much like a wolf, and not just any wolf, a lower wolf. As the wolf, just like Eldo, weighs his next move, a whole pack of those smaller wolves suddenly barrels out from behind the bushes. A wolf from the pack snarls, bares razor teeth, and explodes toward Eldo with everything it's got. Then the hero goes tight with fear, and he finally knows he was right. Those things weren't just wolves, they were the pack's lower kind. Eldo snaps at Teresa, hurling damn secretary at her, because she told him the request was safe so he'd send the hero to exterminate the lesser wolves she'd recommended. The young man realizes too late that he's screwed, and now he has no time left to sprint back. The hero grins as the wolf dives at him, then commits to a wild tactic. He plays like he's ready for any blow, then bam, he snaps out of the way and slips past those razor fangs. The wolf totally doesn't see it coming, so he slips right past the chance and misses. Eldo snaps his sword down onto the monster's back with a sharp whistle, slicing it clean in half, and the sound is downright awful. Other wolves, seeing the chaos unfold, lock eyes with the hero, and then swarm into attack. With a ferocious roar, one of them lunges at the young man, but he snaps into action, and with a deafening cry of -2, he slams the monster down. Eldo's self-doubt evaporates, and he surges forward with rock-solid confidence in everything he does. He remembers the universal rule of battle. When you face a pack, you shatter the big fight into a bunch of one-on-one scraps, then he spots it. The wolves are out of sync now, so he pushes them to regroup. The hero barrels into the wolf pack, slashing with pure fury and breakneck speed. He finally reaches the last monster and crushes it with a killer, expertly timed attack. Suddenly, Eldo gets a weird feeling. He stares at himself, stunned and grinning as he realizes his body has somehow turned lighter. He decides this surge in power must be what's causing that weird feeling. The hero finally admits to himself, I have no clue if this new world even has a level system. Then he snaps into action and goes to find out. He grabs a rock, unleashes his powered rock throw asterisk, winds up, and hurls it with everything he's got straight into a nearby tree. The stone slam hits the plant and tears it up, straight down, carving a massive, jagged crater. Eldo realizes this. If he can use a second-level beginner's skills right now, then there's no doubt he's leveled up for real. Proud of how everything went, the hero turns around and heads back to the city, smugly thinking, in just one day I joined the guild and even leveled up, which honestly feels like a win. Then Eldo realizes it. He's desperate to get back to the guild, and Teresa, he can't stop thinking about you. Eldo stomps back into the guild building with the wolf carcasses in tow, dumps them in front of Teresa, and shoots her a disgusted look. So do they really look like rabbits to you? Teresa's eyes go wide with shock as she blurts, no way, how could there possibly be lower wolves hiding in a forest where rabbits are getting kicked? Eldo asks the girl what she means by this forest, saying it's the first time he's ever heard of it, and Teresa's jaw drops. She insists she definitely pointed the hero straight to the forest of kicking rabbits. She says if Aldo was only supposed to fight the lower wolves, then yeah, he probably stumbled into Ilya's second forest by pure accident. The hero gets it instantly. Teresa chose to act like a fool on purpose. He stops himself from arguing with the girl and admits he really did wander into Ilya's second forest by mistake, then pivots. He plans to trick Teresa and tells her that since he couldn't finish the task, the whole thing should be cancelled. She wears guilt like a mask, blurts out a shaky explanation and calls herself a bungler, saying she accidentally handed Elda the job of killing the lower wolves. And then she pleads, "Did you get it done?" With fury blazing in his eyes, the hero snaps back that he wiped out all 6 monsters, and then lets it out on Teresa, absolutely seething about what she caused. The girl brightens up and tells them it's 20,000 gil to kill one monster, so 6 of them will pay out 120,000 gil. And when Eldo sees that money, satisfaction hits him like a wave. Teresa tells him the kid only gets 9,000 gil for wiping out those rabbits, and Eldo immediately lets the girl off the hook. Teresa finally lets out a breath of relief when she realizes Eldo isn't angry anymore. And then, just like that, Eldo decides she's an amazing person because she handed him a seriously profitable job and he can't stop thanking her for it. Eldo, buzzing with excitement, leans in and asks if they'll be taking out wolves again tomorrow too. Then Teresa smiles and tells him, of course. The very next day, Eldo storms into the weapons shop, and a tough, no-nonsense man steps up, staring him down as he demands what the hero is after. Eldo just flashes a quick answer. He's hunting for a plain, ordinary sword for himself. He tells himself right then, if you want to survive the mission, you'd better have the right weapon, because he knows that when the battles get rough, he's going to need a sharp, reliable blade to cover every one of his weak spots. Eldo inspects every blade and none of them cut it, so he storms to the shop assistant and demands to know if there are any way better blades in stock. The man brags that there's one pricey, top-notch sword and Eldo jumps in asking if he can try it. Then the man nods and agrees. The hero grips the blade tight and something in him clicks, he actually likes it. And then the young man decides without hesitation that this is the sword he's taking. Grinning at his purchase, Eldo breathes easy. Now that sword will hold up in battle and won't snap on him. He storms into the guild, fully knowing his cash is gone for good, and he has to make some extra money fast. The second he steps inside, he strides up to Teresa and blurts out, "Got any quests today, like killing lower wolves?" Teresa's face lights up as she nods, telling him the jobs are ready, and that they've still got 32 lower wolves left to wipe out before the kill limit hits. With surprise written all over Eldo's face, he blurts out, "So what's the kill limit?" Teresa tells him it's the number of monsters you kill that actually counts toward the payment. Sure, you can slaughter as many as you want, but the extra kills won't earn you a single penny. Eldo realizes there's no sense slaughtering more monsters than he has to. He tells her he's not just taking the wolf's killing job, he wants another one too, and Teresa's jaw drops as she reminds him, there are 32 monsters you have to kill. Eldo calmly tells them this job won't drag past 2 hours, then shuts the idea down fast. He refuses to bounce back to the guild again and again because it's pointless, so he grabs the next request right away. The girl's jaw drops when Eldo casually says slaughtering 32 wolves will only take 2 hours. The hero figures that if he's stuck with a job he has to keep doing over and over, then yeah, his strength must be sitting at the E rank. He snatches up that paper, and there it is. An order to kill 546 spearmists for 4,000 gil each, no mercy, just money. Eldo lights up the second he sees it because the job fits him perfectly, and he rushes to tell Teresa right away. The girl fires back that slaughtering the spearmists is exactly the job for Eldo, and then, grinning, pushes him out on the mission while she's still in a good mood. Eldo wastes no time and wipes out the lesser wolves on command, then grins and declares he's about to go straight for the spearmist next. The hero barrels into yet another thick forest, and right away he spots towering trees, a tiny stream, and a bridge spanning it. Then Eldo starts scrambling to figure out if he truly landed in the right place. He spots it right away. The place feels a little off from what Teresa described. Then the memory hits him hard. She'd said the forest looked absolutely magnificent. He also notices the mouse isn't just white fur with black eyes and a carved horn. She's got a long, light tail, white front teeth that stick out, and sharp claws, and she's sitting completely still. Eldo spots the sharp horn on the creature's head and decides it has to be a spear mouse, so he's sure he's stepped straight into monster territory. Then he raises his game and goes after the mouse sitting in front of him first. Suddenly, the creature bursts into a long, loud, disgusting squeak, like it's summoning every other mouse nearby, and he absolutely didn't see it coming, shocked by both the mouse's move and the way that sound hit so unexpectedly. That one mouse shrieks so brutally loud the hero jerks to face it, bracing for a full-on swarm attack. Then, out of Eldo's shadows, more mice answer the scream from every direction, squeaking just as viciously and making it all feel instantly disgusting. The hero snaps that the creature must have dragged in its relatives, and Eldo's got so much chaotic noise around it that it drives him mad. The squeaking is so deafening he can't even guess if there are 10 mice or 20 swarming him. He decides he has to wipe out as many mice as possible before the rest of the pack shows up. Then Eldo explodes forward, slamming into a squealing mouse with a brutal lunge. He swings once, and with that one-hand strike, it's over. He stared at the monster split in two, and the truth hit him hard. Each mouse was barely anything on its own, so wiping them out one by one would be ridiculously easy. Eldo stares at the swarming mice in the grass creeping ever closer, and the truth hits. This is the toughest battle he's ever faced, and he's ready to throw down. The hero knows this fight will force him to lean on just one skill, his most useless one, and he can already feel it. With so many enemies swarming in, he's still going to miss punches. He clenches his sword like it's his lifeline and lunges into attack with determination. Then the mice swarm Eldo in a blur, backed by sheer numbers, tiny bodies, and lightning speed, while Eldo stands there all alone. A swarm of mice leaps onto him to beat him down, but he refuses to break. Then, with one brutal swing, he slices every last one clean in half with his sword. Right as he lands, the horn on one spear mouse twists, spinning around its axis. One of the pack's monsters whips its horn around and lunges past Eldo's shoulder, slamming into him and ripping him up. Eldo blurts out in shock at the pain, still staying on his feet while the mice hover close by, ready to strike. Eldo realizes the pain isn't even that bad, and only this way can the mice be beaten, while the monsters keep pounding in, so he grins through the wave of enemies and starts using a bunch of other skills. For example, he keeps mowing down mice, snuffing out 3 with one snap of his hand. Right when the hero does it too, sending the little squealers shrieking before they drop dead. Then he barrels through the monsters' attacks with deadly dodges, only for a few strikes to land on him. The hero snaps back to the truth. During a fight like this, you can't ignore your self-healing skill. He clenches his fist and declares that when you restore your strength can make or break the whole battle, so a beginner can't afford to waste mana. Eldo vows to stay cool and strike with clear, steady choice, no matter what, without panicking or blindly reacting, and always judging your next move first. The young man is dead sure he'll smash every enemy in front of him, no matter what happens. And when the fight wounds him, he'll heal up and keep charging with the same unbreakable fire. Behind the counter, the girl stares at a mountain of peeled horns, and after Eldo tells her exactly how many monsters he's wiped out, she repeats the number with shining awe 276, like her jaw drops so hard she can't find words. Eldo is convinced, again, that Teresa is shamelessly acting clueless right to his face, because he still remembers how she tossed that this job is perfect for the hero line with a straight face, and it turned out to be a complete lie. Eldo recounts his run-in with the mice. He spots one, and before he can blink, it squeals and summons its friends. The hero asks, "Is it really supposed to go down like this?" And Teresa snaps back, "No, it never happens." The hero's like, "If the mice show up in packs to attack, shouldn't they be E-rank?" And Teresa shoots back, "Sure, these spearmists team up, but not in crowds that big." Teresa suddenly clicks into place on what happened to Eldo. Those horns don't belong to spearmists at all. They're combat spearmists. Eldo asks if it's a different kind of monster, and the girl blurts out fast, "Regular spear mice are E-rank, but combat mice are C-rank." The hero frets, wondering if he just botched the whole mission, and Teresa snaps back that he's stressing over the last thing that matters, because charging in alone against an army of those monsters is basically signing your own death warrant. Eldo says that since he's taken care of the mice, there's no reason to stress over that anymore, and he asks Teresa if she can change his task. Teresa answers without hesitation. The job can't be changed, not even a little, under any circumstances. Hearing that hit him hard, he froze in shock, then sank into disappointment and even felt genuinely upset. Teresa hurries in saying, "Don't lose hope yet. Those spearmen's warm ice horns can be sold for a fortune." The hero asks what the horns are worth, and Teresa lights up, saying each one sells for 20,000 gil because they're C-rank monsters. Eldo can't contain his excitement and blurts that he wants to sell everything, and Teresa immediately rushes in to help him. The girl thrusts a bag of cold, heavy money into Eldo's hands, and when he sees the pile of coins he's earned, the hero can't help but stare at it in awe. Then he reaches into the bag, pulls out a single coin, and scrutinizes it like it's priceless, platinum no doubt. The young man's mind snaps to it. One of these is worth 1,000,000 gold. Teresa admits she hasn't even used platinum coins in ages. The girl also told Eldo, "Don't strut through the city flashing platinum coins, because thieves would zero in on that glimmer in a heartbeat." Eldo's jaw drops. Thieves in this city? He's never seen a single one before. Teresa nods and tells him Ilya's mostly safe, but she warns him straight up. If those thieves come for him, Eldo better be ready to fight back. The girl asks if the hero's heading to the capital now that he's saved enough for the trip, and Eldo's grins and says she's dead on. Then he insists on leaving as soon as humanly possible. Teresa spills her heartbreak, saying the hero won't be staying in Ilya anymore, and then she admits the city hasn't seen someone as fierce as Eldo in ages. only for the young man to grin and swear, "If I ever feel like it, I'll come back for sure."
What?
The girl presses the hero, asking why he's headed to the capital, and Eldo shoots back fast. He's got business there that'll push his journey forward and level him up as an adventurer. Eldo starts to head out and tells Teresa goodbye, but right after a few steps, she suddenly calls his name, springs up from the counter, rushes toward him, and blurts out that she's got something important to tell him. She snaps into a sharp bow and, choking on guilt, apologizes for lying about the boxer rabbits. Eldo stares at her and desperately tries to dig up the memory, and to Teresa's shock, he tells her it's nothing terrible, he's already long forgotten it. Then the hero adds one more warning: don't hit other people with that kind of thing. Eldo grins and says the other adventurers are about to lose their minds if Teresa keeps spreading misinformation. Teresa beams at the hero with pure gratitude and joy, then tells him she finally understands everything. Eldo flashes a confident smile at Teresa, the instructor, then waves goodbye, and as Ilya II fades behind him, he's gone. He ditches the city behind him and barrels straight toward the port city. Eldo bursts into the port city of Minatan, and the whole place is roaring. Merchants hawk their wares like they're fighting for every coin, locals move like they've lived this chaos forever, and everyone else is too busy chasing their own deals to slow down. He strides up to a guard posted along Minatan's streets and demands where he can buy a ferry ticket to reach the capital, only for the guard to point him to the Maxia trading house and warn him it'll cost a fortune. Eldo says he heard the ferry ticket costs about 2 million gil, and the guard shuts him down with a firm, "Yep, spot on, that's the price." The hero shoots him a thankful grin, then heads off to grab a ticket for the ferry. He finally bursts through the entrance of the Maxia trading house, and the place hits him like a giant, so huge it's almost unreal. Elbo spots a ticket office selling ferry tickets to the capital and strides right up to it, where an old man with glasses sits behind the counter. Elbo asks to board the ferry, and the old man snaps back that he'll need a letter of recommendation, only for Elbo to admit he doesn't have one. The seller says it'll still be the standard 2 million gil, then quizzes Eldo if he's got that kind of cash. Eldo pulls out 3 platinum coins, drops them in the seller's hands, and asks if it's enough, and the seller grins. "It's more than enough." The man asks if Eldo's a famous adventurer, and the hero shrugs it off like, "Nah, I'm just some ordinary nobody." Then the cashier leans in and asks where the young man wants to go. Eldo says he wants to reach the capital, and the cashier shoots back, "Good news, the nearest ship sails in 30 minutes, are you okay with that?" Eldo nods, "I'm fine with it." The hero spots this gigantic, ridiculously luxurious sailing ship sliding into the harbor of Minatan. Eldo climbs aboard and stares at the ship from the deck, thinking about how long it'll take that sailboat to reach the capital, 3 hours. Suddenly, the ship erupted with loud signal sounds, everywhere all at once. Eldo narrows it down to a relic called the water-traveling stone, the one that can steer and control a ship like it's an extension of your will. The hero glanced down and spotted 2 girls on the lower deck. One of them muttered, all gloomy, that she'd blown it again. The second one tells her they must have been rushing too much, and the first one snaps back that she followed every instruction to the letter. Eldo spots berries, roots, plants, and dry twigs laid out on the table, and he instantly realizes the girls are whipping up a potion. He takes one look and guesses the potion they're mixing, then blurts its name, Pale Green Spirit Potion. One of the girls snaps her head toward him. She snaps, "What did you just say?" and calls him an adventurer to his face. Eldo repeats the potion's name again, but this time he shouts it, and when he catches the girls staring in surprise, he demands, "Am I wrong?" Still clinging to hope, the girls press him hard, "Do you know how to make the potion?" In a swirl of white fabric, the girl asks Eldo if he knows how to brew the potion. He grins and says he's already memorized the recipe, so he can help them whip up exactly what they need. The girl's totally stunned, but the smile on her face says she's thrilled. She grabs Eldo and begs him to help her brew the potion, then promises she'll pay whatever price he names for that help. The hero bites her lip, realizes she should have chosen her words more carefully, and demands a price of 10 million gil. The girl's eyes widened with real shock, and she blurted out, "Is that all there is?" Because to her, that amount didn't look big at all. Eldo can't believe how tiny that price feels, because she has zero clue how loaded the stranger really is. Then he casually tells her that 10 million gil will be plenty. The hero only needs 10 minutes to whip up the potion, then turns to the girls and announces with a grin that he's finally finished. Her face lit up the second the hero came to her aid, pure relief and real joy. Then she beamed, saying she finally got the potion. Then the next girl, turns out she's the first girl's maid, beams and calls her Ms. Mina, and Aldo's relieved the potion came out perfect, but now he can't shake the bigger question. Who was the girl that ordered it from him, and what's her deal? The hero spots a flaw in Mina's recipe. Her potion is nearly perfect, but it's missing just one tiny leaf from the holy tree, a top-tier, high-class treasure. Mina beams at Eldo and blurts, "I don't know how to thank you," then hands him the 10 million gil she promised for his help. The hero juggles the money and his stomach drops. There's way more than there should be. He demands why she handed him so much and the girl flashes a grin. You're wrong. I made you enough potion for 2 bottles. She says she could hand over even more, then flips the script. She asks you to take a card with a coat of arms on it instead of cash. Aldo studies the card, then blurts out, "What is this?" The girl grins and says it's a Maxia company token of gratitude, proof they trust the card's owner, and if he flashes it in the capital or stores it tells everyone, yeah, you can trust this person. What? Aldo leans in and demands, "Are you really sure you can hand something this important to the very first stranger you meet?" She shoots back, "Of course it's possible," and points to the fact that she's heard his voice. Because to sit as the company's chairman, you have to be able to judge even things like that. Aldo can't believe it. Mina is the company's chairman and the shock hits him hard. She strides up to introduce herself and boom, her name's Mina Maxia. She's the chairwoman of the Maxia company and yeah, she's the one running the ship. The hero is stunned for a second, then it hits him. He just struck the perfect deal. Aldo admits he never thought the company chairman would notice him and he's honestly grateful. Mina fires back that Aldo deserves the credit because he's the one who helped her get the medicine she needed. Mina blurts out the hero's name and he answers her. Then she sends Elder off with a sweet smile, saying she can't wait for the day they meet again. So the hero waves back and tells her goodbye. Suddenly, Eldo blurts out Mina's name, points straight at the water, and asks if there's something inside it. Mina freezes, totally confused. The hero stares at the water, and then his eyes lock on something closing in on the ship. It shoots forward and closes the distance in a flash. Mina hurries about, swearing the ship was built to shrug off monster attacks, so it'll take whatever comes. But just to be safe, she makes a point of checking what's happening, then orders a sailor to see who's closing in on them. The sailor leans in hard to the telescope, spots something horrifying in the water, and panic hits him like a wave. Turns out a massive sea dragon is barreling toward the ship at full speed, and the vibe is absolutely not friendly. The sailor yells in pure terror that the monster is charging straight at the ship through the water, and Mina snaps back, "No way, dragons can't live in these waters," because the kind they're talking about is supposed to live 500 kilometers away in the reservoir. Eldor remembers the sea dragon. It's tougher than the lower sea-rank wolves, and it takes you down with harpoon-like limbs. The hero realizes this. If some fresh kid like him gets clipped by a monster like that, it's instant death. Eldo demands to know if the ship's passengers will be safe, and Mina trembles as she snaps back that the vessel wasn't built to survive monsters like that. So she screams for every fighter to rally at once, while everyone else is shoved down below decks. After watching the monster's every move, Eldo realizes it's stalking the mast, ready to strike. Mina blurts in pure dread that there's no saving this. If they smash the mast, they'll lose the water-traveling stones, and that means they'll never reach the capital. The hero realizes the truth fast. There's only one way to escape this, and it means destroying the dragon. Eldo scans the fighters packed on deck and blasts out, "Who here can hit at long range?" From the front row, several volunteers shoot their hands up, 2 boys, 1 man, and 2 girls. Eldo studies them like a hawk, counting the lineup, 3 mages, 2 archers. He decides it's a solid choice, until one tiny problem crashes the party. He turns to the crowd and calls for volunteers, who's brave enough to guard the mast. Mina cuts Eldo off mid-sentence and shouts that nobody's ready, because the ship is getting hammered by a Ranka monster, and she insists nobody's ever managed to beat something like it. Aldo finally snaps to the truth. There's no other way. He lets out a heavy breath, locks in his nerves, and boldly declares he'll do it himself. The hero snaps onto the deck's edge railing, then whips his gaze toward the dragon charging in toward the sea. Right then, he whips around to the crowd and roars at them to start attacking. The volunteers finally stepped up and unleashed the attack on the dragon, some casting magic, others firing arrows. And after that hit landed, the monster sank even deeper into the water. The crowd thinks it's over, but the monster springs back to life and charges straight for the ship at lightning speed. So the crew panics, screaming in terror, shocked that their attack failed and didn't even slow it down. Eldo spots a mountain of injuries on the dragon's body, and it looks like none of them slow him down for a second as he keeps moving. The hero smirks and admits he's wrong, then declares the attack hit exactly as planned. Now keep pounding harder and harder, and the crowd buys it, staying locked in and shelling without backing down. Eldo realizes that if they keep pressing forward, they'll absolutely pull the dragon right up. No objections, no doubts, just victory. Right when the monster finally closes in on the ship, it suddenly plunges beneath the waves, flicks its tail like a threat, and vanishes under the water, right with the ship. The dragon bursts up from the water right in front of the hero, and the moment it shows itself, he realizes this is his one shot to take the monster down. That monster moves like it's playing games, and Eldo has learned how to handle it. Right as a dragon shoots up from the water inches from his face, everyone else panics, but Eldo instantly knows exactly what to do. A harpoon-like limb rockets out of the water and aims straight for the mast. right when Eldo whips his sword free and squares up, ready to strike back. The young man is praying the dragon's next strike hits right where it's weakest, right on that critical moment. The hero wastes not a second. He kicks off the railing, rockets up to the dragon's limb, and lands a devastating, game-changing blow. The dragon takes that hit and unleashes a furious roar, and Eldo's face twists in sheer terror. The young man shoves the sword away from himself and yanks the monster's limb with it, forcing Eldo to drop it back into the water, while every single guest and the whole crew aboard the ship can't believe what they're seeing. He realizes this fighting style is so solid that even a total beginner can take the monster's hits without getting wiped out. On this ship, everyone's still staring in shock, trying to figure out who this adventurer really is, because he cut off the sea dragon's attack with a sword like it was nothing. And yeah, I can't stop wondering who Eldo is underneath it all. Eldo seethes to himself that while everyone aboard the ship is panicking, he's the one gambling with his life for them. Yet he knows those brutal strikes will let him push the monster back. And worst of all, the monster's attacks are almost too predictable. Mina shouts at the crowd, demanding they keep fighting to help Eldo, and the people snap back into focus, unleashing wave after wave of attacks. The dragon keeps getting hit, one brutal blow after another, until pain rips through him. Fury surges in him as he yanks both sharp limbs free from the water and swings with brutal force, ready to crush Eldo harder than ever. The look on Eldo's face gives it away. He's been waiting for this moment, and there's not a single ounce of fear in him. The hero snapped a confident parry, then the dragon slammed a second limb in right when it mattered most, catching him off guard. Eldo realized you can't possibly block two hits like that at once, and still, he barely held it together. A dragon slams the mast right behind Eldo, smashing the water-traveling stone with it, and somehow nothing shatters. The hero snaps around, and you can tell by his face, that was way too close. He gets it if he slips out of the angle at the last second, his strike won't land, so he shuts out every distraction and locks in. And Eldo knows he doesn't have to count every hit. His real mission is to rip the water-traveling stone free before the mast finally gives way and collapses. The dragon keeps smashing the ship to pieces, and the crew keeps throwing everything they've got at that monster. Then Eldo realizes the opening is here and gets ready to land the deciding strike. Suddenly, the dragon does something even Eldo and the crowd can't read, and panic hits everyone at once, because it's lost its footing and now its next strike could land anywhere at any unknown place. Mina and her maid stand shoulder to shoulder, and the moment they spot the monster, terror hits. Both of them unleash a blood-curdling scream. Eldo snapped into motion and deftly blocked the strike meant for Mina and her frightened maid. And just when Mina braced herself for the worst, the hero showed up and saved her. She beams with gratitude, thanking him for saving her, and Eldo just shrugs it off, saying, "That's my job." The hero locks eyes with the dragon and shouts, loud and bright, that the fight is nearly done, so now the monster has to be finished for good. The whole crew on the ship erupts in cheers, fully backing his call, then they charge the monster together, jaws set and non-stop. The dragon takes hit after hit, can't survive another blow, and then, without fight left, falls and sinks into the water, defeated. A crew member on the ship bursts out, yelling that the people actually pulled off the impossible, because they've finally beaten the dragon. The man sprints over to thank the warriors, who look just as stunned as he does, then spins around to thank the mysterious swordsman, only to find him gone, and it hits him like a shock. He keeps scanning the room, brow furrowing, totally clueless as to where Eldo vanished to. Meanwhile, the hero crouches by a ship door, praying no one spots him, apologizing for the interruption and insisting he'd rather blend in, especially on a ship packed with guild nobles. Mina, right there beside them, perks up and asks if you're one of those nobles. Then she yawns out that yes, she is. The young man adds that he's got business in the capital, so he doesn't want to draw a bunch of eyes on himself. Mina says she understands him, then grabs his attention and tells him to actually listen to her. She looks at the slightly stunned Eldo and explains that today, out on the ship, the hero saved a ton of lives, yes, including her own. Suddenly, her smile flickers into place, her voice turns deadly serious, and she swears by her own name that she'll make Eldo pay back in full exactly for what he deserves. The hero flashes a grin at her and promises, "I can't wait to see it." From the shore, a shadowy figure stares as a sailing ship crawls through the waves after surviving a brutal fight with a sea dragon. And one black-robed observer can't even wrap his head around the fact that the monster is actually gone. Another, dressed just the same, shoots back that this loss changes nothing. This defeat is just a tiny speed bump for the Garden of Despair's society. Eldo's back on the deck, scanning the ship for whatever he can find, then an announcement cracks over the air. They're nearing the capital, and everyone has to get ready to disembark. Eldo stares at the massive, luxurious city looming in the distance, like it's taunting him from afar. The hero can't stop dreaming that any day now, he'll finally rise into a true sage. The hero sprints toward the capital by ship, and just as he's about to get there, he whips his gaze across the city, hunting for the cathedral. At last, Aldo spots a massive, ancient cathedral perched on the cliffside, where the capital clings to the edge. The hero stared at the cathedral perched on the cliff, stunned to find the treasure he hunted so hard was nothing but ruins. Then Eldo leaned in, and above the door he spotted it. A carved portrait of Geus, the god of classes, stamped into the stone wall. Elo says that even if the temple's in total chaos, the only thing that matters is this. There's a grand cathedral for the class god Geus. The hero realizes that as long as this cathedral stands, he'll always be able to switch classes, and that's exactly what he wants. Mina is still on the ship, so she asks Eldo if he really needs a church, then adds that she never once pictured him as the religious type. The girl adds, if Eldo ever needs to head to church, I've got you. I know someone there and I can help. The hero realizes this is actually a killer deal. He's never even heard of anyone pulling off class changes in the cathedral, and the only backup plan is grim. If it all goes wrong, he'll have to sneak in illegally. The hero steels himself and decides Mina's his best bet, so he asks her for help, then glances at the cathedral and Mina spots it instantly, saying this temple is dead, inactive. Mina tells Eldo that the old church has been left behind for years, its walls turned to ruins, and then she points and insists the real cathedral now sits somewhere else, right before Eldo snaps around like he just heard his name. They spot a gigantic temple looming over everything, way bigger than the ruins around it. Eldo's jaw drops. This cathedral is actually the capital, and the shock gets worse when he spots no portrait of Geus on the building, so there's no way he can switch classes here. Eldo asks Mina for permission to step into the ruins, and Mina's like, I thought you were genuinely religious, but if you're just chasing the ruins, then go no restrictions. She bolts over to Eldor and yells that thugs might be lurking in the ruins, so he better not drop his guard for a second. Mina tells him that even if bandits are lurking in the ruins, he'll handle it, while the hero shoots back that he's not about to tempt fate. Eldo blurts out that he's only F rank, and Mina's jaw drops like she can't believe it. She thinks he's messing around until he pulls out his adventure card from the guild and shuts her down with proof. Mina snaps that the guild Eldo got the card from must be totally blind, then swears she'll contact them herself and make them raise the hero's rank for good. Eldo begs them not to do it, because he refuses to snatch the highest rank without earning it first. Then Mina snaps back that the hero looks anything but experienced to her, but since Eldo told her not to interfere, she holds back and won't act. Eldo remembers how he finally realized the heroes of this world match the powers of broken balance online's heroes perfectly, and he proved it all in the last battle. In the new world, everyone fights like they're cursed, until they accidentally fire off a skill that just happens to land on a standing target. Eldo knows skills alone won't cut it, strength has to do the real work, and the hero tells himself this. If that dragon just stood there, unmoving, in front of the ship for 10 straight hours, Eldo still wouldn't be able to beat it. That's why the hero is convinced he'll never reach the top rank while he's still a newbie. Eldo thanks Mina for the tips about the cathedrals, then tells her he'll try to slip into the temple. Mina warns him to be careful and promises to help if he needs it, and after Eldo thanks her again, he takes his leave. This is the moment their paths split wide open in the capital. Eldo strolls through the capital, where every resident is tearing into life with both hands, soaking up the sights as she scans the city. He finally gets it, this place truly earns the title of capital, because more people flood in and the whole city feels alive, buzzing with energy. The hero barrels into one of the capital's hotels and checks in, planting himself there for the stay. He slumps on his bed, itching to switch classes ASAP, because if bandits are lurking in those ruins, daylight is still too risky, one wrong step and he'll get spotted in seconds. Eldo decides that at 3 a.m., when everyone's minds are foggy, the ruins are the perfect place to strike while the world's still half asleep. The hero decides to take a breather while he waits, then boom, Eldo snaps to it, he's starving. The moment he steps onto the ship, it hits him, he hasn't eaten a single bite since boarding. Eldo decides he's going to grab a snack and use the moment to stall for time, any way he can. The hero strides through the capital when he suddenly catches a couple of men trading words, and the name they keep circling is treacherous. Eldo finally barrels into the tavern. He clocks that this place reeks of danger, but the door's open, so he steps inside anyway. Then a waitress calls out welcome, and Eldo slips deeper into the tavern. He asks her if it's really okay for him to be alone, and she snaps back that the tavern is packed. He's gotta grab a seat and talk to someone at the table. So he slides in right next to the blonde girl. Eldo snaps his eyes to what the girl is chewing at the table. The hero doesn't even hesitate, he orders the exact same meal. A beef burger and chickpeas because those chickpeas look absolutely mouthwatering. The hero takes one bite of the dish they serve him, and then he grins and admits straight from the heart that it's seriously insanely delicious. Right out of nowhere, a furious guy with a black eye patch over his right eye storms into the tavern, screams at the waitress, and snaps that he told her to save the best seats for his boys. Then he bellows at her, "Can you see I've got a map or what?" What? The girl shoots off a quick apology, explains the tavern never takes reservations, and tells him to wait for his people and grab the free spots. But he keeps huffing and yelling in pure indignation that there aren't any free seats. The waitress tells him to hold on until a spot opens, and he flashes a grin like he gets it all, because he's going to make room himself. He brushes past the girl and strides straight to Eldo's table. The man leans in and stares the hero down. Suddenly, the man whips around, locks eyes with the girl opposite Eldo and snaps at her to get out of the table fast. No delays. The girl goes pale with terror, and Eldo watching her snaps, irritation bubbling fast until the hero blurts out that it makes him furious. The man snaps out in a commanding voice and orders Eldo to repeat everything he just heard. Eldo demands why this guy stormed into the tavern, and now he's forced to give up his seat. So the hero tells him to wait for someone to leave, but the man explodes with rage and barks at Eldo to get out and clear the space. Even though she finally realizes he's not going to say a word. The hero tells him to take a breath, cool off, and wait right there for his friends. And he tells them, "I'll be done eating by the time you all pull up." Eldo slowly slid a beef burger into his mouth and savored how delicious it was. And the moment that calm look hit the guy's face, his irritation flared, so he snapped at Eldo to stop showing off. He rips his sword from its sheath the instant before Eldo's face, but Eldo doesn't even flinch like he saw it coming. Every soul packed into the tavern is terrified, frozen with fear. The man hoists his sword over his head like he's about to smash the hero, then Eldo freezes in shock while the hero stares and thinks, "Are you seriously that stupid?" Eldo's jaw drops when he realizes what the man is about to do, those brutal tactics, and he can't believe his eyes because he's never seen a worse sword style in his life. Eldor snatches a fork the moment the man starts gearing up to attack. The moment he slams his sword down on the hero snaps it aside with a fork and rips back with a deadly counterstrike, and everyone watching can only stare in pure shock. He can't even process it, his punch gets stopped dead by this plain, everyday fork. Eldo fires a question at the man about what he should do next, insisting this is self-defense so he won't get punished. Then the hero snaps into action, grabs the man's arm, twists it into a brutal hold, and slams his stomach against the wall. Eldo brags that he uses this skill to jack himself up in power, and that he could snap a man's arm with zero effort. The man yells that Eldo can't do this to him and just walk away, and the hero snaps back that it's the bare minimum for an idiot swinging a sword inside a tavern. The second he hears Eldo call him an idiot, his irritation spikes so hard it almost boils over. The hero can't help wondering if this guy is a legendary adventurer, but the man snaps with rage, clenches his fists, and barks at Eldo to listen up. He brags that he's got a bronze card from the Zanies crew. Then the guy swears he'll turn the hero's whole life into living hell. Eldo blurts, "So what's this bronze card supposed to be?" A nearby man leans in and tells him the bronze card isn't just a trinket. It's the company's way of showing respect and gratitude, a shining badge of glory too, and then Eldo holds it up and compares it to the card Mina gave him. The man spits out a malicious shout that Zani's company will get payback for him, and Eldo just stays calm, telling him he's got a card just like that. He pulls out a card and flashes it in the guy's face. Then the man's whole world goes wide-eyed with shock. The man stumbles down, panic exploding in his face. He shouts that it's a gold card from Macassie's company, and the whole tavern instantly erupts into chaos. One of the knights strides up to Eldo and blurts that he never expected some guy from a tavern to be carrying a map like that in his pocket. Eldo can't believe how valuable it is. The man crumples to his knees, begs for mercy, then blurts that he'll give Eldo everything he's got. Eldo just shuts him down, saying he doesn't need a thing. The hero's jaw drops when he realizes the card he just got is packed with insane power. Gasps crackle through the tavern crowd the moment Eldo appears. Some swear they've never laid eyes on him, while others pity the poor fool who just collided with him. Heads snap to his map and the whole room starts whispering the same truth. Eldo isn't just some ordinary man. The hero grabs the card and throws it as far away as he can, just for now. Suddenly the guards smashed into the tavern, demanding answers about what just went down. Obo stunned someone called the guards, and then a one-eyed man with an eye patch slinks in and begs to be arrested, because he started the attack first. The guards gape at what he's doing, then, without a fight, decide to take him into custody. Aldo decides he's done flying under the radar and hustles back home before anyone clocks him. As the hero heads out, the girl at his table slides right behind him and catches up fast. She thanks Eldo with real, heartfelt sincerity. The hero tells her to stay sharp and steer clear of trouble, but in his own head he's really just thinking, "I'm the one who can't afford to get hurt." Eldo storms into the hotel with a coupon clutched in his hand, and this time it's for a free lunch right now, plus a second coupon stamped for another free lunch later. The hero turns back to his room, crawls into bed, and shuts his eyes until the appointed hour. Back at the hotel, Eldo tossed and turned all night, buzzing with excitement. He couldn't wait to fight someone even if he was brand new. He's relieved his body finally got its rest, and now he's pumped and ready to go. The hero strides through the night city, and when he glances around, he realizes everyone's tucked in and fast asleep. Eldo activates his night vision, and suddenly the darkness doesn't stand a chance. Because of this skill, the whole city erupts into daylight brightness. The hero realizes anyone from any class can use that skill, and he secretly hopes almost nobody has figured it out yet. Though it finally pushes him to the cathedral ruins. Suddenly his eyes lock on it, someone's already inside the building. The hero realizes the church folks are still awake, so he goes on full stealth mode. He refuses to pick a fight. Eldo remembers the game from his past life. Back then, the city was full of different churches, and he suddenly realizes this kind of layout has to hide a secret room for class changes, while the hero listens to the voices in the church and swears they're coming from the basement. He hustles down the stairs and leans in, peering through the crack in the door. Inside the room, he spots robbers knocking back drinks, and then he clocks the door's loose lock. He realizes that barging through that door is a terrible idea, so Eldo bolts back outside. The hero strides up to the well by the cathedral as Eldo drops down, disappearing toward the bottom. He remembers that in churches like this, the wells secretly open the way down to the basement. Eldo was right after all. After climbing down into the well, he spots a door and decides on the spot. He slips inside. Eldo realizes the moment he goes through that door, they'll have an easier shot at him. He decides to throw these people off his trail, yanks his sword from its sheath, smashes the door lock to pieces with the blade, and charges straight for the opening. After pulling that off, Eldo bolts for his life, sprinting as far as he can, while the men freeze in fear at the shock of it all, but somehow nobody even spots him. The hero realizes he can't afford a slow, peaceful descent, so he bolts straight for the well and leaps in. Eldo uses the soft landing skill and drops into the well with a perfect, gentle landing at the bottom. He drops in like a pro, landing perfectly on his feet. While the men scramble for who started the chaos, Eldo slips through the door at the bottom of the well. He spots a storage room hidden right behind it. Right then, something in the white bag snags his attention. He jerks back, stunned by what he spots. Turns out those were illegal drugs, just like the item that popped up in the game from the last world, and a shady group was handing them out on purpose, which kicked off a whole heap of trouble. Eldo decides to hold off on burning what he found for now, then presses deeper into the area, until he swings open another door. And as soon as he steps in, he runs right into one of the guards patrolling the ruins. The man blasts out, yelling that he's found the intruder, and he calls the rest of the team. Then Eldo starts fussing like crazy. The guards are stuck, baffled about how he even showed up in that basement, and then, at the end of it all, they decide to take his life. Eldo sprints for his life, twists out of arrow after arrow mid-run, and realizes he has to switch classes ASAP. Suddenly, Eldo's eyes lock onto a portrait of the god of classes hanging on one of the doors. He barrels right into it, and immediately locks eyes with a god statue the size of a real human. Right here, he's got this. Eldo slams a bookcase in front of the entrance and blocks it tight. The hero stared at the statue, and right away he knew this place had one power move. Get the priest's blessing to change class or keep chanting the spell tied to your chosen profession. Eldo locks onto his calling, determined to master every kind of magic and uncover the secrets behind every magical law. The most powerful class on Earth, so lethal it even throws the game's balance into chaos. Eldo grabs the blessing and locks in the sage class. Suddenly, the ball in the statue's hands ignites with a blinding glow, and Eldo starts undergoing a terrifying transformation right in front of them. Eldo becomes a sage, pieces of his outfit shift and swap, and suddenly a scarf snaps into place around his neck. The hero scrambles to figure out what he's feeling, while Eldo stares at his own hand and realizes, yeah, even back in the game, once he became a sage, he never felt anything like this, and this sudden class change is downright unreal. Suddenly, Eldo's thoughts get shattered as people rush in, hunting to catch him. The hero snaps to it and refuses to linger in the cathedral a second longer. He plants one hand on the wall, and right around his palm those eerie circular patterns ignite like they're answering him. He unleashes Fireball, and one massive blaze tears through the wall, carving out a brand new passage. While the men slam a wooden beam at the door, Eldo sprints toward the well, already one step ahead. He fires off his flight skill and shoots up into the sky. The hero rockets high above the cathedral, hanging in the sky like a legend in motion. He clocks that the men are still hunting him, and the hero snaps. There's no reason to linger, so he rockets into the sky and disappears. Just as Eldo drops down to the ground to finally catch his breath, a dagger rockets toward him out of nowhere. The hero snaps out of it, dodges the strike, and spins around in pure terror. And the man standing in front of him can't hide his surprise at those blazing reflexes. A black-robed man, just like the folks watching the ship, faces Eldor and boasts that his strategy skills are top tier, then gives off this unmistakable "don't trust me" energy. Eldo suddenly spots a crest on the man's robe, then his blood runs cold, because it's the symbol of the Garden of Despair. The The Garden of Despair Society pops up out of nowhere, wrapped in mystery. One minute they're gone, the next they're right there, and all they seem to want is to scorch society to the ground. In Broken Balance Online, this crew wasn't just bad news. They were the most dangerous threat in the whole game. The robed man snaps in shock, so Aldo knows the society's name. He demands, "Where did you hear it from?" Aldo tells him, "I know, it was the Garden of Despair that tried to sink the ship I was sailing." Then the man stares, stunned, because he can't believe Aldo even knows, not when most of society doesn't have a clue about what happened to the dragon. Turns out Aldo wasn't actually bluffing. He was fishing for info, and the wild part is he ended up being right by accident. The man says someone told him about an adventurer with a lousy sword who still managed to fend off a dragon's attacks, and he can't help wondering if it was Aldo. Then the hero snaps back. He's not happy hearing about a weak blade because he handed over a jaw-dropping 150,000 gil. Aldo leans in and asks, "What if I'm the guy from those rumors?" And the robed man smirks, then ushers him straight into the Garden of Despair. Aldo's jaw drops. He never saw this offer coming. Then the man grins and says he can vouch for him because he's part of the brass's supremacy, and he adds that he'll hand the hero anything he wants. Aldo has no clue what to do. He's not sure that man really wants to recruit him, but deep down he knows he has to grab that offer if he wants to stay alive. The hero snaps to the truth. He's still just a level 5 sage, and then he realizes something else. He wants to join too. Aldo says he's not interested in the organization at all. Then the man grins and tells him he's not asking him to stay forever, just to try membership for a whole week. He keeps running his mouth about money and murders you can get away with, and then the man drops the real threat. Once Aldo has killed, he'll crave it again. Right after that, he lunges in and attacks the hero. Once again, he whips out of the way at the last second, and the attack slams past his head, so close it feels like destiny tried to end him. The hero admits with pure regret that he's never killed a soul, and he doesn't even know if he'll be dragged in, but he'll try. Then Aldo charges to attack. The hero kicks off his killing spree by charging the robed man and slashing at him with a sword. Then the robed man answers by hurling a storm of daggers at Aldo. Aldo swings his sword like a shield and snatches every dagger out of the air. Finally, the hero bursts up to the man. He snaps his sword toward him, lining up the stab. Then the man casually whips a dagger up and deflects Aldo's strike like it's nothing, leaving the hero frozen in shock. The robed man hurls another angry rant, claiming Aldo's sword is absolutely pathetic. He yanks another dagger from his chest and slashes for Aldo, but the hero jukes aside again, barely catching the blade. Aldo figures it out. Unlike him, that opponent grips the weapon with just one hand, and the robed man must be way stronger than he is. The robed man erupts in a loud, cruel laugh that drips with malice. He leans into Aldo and says the hero's death is only a countdown away. Aldo unleashed his clay projectile skill and hurled those chunks of clay at the enemy with insane speed. The man sprang forward at the last second and barely dodged, then hit the ground and burst into laughter, saying you'd think the young man's sword was featherlight, but it wasn't a blade at all, it was magic. Aldo snatches the blade, yells that they're about to witness something, and then he rockets straight at the enemy. A quick scrap erupts. This man swings at Aldo, but Aldo slips aside like it's nothing and rockets back with a counterattack. And when the man strikes again, Aldo dodges it and springs backward to reset the fight. Eldacast is a spell. When the man clocked he'd been aiming for the legs, he snapped and called the move downright petty. Suddenly, the man couldn't even budge his foot. Light cords yanked him tight, trapping his whole body, and the enemy stared in shock, because whatever this sticky bind was, it wouldn't let him move an inch. Aldo stared at him, already convinced his sticky bomb had nailed the hit, because this spell dumps a tacky substance onto the ground wherever it lands. This spell looks just like the clay shots Aldo tossed earlier, so in the dark you can't tell them apart. Then the young man realizes he nailed it. He hit them with the projectiles first, and only after that the sticky bomb. That man keeps clawing to get out, but the stuff splashes back and seals him tighter and tighter. Like the harder he fights, the deeper it traps him. Meanwhile, Aldo closes in, fires a spell, and shoots him an apology for refusing to let himself get killed, then grins like it's all part of the plan. In the blink of an eye, the man detonates straight out of Aldo's firebomb skill, burned to the ground, while Aldo just keeps staring, cold and unshaken. The man kept on blazing, and right when Aldo's thought it couldn't get worse, he yanked out a capsule tablet and shoved it into his mouth. In the blink of an eye, his body snapped back to life, and the flames that were ravaging him suddenly couldn't touch a thing. Suddenly, his arm ballooned into a monstrous, bulging mass of muscle, and his claws stretched out longer, sharp as any animal. Aldo stared in shock at what stood before him. Then that man twisted into some kind of monster right in front of his eyes. He ripped his arm back and smashed the exact spot where Aldo stood with everything he had, so hard the bridge cracked and caved, ripping open a massive hole in the middle. That man was totally unrecognizable. His body twisted into a monster that didn't even feel human anymore. And while Hilda was already up in the sky, he snapped into motion, dodged the monster's attack, and stared straight at it like, "Wait, that pill is artificial demon medicine." What? The so-called man-made demonic cure was cooked up and unleashed by the leaders of the Garden of Despair and BBO. Because it wipes out your sanity. And when you can't claw your way back to your old form, it cashes in that loss by boosting you to a terrifying new strength. The fact that this guy uses that medicine basically screams one thing: the Garden of Despair in BBO and the one in this world are tied together by way more than a shared name and emblem. The young man realizes fighting him would be a nightmare, so he drops to his knees and begs for mercy, then swears he'll beat this monster for sure. The young man whips out a spell and fires a blazing arrow, only for the monster to snatch it out of the air with his bare hand, until it detonates inside his fist and rips through him with pure, unbearable pain. Then the kid lunged in and blindsided him, unleashing a fire arrow spell amplified 5x. So they loosed around 5 fire arrows at the monster, each one detonating on impact and blasting a massive fiery wave that wrecked everything in the area. At first glance, it looked like the monster was finally gone. White smoke poured from where it had stood, and soot smeared across the stone bridge like a grim calling card. A young man leans in, studies the blast site, and snaps to the truth: the target is gone. He whirls around and rockets away from the battlefield, praying nobody notices him. The very next morning, still trapped in his room with his sword in hand, the young man sank into his own swirling thoughts. Turns out, all this time he'd been waiting for someone to tail him and strike, so he refused to shut his eyes and thank his luck. He already wiped out the ones who'd openly chased him last night. He can't ignore the chance another battle is coming, so he rips himself out the door and heads straight into the city streets. As he strode down the street, the young man can't stop thinking about it: this sage needs a staff. Sure, magic works either way, but the power gap with a staff compared to without one, that's not subtle. He still remembers the sea dragon fight, and he's convinced he only crushed it that quickly because the others had brought top-tier gear to the battlefield. After a while, Eldo finally shoved open the door of a local shop, customers everywhere, the place buzzing like it never slowed down. He studied the goods and realized one thing fast: no matter what people bragged about, the capital's weapons shop had an amazing spread, and yet every single staff on display was built for the wizard class, no exceptions. Different kinds of sage staffs exist, and a real sage can wield any of them, but only a special sage staff can fully reveal the true power of a sage. The young man felt it coming. Pretty soon, he'd have to swallow his pride and hit up his old friend for a favor. After what felt like forever, he finally showed up at a place tucked inside a massive building. A familiar girl lit up and greeted him, saying she hadn't seen Eldo in ages. Well, not since yesterday, and then she leaned in, asking what he needed from her so urgently. He told me he'd been out shopping since morning, but nothing on those shelves even caught his eye. He pulls out the card the girl handed him just a little while ago, studies it, and then grins. This card is different because ever since he got it, they've been treating him like royalty, and now he just can't deny it. He even doubles down on it. Back in the pub, he whipped up a scene so hard that strangers rushed over to apologize, and suddenly they were laying out a red carpet just for him. The girl doesn't even flinch as she asks what the young man is really hunting for, and Eldo just grins, saying he's searching for a staff. The girl asks, "Why are you hunting a staff when you're a swordsman?" And Eldo snaps back, "That's not me, I'm a sage, not some sword guy." The girl blurts that she's never heard of this class, then asks if a sage is some mix of a swordsman and a wizard, only for the boy to grin and say a sage is pure magic, no blades involved. Most sword fighters start as total rookies, so when the girl asks how he managed to shove back the sea dragons, the boy shrugs and says, "Even a beginner can swing a blade like this." The girl stares in shock because the sea dragon is still an A-rank monster. The young man says anyone could fight like this if they train, but deep down, he's convinced his real calling is to be a sage. The girl snaps that he's wasting his strength chasing anything other than swordsmanship. But if he's that strong, there has to be a reason he wants a staff, right? She says she finally gets Eldo, then hurries over to show him the very best staff they've got hiding in their house. Soon enough, they stumbled into the weapons room, packed with top-tier weapons that practically begged to be used. Elda stares at the whole arsenal, stunned, and she declares every staff here is top tier, but the young man realizes the truth. Even with all this quality, none of them will fit the sage. Then the young man spots a plain staff and decides, "Yeah, this is the one for me," and he asks the girl if she's okay with him taking it. The girl nods and says yes, then immediately hits back. She can't recommend the staff to him because it was pulled up from digging ancient ruins, and on top of that, it's completely useless. Eldo grins and says that staff fits him like a glove. Then he grabs it, feels its weight, and realizes he just held the true, legendary power of a real sage's staff. The young man stares at the staff and realizes, this thing is legendary, and he's pretty sure it got overlooked just because it was once used by a magician. Then the young man spots the price tag, 25 million gil, and his jaw drops in shock. The girl shrugs and says every exhibit, even the ones that actually work, costs a fortune, but you don't have to pay with money. The young man fumbles out his sword, admits he's got nothing but cash and this blade, and even asks if it's worth around 150 gil. The girl makes it clear. She isn't after treasure or praise, she wants the number on Eldo's guild card, and she'll pay a whopping 30 million guild for it. He stares at the card and it hits him. He's got 30 million guild to earn back, no shortcuts. The girl shakes her head and says she's not pushing him at all, she just wants one thing in return. His guild number, and then he gets the staff. The boy demands to know what's so valuable about his guild number, and she answers, if I'm going to tailor your request, I need that number. Then she leans in and adds she's not going to bully him into anything, she just promises she'll reward him in a big way if he chooses to take them on. Eldo realizes this girl's ready to fork over a whopping 30 million gil, just to land the chance to hand him a personal assignment. He asks if he can handle it, since he's just an F-rank adventurer. Then the girl grins and says this is the perfect shot, because she's got to grab it first before other trading companies catch wind of how powerful it really is. The girl adds that this is the pay an A-ranked adventurer earns. Eldo gets it right away, that she's betting on the future, and he grins as he tells her he'll gladly take her offer. The young man grabs the staff and tells the girl to obey his personal orders with care, and she grins, then practically begs him to come back already since she's been waiting way too long. After a while, Elda strolled down the street like it was her daily routine, head of a trading company and all, and without a second thought, she grabbed a powerful weapon. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just enough, it was way more than he ever needed. And honestly, the thought of whatever Mina would command next sent chills down his spine. If her orders felt impossible, he swore he'd say no. The young man was strolling down the street when he snapped his head around like something was right behind him. Eldo's gut told him someone was following. It felt like a fresh disaster had just slammed into the hero, and he gripped his brand new staff with both hands. He cut into the alley, demanded who's there, and warned the criminal that if he didn't step out right now, he'd be marked as an enemy. Suddenly, a man bursts out of the alley with his hands raised and yells for Eldor to wait, because he's panicking, trying to make it crystal clear. He's not the suspicious guy. The man snatches off his hat and claims he's from the guild, so Eldo leans in and demands, "Are you really?" The man claimed he'd seen Eldo running around on the ship back then, and that hooked the other guy. Eldo then shot back, "Did you sail on it too, and why were you so focused on following that kid?" The man grins and swears he isn't stalking the boy. He's just watching him, hoping to recruit him as a scout for the guild because Eldo's a monster with a sword. The young man leaned in and demanded what a scout even meant. Then the man explained. The guild had a role called a righteous tamer, and unlike a swordsman, the tamer got a huge fixed payout because he was hunting for the perfect person to take the job. A young man can't stop thinking about what it would be like to serve the public, and how, with his low rank, he's probably going to get stuck doing all the dirty, grimy work anyway. The boy bows his head and apologizes, insisting he wants to act on his own terms. The man nods like he finally gets it, steps back and promises to leave Eldo alone, though if the boy's mind changes, he can show up at the guild anytime. The man cackles and tells him he'll always love running into someone who actually spotted him creeping behind, then says if Eldo walks into the guild and tells them he's from Lydius, they'll take him in on the spot. With everyone gone, Eldo's mind spirals. There's no way this kind of profession exists in BBO, not really. The tasks keep getting refreshed, and if you don't grab them, nothing moves. This world runs on one rule. There are clients, and if you don't take the job, people land in trouble. He decides to kick things off with the one move he knows he can make. He storms into the Adventurers Guild and can't wrap his head around it. Why the quest board is basically empty. Eldos tells them, yeah, it's a capital guild, but taming quests are scarce as hell, so the righteous tamers are left with nothing to do. He strides up to the Adventurers Guild administrator and blurts out that he's got a bunch of tasks he wants to ask about. The girl bats her sweet smile and asks what he's really into, and the young man leans in to ask whether there are any jobs for taming monsters. The girl snaps back that the capital just doesn't have enough pacification missions, because the royal troops aren't only training, they're out there taming monsters themselves, so there's barely anyone left here. Eldo finally gets it. He has to pack up and move to a new place, so he turns to the girl and tells her thanks for spilling everything. Then he shuts the door on this assignment for now and even asks if it's possible to switch professions right here. The girl grins and asks the young man what position he wants, then he answers with a fiery smile, "I want to become a sage." The girl claims the ball has no clue what a real profession is, and the young man realizes this world doesn't care about careers you didn't earn through the right of growing up. Turns out they won't recognize a thing unless it's blessed by the profession ball, because to register a profession in the guild, you've got to approve it yourself by touching the profession ball. If he's a wizard, the wizard's ball locks him in place. Then the young man shoots back an apology and swears he won't quit his profession, because he's sure that being a beginner doesn't automatically mean the work won't pay off. The girl admits she doesn't really know much about the lower professions, but she sure hopes the ball of them will suddenly light up. The boy asks what the low-level jobs even are, and the girl says it's berserkers and saints, usually stuck in low-ranking teams, because most of them quit halfway through. The young man remembers this. At BBO, everything's split into two lanes, basic professions and higher professions. In this world, you started with the classics, wizards, swordsmen, archers, healers, all that, and if you proved you were built different, you rose into the big leagues. Sage, hero, berserker, and saint. At the coming-of-age ceremony, you basically never see the big-time professions, because somehow the best callings from BBO turn into the worst here. And the reason is brutal. You kill the same number of monsters, but your main profession levels shoot up way faster, like the whole system punishes you for being good. Even at low levels, higher professions are supposed to outperform everyone else. So if the level gap is small, you're usually safe and won't get booted from the team. The young man snaps, why is a saint ranked below a healer when even their basics, divine healing, means way more health than a normal healer? The girl fires a question about divine healing, what it even is, and Eldo freezes in shock. He's completely clueless about what it even is. Like, as a guild admin, he can't get the basics right, and he straight up says it's better to stay a newbie. The girl nods along, agreeing. The young man strolls the streets with a heavy sigh, thinking that even here in the capital there's nothing for him to do, and that he might as well hunt for work in some other city. Before all that, though, he had to swing by one spot first. He stopped in, waved hello, and the girl on the couch asked if he needed anything. Eldo replied that he only came because he felt he had to tell the young man about his departure from the capital. The young man snatches a cup of tea and declares he became an adventurer on purpose. No mission to fix or pacify the city at all, and when the grill answers, it says the city's been weirdly calm lately. Yeah, it might look like some side hustle, but kicking Eldo out is a massive loss for this country. Eldo tells her don't blow it out of proportion, but the girl fires back, I'm not exaggerating. Then she drops the truth, there aren't many top-tier adventurers, yet the ones who exist shake the economy like crazy. The girl blurts that Eldo is one of them too, because it was him who just yanked the Maxia company transport ship back from going under, carrying all the big shots of the economic world, including her, plus major guild members. She warns that if that ship had sunk, chaos would have flooded this whole country by now. Then the young man nods like, yeah, turns out that ship is seriously badass. The girl changes the topic and presses, where was Elda headed? The boy grins and says he checked the map, then figured he'd start by heading straight to the nearby town of Fiesta. The girl grins and says it's a great pick, then insists the young man will be able to grab assignments for himself once he's there. Then she suddenly remembers something and blurts out that there's a killer taming mission in the capital, and Eldo's all in. She claims the mission is to wipe out a giant C-rank mole, and the kid fires back that he's never heard of anything like that around here. So in his head, he assumes it's some kind of world-only monster. Eldo demands to know where they are now, and the girl shoots back that Maxia's got fields in the capital. But yeah, they're tiny compared to the massive grain-growing region. Even though he just learned Maxia's company is tied to farming too, he can't help it, so giant moles really showed up out there, right? The girl nods, grinning as she confirms it. She tells Eldo, start right now, if you do, I'll pay you 500,000 gil for every monster. And then she orders the young man to wipe them all out. The young man gets it right away. This isn't some random bonus, it's an unreal reward for keeping the peace, so he nods and promises, I'll take the job gladly. The girl thanks him, then admits this is an insanely hard job. Elder swoops in and saves them by taking it on, and the boy is so shocked he blurts out, wait, is it really that bad? The girl says the giant moles are burrowed underground, so this won't be easy at all. So the young man just vows he'll try anyway, and she tells him to grab a map and a written request before he goes. After a while, the young man pushed past the city walls and headed straight for the company's field, and sure enough, the map said he'd reached the exact spot. He swivels his head and says, everything looks just like the countryside, and he's sure this kind of place can exist even in the capital. The girl talks about little fields, but the young man just can't figure out where they are. He doesn't waste a second thinking, he heads straight to the administration and asks. Then the young man strides up to a little wooden house and pounds on the door. A woman steps out and asks him straight up if that young man has any business running rural administration for the Maxia company. Eldo shoots back that he's here for Mina, the company's head. He flashes the written order, then the woman snatches the sheet and lights up with joy. She calls Eldo an adventurer and thanks him for agreeing to take the job. The woman tells him she's betting everything on him, and Eldo snaps, hold on, before grinning and saying he's here to tame the giant moles. Then he leans in and asks which of those fields belong to Maxia's company. The woman insists every single field around here belongs to Maxia. And honestly, it's wild that one company controls this entire massive stretch of land. He clings to Mina's words about these tiny fields, yet he can't figure out where small even is, because this feels exactly like that bar, same vibe, same trap, and now he's scrambling to understand just how powerful Maxia's company really is in this world. Eldo blurts that he's got one question, and it's brutal. Clearing those fields could wreck everything. So, is it really okay? He presses. The woman answers, only if that boy doesn't torch them with fire magic, because if he does, then something will go wrong. What? She blurts out an apology for coming off rude, then leans in and asks the young man if he'll really be stuck all alone. Because if this takes any longer, she says they should start looking for someone. Eldo swears everything's fine because every monster will flock here, but the woman can't make heads or tails of what the young man is hinting at. The boy fires off earth lure, magic seeps across the ground nearby, because those underground monsters don't hunt by sight, they track food by scent and magic. Trusting their instincts, Eldo plots a trap. He's going to lure those monsters right here. After a while, Eldo clocks it. Monsters have slipped in. Then the ground erupts and moles burst out from under the earth. The young man plants his staff in front of him and declares he's got it all figured out. Because if monsters like that smash the earth, then it's over for everyone. He hurls out an ice block spell. Ice shards rain down from above, then taps the ground with his staff as the shards crash and tumble to the floor. He traps the monsters inside giant blocks of ice, and the moles can't even wiggle a muscle. The young man whips around to the village administrator woman nearby, and she's frozen in pure shock. He drops a full apology, admitting he wrecked more than he ever meant to, and the woman waves it off, saying she's okay. Then she turns to the young man and thanks him for his help. After a stretch of relentless work, the special personal assignment to take down and tame the giant moles was finally finished. Not long after, the young man showed up at his customer's side, and the maid who'd sent him off spun around to Mrs. Mina, saying the man with the gold card was finally here. She spins around and blurts out that he came back way too fast, then shoots, "Did you forget something?" He shakes his head, "Nope, I'm done with this job." She flashed a smile and called him quick, then reality hit hard, and she snapped into shock, asking what the heck he'd just said. She leans in and asks, "No way, did you really finish that fast?" She points out the 20 giant moles she counted, and the boy fires back, "Yeah, it was 31 total." Then he reveals he did a full recon, and that number is dead on. He adds that he already told the whole guild everything, and Mina snaps back that it hasn't even been 3 hours since Eldo wiped them out so fast. Then the guy reveals he baited them in with magic. He tells them he stuffed the spot with tasty magic, then unleashed his earthbait to smash the place where they were meeting. And Mina can't believe it, saying she's hearing this for the first time, before asking the young man how he can wield not just the sword but magic too. The young man shrugs and says he doesn't truly get it. He just does it for work and the sword is only his tool. The girl snaps back that Eldo isn't human, declares his mission finished, and then the young man sets his sights on heading straight for Fiesta. Mina tells him she'll pray for him, because adventurers can't get that kind of help unless they keep moving from city to city. After a while, the young man shows up at the Adventurers Guild, and the administrator hands him the money, announcing his Maxia company reward, 20 million gil. And the kid can't help but stare, shocked by how huge it is. The girl shrugs and says this is probably just another bonus. Then she reminds Eldo that even if people claim he's too strong, Maxia's company is just as unstoppable. A few days later, Eldo barrels into Fiesta City, dashes straight to the Adventurers Guild and spots the task sheets, only to find barely anything on them. He can't shake the feeling that monsters might be lurking here too, since this city sits close to the capital. So even though he plans to move on later once he's in Fiesta, he's determined to finish every task he can right here. He whips around to the girl administrator and blurts, "Can I ask you something?" She asks what he's interested in, and Eldo says he wants to take on a task, then pushes, "Can I report on an assignment I received in another city?" The girl says, "If the guild's inside the country, you're good. Just take a written request and bring a piece of the tamed monster as proof, and everything will work out." He picks a bunch of tasks and says he's taking them. Then the girl shoots back that the job is to tame grass mantises and giant frogs. She says it's a good thing there are still errands to knock out, and the boy immediately fires back, asking what she means. The girl administrator bluntly announces it. Flame Pike is here in Fiesta, and she's got 2 names. Eldo rolls up with this pumped-up guy and claims the Flaming Pike is a total powerhouse name. The girl insists there are reasons for it, and just like that, adventurers get handed 2 names. So with Gillard's location still a mystery, the Flame Pike is the hottest, most legendary adventurer on the entire map right now. Eldo can't shake the thought that he might not be as badass as he claims, so he decides he's got to meet that famous adventurer, while the truth gnaws at him. Nobody has any clue where Gillard vanished to. After a while, that young guy was already deep in the forest near the city of Fiesta, and he muttered that this is where he'd probably kick off his task. He kicks off his magic and fires the magical search spell. An invisible wave of power bursts out of him. And then, through his eye, he starts seeing praying mantises tucked away among the trees. He tracks them down and freezes. There are around 10 grass mantises lurking within 10 kilometers of him, and he has to take them out to finish one of the two tasks. He takes one step, flicks on magical invisibility, and his whole body vanishes into thin air. This invisibility skill lets you disappear completely. It gets turned off when you cast other spells, but it lets you strike the enemy without a hint of warning, so he slips right up to the mantises, then bam, he's suddenly standing in front of them. He snaps a fire ring spell into place, trapping the monsters in blazing circles with nowhere to run. Then he tightens the ring and incinerates them before they can breathe. Just like that, the first batch is wiped out. With magic search, he hunts first. Then he slips in under magic invisibility and strikes before they even know he's there. It's the sage's go-to tactic for going solo, and it's the deadliest way to bring down huge packs of monsters. Suddenly, something grabs his eye and he dives into it head first, using a magical search to uncover the truth. Suddenly, the young man spots a girl and a hulking gorilla monster, and he realizes they're right in the middle of a fight, with that monster acting like the boss of the whole area. That area boss is a terrifying monster that shows up at a specific time. Beat it, and you'll rake in tons of experience and watch your level shoot up. The young man casts magical invisibility so he can sneak in close first, and then finally peek at what's really going on. Even if you and the whole crew wipe the area boss, you'll still rake in solid experience. Then when the fight turns brutal, he'll pounce on the chaos the second an opening shows. The young man sprinted onto the battlefield, and there it was. A gorilla boss roaring at the front and a blonde girl gripping a spear nearby. The girl lunges in and drives her spear straight at the monster, but the boss snaps her strike aside and counters with a brutal hit. The girl rockets back in the air and Eldo reappears out of hiding. She locks eyes with him and asks, "So you're an adventurer?" Then screams at him to run. She keeps trading blows with him and Eldo finally clicks. This area's boss really is an angry monkey, all muscle and fury. For something so huge, it darts around with terrifying speed, and taking it down solo is way harder than the sea dragon. This tiny adventurer girl fighting him has totally blown past every expectation, and the young man realizes things are getting bad, so he thinks he has to step in and help her. He realizes his power still isn't enough to take down this boss solo, so he decides to spend his skill points right now on abilities that actually get the job done. To get abilities, you usually had to trek through a church ceremony. So when he activates ability 1208, Blood Poison, and then ability 1211, Shadow Fog, it feels like he just lit the fuse on something terrifying. He claims that if it's the same principle behind BBO, the command should work, right now, while Eldo fires back that he's ready. He snaps on a sticky bomb first, then slings a magic lure and unleashes waves of magic straight from his own body. The monster slams to a sudden stop in front of the girl, whips around and charges straight at Eldo, while she stutters, blinks, and blurts out, "What is all this supposed to mean?" Eldo realizes the magic bait is a spell made to rile the enemy up, but it catches his eye for a reason he can't ignore. Suddenly, the monster stomps into the goo from the sticky bomb, and then faceplants into the ground, and the girl is completely stunned. Then the boy whips out a shadow fog spell, blasting a dark cloud straight into the monster's eyes. Then Eldo uncorked a blood poison spell and blasted it straight into him. Shadow Mist squeezes the battlefield to a blur, while blood poison drains his strength to the bone. A blonde girl strides up to Eldo and demands, "So you really knocked out that furious monkey?" Even though she's the one who couldn't. The young man figured the girl was basically trying to prove, loud and clear, that she was the strongest adventurer around. He tells her to recover first, then blasts her shoulder with a magical healing spell, bam, and she gasps that the pain is gone, immediately turning to him like, "What did you do?" Eldo swears he was only firing healing spells, but the girl snaps back, so the boy can mix combat magic with healing, and she's never even heard of an adventurer like him. Eldo realizes the sages, and even the adventurers, still don't know the basics of self-healing, and he snaps that the real issue is that anymore, it's the boss lurking right nearby. The girl stared at him totally lost, so Eldo finally snapped, "I didn't finish him off and he's only low level, so the spells I saw weren't that strong. If he keeps messing with blood poison, he'll finish him off for sure, but that move drags on too long and time is running out." He starts thinking, "I need reinforcements." Then he recalls a rumor. Around here, there's a flamelance, the strongest adventurer. The girl claims she's a flamelance, but her friends call her Myria and Eldo immediately snaps, "Are you for real?" When they claimed she was the strongest, he figured she'd wipe someone out in seconds, pure enraged fury, like a caged monkey snapping free. The moment he heard flaming spear, he pictured some hot-blooded giant, but Eldo introduced himself and he never saw it coming. The fiery spear was a tiny girl. The girl swore she'd keep calling him that and said if he wanted, he could call her Myria. The girl's cheeks flared as she blurted, I must have been awful because that angry monkey is totally out of my league. Eldo snaps that it's nothing like that, then immediately dodges the whole topic, claiming it's called a flame lance because it's built for flame-based weapons. The girl tells him the young man isn't a slouch, and she swears every word is the truth. Miria's old job was actually the top slot in BBO, but right here, they treat her like the bottom of the barrel. And then the girl drops her own title too, hero. He thinks it's a total waste. Those hero-level abilities are insanely useful. And if that girl had the same high-end knowledge and skills, she'd have shut down that enraged monkey in a heartbeat. If she's really the hero, then there's nothing left to debate. This fight ends soon, so he shoots Miria a favor. He tells the girl, "I'll stall the monkey, you go in alone right then," and insists that even the simplest combo move will hit hard enough. Miria demands to know what a combo attack is, and Elder snaps back. This world has blown past every single expectation he ever had. He leans in and demands she repeat every single thing he says. Then the boy fires back, asking her to explain the power called 1321, Combined Attack Activation. The girl blurts out those words, and boom, a skill panel slams into view in front of her. Her eyes widen and she blurts, "What is this?" The boy dares her to swing the pike, yelling for a combo attack as he drives the plan home. The girl swung her pike hard, screamed for a combo attack, and right on cue her pike burst into a blazing glow. She presses so that power really works, and can you actually learn skills like that? Eldo just smirks and says, "Yeah, there are other ways too." The girl blurts out who the young man is, and he just shrugs, saying he barely knows anything, then admits he's only a lowly F-rank adventurer. The girl snaps that the boy is lying, because no F-rank adventurer could possibly know stuff like that, and Eldo fires back that he's not lying at all. Right then, a monkey boss drops in beside them, and Eldo realizes it ripped up a chunk of earth he'd been stuck to. Then the boss slams his paws into the ground, shattering the chunk of earth that was glued there, and Eldo snaps that he can't see a thing, yet he still tells the girl to stay sharp because he might lunge at random. Miria screams, "Come this way, we'll finally get closer to him." Eldo grins and says, "Good, now I'll strip away every spell and I'll take every attack myself." Miria then has to hit him with a combined attack, so she can't be stopped right, but the girl insists it's impossible. He swears everything's under control, promises he'll keep the monkey contained, and tells the girl to go all in. The girl nodded like she totally got it, begged him to trust her, and snapped into a fighting stance of her own. Eldo steels himself, thrusts his staff forward, and snaps a nullification spell into place. A monstrous roar tore through the air as the creature sprinted straight for Eldo and Miria. He swung to strike, but Eldo snapped his staff up and took the monkey boss's brutal hit head-on. He threw up a magic defense spell. No, it's not an iron wall, but it's the sage's deadliest shield. Then the young man snaps his order, "Miria, now we attack." The girl casts a flame weapon spell, and her pike erupts in blazing scarlet fire. The girl unleashes the next skill, Eldo's taught combo, and slams it straight into the monkey's head. Then boom, the girl's pike ignites out of nowhere, whirling like a blazing drill, and she's so shocked she gasps and screams, "I can do it." Miria surges forward and drives her final strike straight into the monster's chest, and the flames around the pike whip into a crimson vortex. The monkey lights up smoking all over, then keels over and blacks out. Then the girl snaps awake, stares at the pike, and blurts out in shock that something so small can hit that powerfully. Eldo tells her she crushed it, and they even skyrocket their levels. Then she fires back, saying it can't be that simple for the boss to get defeated. Eldo grins and says it was all her because he only managed to shut down its attacks. She can't believe he's brushing this off, and she snaps that it's totally unrealistic, because he talks like he knows abilities inside out, so how could he honestly claim he's just an F-rank adventurer? Then the boy tells Miria, "It won't take long, so will you team up with me?" And Miria shoots back, "Sure, but I want to be on Eldo's team too." The kid blurts out that he's been taking down boss after boss lately. When he can, he grinds bosses solo to farm experience. But it drags on forever alone, then he grins. With her raw firepower, they'll wipe them out fast. Eldo promises to cut the reward in half and spill the truth about the abilities, then tells the girl to really think it over. Miria says she has no reason to refuse, but she still can't shake the feeling that he isn't really F-rank. She reaches out and tells him straight to his face that she doesn't believe he's a bad person. So he takes her hand and they shake, and right after that she leans on Eldo while he answers back with the same promise. After a beat, the girl leans in and asks how abilities even combine, and he tells her, "Use skill points, then you unlock brand new ones," because that right there decides how the whole fight plays out. Even when you level up, you still can't learn every ability, and once they're there, you can't cash them back in as skill points. The girl snaps, "So what am I supposed to do in a situation like this?" Then she fires back at Eldo, "If you're really that good at upgrades, why don't you even know which abilities you should level up to get stronger?" He shoots back that he has no clue if she'll like it or not, but there's one combo he swears is absolutely unbeatable. The girl asks if he'll spill the details of this combo and he blurts, "Is it too fast?" Then quickly fires back, "Miria, have you ever learned this skill before?" The girl smiles and says, "Yeah, before I met you, I honestly thought powers only unlock as you rack up experience. So that's why I trained and learned the flame weapon this way." He thinks ability training is supposed to happen in church, but Miria doesn't even know that, so that's the real reason she can't push her understanding any further. The boy leans in and asks the girl what level she is. Maria grins and says, "Level 18. Then he insists, "You need a few more levels," and presses, "So why won't you level up any higher?" Maria shrugs and says, "Yeah, sure, we can swing it, but what are we supposed to do with this giant monkey? They've got to hand it to the guild and they'll still have to cut it up first." Then he shoots back, "No, don't bother with that." He hurls a magic gathering spell, and the monkey drops straight into a pool of dark liquid, then vanishes like it never existed. The girl blurts out where the monkey is headed, and Eldo snaps back that he used the magic gathering spell to shove her into a different space, so she demands to know what another space even means. The girl doesn't press him for answers. She just shrugs and says Eldo will always come up with something to shock her, and that she'll do everything she can, so they've gotta move. After a while, they stumbled into yet another monster. Miria straight up lunges with her pike and drives it right into its chest, while Eldo hammers it with spells. Suddenly they realized the sun had already slipped away, and the world plunged into darkness. Eldo snapped, telling Miria they couldn't push themselves too hard and they had to head back to the city right now. Eldo was stuck at level 10, while Miria was already level 19, and the girl nodded, saying she'd go back to the city. After a little while, the guild's girl administrator couldn't shake it. She stared at what was right in front of her, stunned by what it might be. Miria tells her it's an A-rank monster, an enraged monkey, so the girl blurts out an apology and admits it's her first time seeing one. Then she darts off shouting that she'll call the branch chief. Eldo whips around to Miria and tells her to come closer for round 2, then orders her to claim she beat that monster all by herself. So Miria fires back, "Why should I?" The young man shoots back that achievements mean nothing to him, and he refuses to turn the news of a newbie beating an A-rank monster into a big, noisy celebration. The girl tells him, "If you change your mind all of a sudden, say it right now." Suddenly, the door slams open, a man rushes in, breathless, and blurts out that he kept them waiting, then immediately asks, "So you really beat the A-rank monster?" The girl nods, swears it's true, then leans in and asks, "So how much are you paying for that angry monkey?" The man fires back, asking again if he heard right. An angry monkey, could that be the key to actually beating this monster? The girl spins around and credits Eldo for doing most of the work, and the young man erupts in shouting, demanding what happened to their recent conversation, until she blurts out an apology, saying everyone went dead silent and she had no choice but to speak up. The man blurts that he's never seen the boy before, then presses him with one question, "What's with the two names?" The girl answers straight away, "My name's Eldo and he's a fresh rookie, rank F." The man challenges a rookie of rank F and dares them to face a monster of rank A. Then the girl nods, saying she thought the same, because that boy is seriously something special. Miria snaps that's why she felt like she was getting played too, but the real problem is the beginner system that won't let you level up your rank. So the young man leans in and asks what she means. He asks if it's true that rookies can't rank up, and Miria snaps back, saying she never thought even Eldo would be clueless like that. Rookies can't rank up, and for lower jobs it's brutally hard to climb. She tells him she had to claw her way up to rank B, too, because they're trying to cut down on the adventurers who get killed when their rank doesn't even match what they can truly do. He asks if it's cool for them to run the same task again, and she nods, saying she heard it used to slow rank growth until about 10 years ago when Cardinal Georges's reforms hit, and he was still at the top, and that's how the system turned out. The man blurts out that he's sorry for the interruption, but it's an order from above. While Eldo can't shake the feeling that no matter what your job title is, it all comes down to what you personally can do, and that your rank shifting based on your profession feels way too much like a conspiracy. Maybe Cardinal Georgius despises lowborn folk and fresh newcomers, because the capital church where you could switch professions is now just ruins, and these higher jobs feel way too strange, like something rotten is going on. Miria blurts out that the boy is long past rank F, because he shrugged off every single one of the monkey's attacks. Eldo only then realizes the girl has probably totally forgotten their whole conversation. The man blurts that it's impossible. Eldo, the new guy with rank F, being here is just unbelievable. Then he demands Eldo's name again and presses, "So you're the one who joined the guild in Ilya." He tells him the rumors are already flying around Ilya. Some terrifyingly strong F-rank newcomer named Eldo just showed up, and he supposedly fought the sea dragon himself. The kid's stunned because the news has spread this far already. And yeah, this isn't one of those situations where he has to worry about whether he'll stand out. The man says, "If you're really that old blood, I'll hook you up with a special procedure to level up your rank." And the boy blurts out, "Can it really be done?" He tells them that with the department head's recommendation, and the exact achievements needed to climb ranks. His application will get approved as an exception, and the real kicker is this. His fighting record against the Sea Dragon will be weighed extra hard. The boy promises he'll be grateful, and even expects the man to bump up his rank, but the man immediately demands to see the boy's guild card for proof, then fires back that the boy should be the one thanking him. He says climbing up to become an outstanding adventurer is the real badge of honor in Anubis's career. Then he leans in and studies his guild card, checks his sage profession, and blurts out that it's a totally unknown kind of work. Same goes for the lower professions. There's barely any info, so that young guy is about to struggle hard, and the girl even admits that if she'd been born 20 years earlier, she probably would have been treated like some rookie too. Eldo thought heroes were just another mysterious job, but when he looked at Maria, it hit him. Heroism hadn't even started getting the spotlight yet. Because the sage refuses to bow down at the puberty ceremony, people treat him way too freely at all times. But he shrugs it off, since he knows every single trade secret of being a sage. He tells everyone all good, and says the rank up procedure worked. Now the kids officially rank E, but inside the system, you can only climb one rank at a time, so he'll have to come back again once he's racked up enough achievements. The chat derailed, and suddenly everyone kept circling back to the ransom for the angry monkey's materials. After a while, a young man hauled massive bags through the street, over 100 million gil stuffed inside. In this world, you can scrape by for a month on just 200,000 gil, but once you've got 120 million gil in hand, money stops being a worry for the rest of your life. The bags suddenly hit like bricks, so he panicked, then shoved them into another pocket of space with magical gathering. Suddenly, Miria snaps his name and tells him they've already handled everything, so maybe he'll finally spill the truth about his abilities. He shuts it down fast, saying today's a no-go, but tomorrow. Tomorrow he'll give her a proper lecture before he heads out to hunt in a brand new place. Next morning they burst into this deep forest and Eldo turns to ask, "Are you ready, girl?" Miria snaps into a fighting stance, then shouts for the young man to hold up, because right in front of her a blood tiger has shown up and it's a nightmare of an animal. Eldo snorts and says that the blood tiger in BBO doesn't seem that scary. Then he turns to the girl and asks if it's really strong, and she says it's the strongest B-rank monster, with brutal stats, insane endurance, and even crazier mobility. Aldo says he gets it, but deep down you can tell she'll still find a way to deal with him, right, using those combo moves he told the girl earlier that morning. The girl asks if Eldo's trying to soothe her. Then she snatches the spear and blurts out that honestly she thinks she can handle it. Eldo smirks and leans in to watch as the girl grabs the spear and rockets forward, right as the tiger charges straight at her. The girl taps into the attack field's power, and the moment she does, her body erupts in a blinding glow, wrapped in living light. She slips the tiger's strike, then lands right behind him like she's reading his moves. While Aldo's convinced this attack field is a power that stays on for 10 whole minutes, during which the one who owns it gets stronger. Then she unleashes a brutal combo move, stabbing the tiger full force with her spear, and right after that, she strikes again with another combo hit. The monster clenches at the pain in his neck. Then the girl jabs the tiger's side with the spear's tip and unleashes that piercing defense break power. The kid finally gets it. Defense piercing doesn't just cut through armor, it weakens it right where the hit lands. Then the girl unleashes the auxiliary attack, and the young man instantly realizes it multiplies the damage to the necks below by several times. The girl locks eyes with the tiger, and the beast immediately scrambles to escape, vaulting up into the trees. But she refuses to lose her target, unleashing full explosive crush. Eldo realizes that going full blast with crushing makes his attack skyrocket, but wipes out every ability he'd been using before, turning it into the hero's ultimate finisher. The tiger bolts to escape the girl, but Miria steps in like she owns the moment. Then she unleashes an attack from her ability. She hurls a blazing shot from her spear, and it rips the tiger clean in two. She stayed rooted in her spot, smoke curling from the tip of her pike as she finally released a slow exhale, while the young man stared, already clocking how brutal those skills were, especially for someone in the next strongest class after the sage in a straight one-on-one fight. With her powers boosting her strength, she can steamroll through even a bunch of opponents, and it's one of the rare jobs that lets her take on fights solo. The girl stares at her own hands, grinning like she just pulled off the impossible. Then a tiger slams into her from behind. She whips around in panic and sees the truth. It wasn't one, there were several. A tiger barrels toward the girl, but Eldo rockets between them and freezes the beast with his power. Miria, terrified, finally opens her eyes, and there's Eldo right in front of her. He tells the girl she nailed the combo on her first try, and she thanks the young man, then straight up asks if this is really the moment to get into that discussion. Suddenly, the tiger comes barreling back and slashes Eldo from the side with a brutal paw, but Eldo snaps his block in place like he saw it coming. Then he grins and admits, "I forgot to tell you something, heroes have a power that's tougher than magic defense." He calls it super defense asterisk. She triggers her critical defense to slip past the enemy's strike, then instantly flips the switch and storms back with a brutal counter combo. He claims he used a magical search to scout the area and spots 3 blood tigers ahead. He'll take care of them himself. Then the girl can go in and fight off a whole bunch of opponents. She can't believe he's facing that tiger by himself. Then he glares at the beast and fires off fire arrows. Suddenly the monster erupts in flames, and the fire devours it completely, leaving nothing behind. She eyed him like he was up to something, then snapped that she'd been thinking the young man couldn't pull off this hunt alone. The young man shoots back that his magic power and stash are tiny, so he can't just toss everything away, and he hands the plan to the girl, trusting she'll keep their hunt running perfectly. He shouts that a whole herd of blood tigers is right there in front of them, and since they've got all the time in the world, the young man urges them to slow down instead of rushing the hunt. The girl flashes a smile and eagerly says yes to the young man's proposal. The girl studies her hero defense, super defense, and Eldo tells her, if she focuses on one spot, the shield snaps into sharp, clear outlines. Eldo brags that this shield can shrug off even a whole crowd of enemies and hit-by-hit local attacks, and Miria shoots back a grateful, "Thanks for saving me, Eldo." But even then, only the top of the top makes rank S. The young man is stunned and blurts out that she has to release the ability combos the right way first. They crested a tiny cliff and froze. 3 tigers were there devouring their meal and more opponents were closing in right after. Eldo leaned toward the girl and asked, "You ready?" Miria winks at the young man and tells him to trust her. She's got this, no problem at all. She leaps off the cliff and charges straight into the fight. Then the young man gets hit with this eerie, awful premonition. Marius locks onto her target, unleashes her shockwave to smash multiple enemies, drops in with a wide attack, then spins back around and nails 3 more enemies. The girl flashes a smile, but the tiger keeps surviving every hit around her again and again. She's stunned she couldn't wipe them all out, and now she's ready to unleash her attacks once more. The girl unleashes that massive wide attack once more, blasting the area and racking up damage again. Out of nowhere, the tiger lunged up behind her and snapped its fangs wide, like it was about to rip into her any second. Suddenly, the girl shrieked and threw up a shield around herself, curling into a tight ball of protection. Then she screamed the boy's name. Eldo loosed fire arrows and turned every opponent into a blazing mess. And right then the girl crumpled, clutched her head, and shook with pure terror. A young man closes in on Miria. She comes sprinting toward him with a grin, and then he holds up 2 fingers, telling her she just made 2 mistakes. First, she never triggered the boost from that attack field and Ox Strike. And second, she didn't fully grasp how the ability's recharge time actually works. That big attack needs to sit there for about 10 seconds before you can fire it again, otherwise it'll fail on the second shot. And while it's recharging, the girl can calmly slip in and use her other abilities. The girl crumpled with despair and begged Eldo for forgiveness, admitting she let the moment sweep her away. Eldo claims the girl's a natural, then immediately clocks what she needs. So she snaps into action with super defense, launching attacks while holding her ground, and even says she feels great out there on the battlefield. The girl's cheeks flared red with embarrassment as she stumbled through a thank you to Eldo, and the young man shot her a warm smile right back. Eldo throws out the trade. He'll swap places with Miria and take the next step, and Miria nods, agreeing right on the spot. After a while, Eldo and Miria finally stormed back into the guild, and the guild leader, along with the female administrator, stared in pure horror at what these 2 had dragged in. Eldo and Miria stood right in front of them, and the young man snapped that they'd come to claim the reward for the blood tigers, while behind them a pile of monsters was piled up, and Eldo swore there were 73 blood tiger corpses in total. The admin girl shrieked in pure horror, and the guild's head even snapped his glasses back in shock. The man snapped that, even with the boy standing beside the firepike, wiping out that many monsters on a hunt is already way too much. And the girl shot back that Eldo is insanely strong, E-rank or not, because what he's doing just doesn't look real. The boy taps into his power and blasts more tigers out of there, and the man can't help asking what the hell he's doing. The boy says he powered up by gathering magic, then snaps his monsters into a brand new space he creates with spellwork. The man blurts that this is the first time he's ever seen magic like this, and he can't stop staring because it's unreal. While Miria points out that Eldo clearly has power and knowledge, yet he refuses fame, so she's left totally baffled by him. The man claims he understands it all and swears everything will stay confidential, telling them there's nothing to fear. Yet the boy feels his words don't ring true, and still, nobody will ever buy his tale about some low-ranking rookie adventurer. The man asks if the boy should be bumped up to D rank, saying this task's results should be enough. Yet for C rank, he'll need a go-ahead from another department boss, and pushing higher after that won't be as easy. The young man shrugs and says he'll keep trusting the guy with the higher rank. Then after a while, the guild leader hands Eldo a document and declares, "You're D rank now." He leans in and asks if they're still going after prey. The young man grins and says it's a great question. Since they've got plenty of money, the real reason to keep hunting is all about sharpening their skills. Myria's heart is crushed. She looks up and begs that if there's any way she'll level up fast, aiming for the kind of tasks that count as serious merits for the guild. This is how she finally moves one step closer to her goal, so the young man blurts out what goal she means. Miria shoots back with a quick apology, saying she didn't even think to consult him. Eldo waves it off and says everything's fine. The man starts bragging about his real merits, then drops the bomb. He's got a single assignment, one only the mightiest adventurers can handle, an all-out reconnaissance mission inside the Forest of Death. Eldo fires off a question about the mission, then straight up says the name screams trouble and Marius just smirks. The name tells you everything. This is a lethal zone, the kind that swallows people, and the worst part. Only 10% who dared to go deep ever came back alive. He insists it's all because only the big, high-ranking monsters show up there, so you'd better think twice before trusting anyone with that job. Myria leans in and asks Eldo what they're going to do next, and she's dead sure they can pull it off. Eldo agrees she's right, but he demands one thing: can they read the papers before anyone decides? The man then hands them the documents and lets them look. He says it's just the usual forest map, but here, right here, something big is supposed to stand out, a giant, eye-catching pillar. Then he sketches it on paper and points out the exact shape it has. Zefaldo blurts out, "Wait, is this sealed pillar for real?" The man fires back, "So you're telling me the boy actually knows about it?" That sealed pillar is basically a dungeon for raid bosses, monsters way stronger than anything in the area. And in BBO, when the events kicked off, the seal got shattered and those monsters burst out. He tells the team the mission is simple. Inspect the condition of that pillar, because just the other day a rumor spread that a sealed one has suddenly appeared, and if it's true Eldo has to confirm it fast or they'll have to take drastic action. Eldo starts pitching how to stop the rampage and the man shoots back, "You really know all about this, kid? Are you the guild leader or what?" Eldo just smirks and says, "I learned it as an adventurer." Rampage is when an army of monsters suddenly crashes in before the seal even has a chance to snap open, fleeing from the raid boss in total panic, rushing forward without a clue, and smashing through every village and town they hit, leaving catastrophic wreckage in their wake. The man points out that there's a device here that shields everyone from evil spirits too, but it only has a limited size and fuel, so he begs for any info you can share. The kid's whole attitude flips to stone-cold serious as he says, "I've got it," and the others nod like they're on the same page. Then the man smirks and drops, "Good, you owe me one." Eldo leans in and tells Miria this mission is pure danger. If things go wrong, they could get shoved straight into the middle of a brutal rampage. Miria doesn't flinch. She answers with total confidence that she's stepping into it on purpose. Next morning, Eldo and Mirio were already deep in the forest, tearing into every monster they found, hitting together, then striking again, one battle right after the last. Isyasin admits the Forest of Death was right on cue, because the opponents in there are absolutely brutal. The girl laughs and swears they'll barrel ahead with zero trouble. They just have to shove a little harder. Eldo clocks something off about the girl, steps in, and demands to know what's wrong and why she's so rattled, then straight up asks if winning achievements are really that important to her. The girl says it's a reward system for adventurers, and the young man snaps back, "What kind of system is that?" Because he's never even heard of it. The girl tells you straight up, "Grab a rank, prove your talents actually help the country, and you can earn an aristocrat title, because for an adventurer that's the only door to nobility." She whips around and declares, "My goal is to become an aristocrat," fighting for her shattered, bankrupt family with no title to their name. He realizes she's pouring everything into bringing her family back, and he tells her straight, if that's true, then she has to do something bigger, something that actually matters. So he urges her to shake it off, push forward, and keep going, and she nods, agreeing right on the spot. After a while, Eldo and Miria spot this massive stone pillar, and it's covered in a huge, powerful drawing. The boy leans in and asks Miria if this really is the sealed pillar. Miria just nods and confirms it's the real deal. The young man points out the orange pillar is aimed at Fiesta. Then he says you've got only about 5 days left before the raid bosses finally crash in. The girl asks if he truly gets it just by looking, and Aldo tells her you can read this kind of thing by its colors: blue, yellow, orange, red, then black. This order is basically a countdown to the monster's arrival, 5 days left, but not enough room to breathe. He tells the girl to go back fast and bring him a report. After a while, they finally reach the Adventurers Guild, and the leader steps in to meet them. The man starts talking about the fire peak, brags that they got back fast, and then leans in asking what they found about the sealed pillar. The girl snaps out that there are only 5 days left before the rampage, and the man shoots back, "What do you mean?" Eldo says he thinks the man has no clue, because the pole's color can reveal how much time is left. The man shoots off a quick thank you for the report, then panics. He needs to trigger the protective device right now, so he orders them to hold here and wait. Minutes later, he hurries up to Eldo and Miria, throws an apology at them for making them wait, and tells them the mechanism won't kick off for about 4 days, so yeah, they've got time. He calls them in to talk about the reward, then promises he'll write Eldo a recommendation to get promoted to C rank, plus the Firepike pick. And if she can beat Rampage's manifestation too, he'll back her for the A rank exam with his recommendation. Or they tell them to wait until the Rampage actually starts, because they're gearing up to shove it back the moment it hits. Then the man adds that Eldo and Miria will back them up if they just stay in the city for a bit. 5 days later, on the very day the Rampage hits, a massive dome crashes over the city like a shield, and Miria blurts out, "Is this really defense?" Eldo answers, "Yes," and it looks like they hit the trigger just in time. Miria blurts that she's never seen anything like this before. Then she can't stop wondering if it can truly stand between this place and danger. Eldo swears it's not about stopping monsters from passing. He's using a special magical power to scare them off, send them back to the shadows, and make them vanish for good. Then the dome just vanishes out of nowhere, like it was never there. The girl stares and says it looks gone, then asks if it's really supposed to be like that. The boy snaps back that it shouldn't, so he tells her to go check it out. They sprint straight to that special device, slam it into place to trigger the barrier, then realize it's already been smashed. The young man spots a shattered device, then his eyes land on one dead body and one wounded survivor lying close by. Aldo demands what happened here, and the man snaps back that he'd tangled with the guards and somehow smashed the whole mechanism. Eldo spots a tattoo on the dead man's arm, recognizes it as the Garden of Despair emblem, and instantly realizes the guy was one of them. Then it hits him that he'd set up the device to get smashed during the rampage. He asks if there's any way to fix that device, and the man shuts him down fast, saying it's totally hopeless since it's an unknown relic their ancestors handed down. Eldo snaps to it. This device isn't being run by the people of this world at all, which means it's a genuine, out-of-place artifact dropped from somewhere else. The man insists, "We'll fix it, of course." But even if they manage to repair it, they'll still have to launch it all over again, and that means they'll burn at least 4 more days. The man snaps back that they can't do it, then barks orders to warn every resident to evacuate, and to call up any adventurers nearby. Elder knows that even if he somehow stomps through a mountain of monsters, raid bosses are a whole other beast. No matter what raid boss shows up, its attacks will smash everything nearby and rake in massive damage. Yeah, casualties are basically inevitable, and he just shrugs like there's nothing anyone can do. He bursts out and tells Miria he's handing the townspeople over to her, then she snaps, "So what are you gonna do?" And he answers, "I'm going to try to shut this rampage down." The girl demands to know how he'll pull it off, because even he doesn't believe he can. Elder admits he has one plan, but it's not guaranteed, so Miriam better move like she knows things could go wrong. The young man rockets out of the city, and Miria screams after him. Then just minutes later he's already in the forest, staring down a mix of monsters he knows and ones he's never seen. They barreled straight toward the spot where Eldo had just ripped out of the sky, because the young man knew there was no way he could take on a horde like this by himself, and he had to find another way to stop the rampage. To stop Eldo, you've got to smash the raid boss first. He drops beside the pillar, and the next thing he realizes hits like a punch. It's not chained to the ground anymore. The pillar is levitating in midair. Then snap, a nasty crack races across the pole, and it shatters into a shower of tiny pieces. Suddenly, the ground jolted like it had a heartbeat, and out of the dirt, an eye burst into view as something huge fought its way upward from beneath the earth. The raid boss was a massive lightning dragon. It tore through the sky with brutal power, its entire body swarming with crackling lightning. The young man grips his staff and declares he's ready to kick things off. Because in BBO, the sage was treated like the absolute strongest profession, making up a whopping 80% of all the players. He flashes a confident smile and locks in thinking, "All right, now I'm showing them exactly why." Panic erupted across the whole city. Miria rushed in, shouted for everyone to move faster, because a massive flock of monsters was closing in fast. From the watchtower, the man peered through his telescope and saw a terrifying swarm of monsters barreling straight toward the city. Miria snapped herself together, bolted straight for the city gates, and as the main gate started closing, people yelled after her, shouting, "Where do you think you're going?" The girl screamed for them to slam the gate shut, because she'd do whatever it took to stop those monsters. She screams that they've got no time left, then whips her head toward Eldo like she's throwing those exact words straight at him. Right in front of that colossal dragon, the main character grinned like he owned the moment, flashing back to the best days of his life. She told me that when he first picked up BBO, that dragon was the toughest boss you'd see right at the start, and it absolutely wrecked the young guy back then. Back then, even with the highest rank, he still didn't have the experience, so he can't stop thinking about how many times he was killed, over and over and over. The lightning dragon snaps awake, shakes off its daze, and locks eyes with the hero standing right in front of it. Then he whips out his lightning and hammers it straight into the tree beside the boy. Yet Eldo doesn't even so much as glance at it. He figured the lightning dragon's mere presence would tear everything up, so business tanked fast, yet he grinned because he had a whole plan of his own. Suddenly the dragon hurls lightning again and slams it straight into the young man, yet somehow he walks away unscathed. At this moment, Eldo unleashed anti-magic electricity, and it didn't just zap. It hardened his body against electric blasts, letting part of the damage vanish completely. The dragon slams its massive paw down, but Eldo slips aside like lightning and launches out of the way at the last second. He thinks he can't strike this dragon head-on, not yet, so he cranes his neck and spots it in an instant. The dragon's divine lightning skill blasting toward him. Eldo's standing spot gets swallowed by a strange orb, and then it detonates in a flash. The young man barely jukes out in time, while the lightning crackles and strips the dark from his hair, turning it a lighter shade. He stares at his burnt arm and swears it's only from a tiny graze. But the pain hits way harder than any health loss bar you'd ever see in a normal game. Divine lightning lets you slam the earth with destructive lightning. One hit, and if you're stuck in the center, you can drop dead on the spot. Eldo's sitting at level 18 right now, but to take on that dragon, you better be around level 50. Eldo triggers self-healing to seal up his arm, then grins and says he knows exactly what to do. He's beaten this dragon so many times that it's basically old news. This time won't be any different. He snaps into action, and one of his abilities lights up as magical seals erupt in front of him. The boy unleashes his whole arsenal: attack field, enhancement field, berserker field, ice field, and the unstoppable super magic field. He's convinced he can kick every field online, and then drown his weapon in earth magic, the polar opposite of lightning dragon magic. So he slams earth magic and even super earth magic into his staff. His hands start to tremble, and he realizes the strain on his body isn't normal. Those abilities being forced on him are making everything brutal to control. But when it comes to magic, Eldo is thousands of times stronger than that dragon. The young man spots the dragon's moves and braces for divine lightning again, but the truth hits. This isn't that simple. The boy snaps backward, sees the dragon diving straight down and dodges with ease. Then he tells him, "You caught me off guard at first, but I won't get fooled like that again." He rockets straight at the dragon, then it bursts up from the ground like it was waiting there, and the young man instantly gets it. The dragon tossed that dust on purpose to shrink his sight, and his next strike is going to hit completely different. Eldo lunges to the side and just barely avoids disaster as lightning slashes in from nowhere. Now he's left wondering if that was real lightning-fast sprinting. If divine lightning hits point by point, then lightning sprint rips straight ahead in a single line. This is one of the lightning dragon's deadliest patterns. The young man snaps away from one lightning bolt after another. And even with his vision barely holding on, his body somehow remembers exactly when the attack came. He thrusts his staff ahead, fires off his abilities, then stops cold when he realizes they won't work. But that mind-blowing boost magic comes with a brutal price. It guzzles massive mana, then it refills by draining your health points. He can feel his life force draining away like he's about to drop. Nothing like this happened in the game. And with his level being what it is, there's no other way to beat this monster. The dragon swipes his paw through the smoke he just spawned, sends it scattering, and right then he spots the young man. The boy gasps for air, and right as he steadies himself, the dragon erupts into a roar and starts swinging that massive paw toward him. Suddenly, the monster lunges with a brutal snap, slamming its paws across its chest. Then a massive cross explodes across the ground, slicing through the earth with claws driven by pure air. The dragon whips his head around the fresh gash in the earth, hunting for the young man he just tore through, yet he's nowhere to be found. Eldo says he's only dodging for now, using what he learned from BBO, and the dragon is stunned, because the boy just shows up out of nowhere, hovering right above its head. Eldo says even if I'm low status, if I charge and head on, it won't even touch me. So yeah, this is the only move left to strike back, and the young man lunges forward, hoisting his staff high as he goes for broke with his strongest attack, packing it with every single enhancement he can. He hauls one massive boulder of earth overhead, bigger than the dragon itself, and Eldo vows that with this strike, the beast will be crushed for good once and for all. Eldo drops his staff in one hard motion, slams his giant stone hammer earth magic, then lets that boulder drop straight onto the dragon. The dragon crashes down onto the massive stone and blacks out for a second, and Eldo just stares, like, did he really pull off the win? Suddenly, the monster snaps its eyes open, and a brutal thunderhead hangs over it. Eldo realizes it's powering itself with divine lightning, meaning it's still alive. He jerks his head up and realizes the dragon isn't casting divine lightning at all. He tells them he hasn't seen it in BBO in ages, but this magic is stronger than divine lightning, and when death starts closing in, the lightning dragons shatter the heavens trump card finally comes out. The deadliest spell in the world, When you can't dodge goes by the name *** torpedo extermination ***. As Elder stares at it all, he realizes one terrifying truth. If he gets struck, there won't be a single trace of him left. Eldo shoots his hand up, flashes a shaky grin, and blurts that they have to crush this monster no matter what, before it triggers its power. The boy swings the giant stone hammer, cutting it down to just 1/3 of its size, barely making it in time, and all he can think about is one thing: win before the defeat hits. The giant boulder crashes down on the dragon again, smashing him flat and pinning him to the earth with brutal force. The young man wheezes for breath after burning through everything. Then he stares down at the dragon's crushed corpse and wipes the sweat off his face. The young man steps up and declares it, taming S done. That life-or-death job is finally over and he nailed it. While Eldo battled the dragon to the death, Miria was in the streets, tearing through the monsters that were closing in on the city. The girl unleashed wave after wave of attacks. She even smashed through a massive tiger. Then out of nowhere, a furious monkey came charging at her. The monster clapped its massive paws together, but the girl juked away and leaped up in a flash. Then she used her power to strike the monkey from behind and wipe it out. Her strength was fading fast, and a swarm of monsters closed in from every side. Right before her, a massive tiger crouched, with a pack of vicious wolves snapping at her heels. The girl stared at the swarm of monsters and realized she couldn't keep fighting them anymore. Right then, the tiger started to melt away and vanished for good, and the girl's eyes went wide. Right after that, she spotted Eldo streaking straight toward the city. The young man spotted a pile of dead monsters and turned to the girl, demanding to know if she'd wiped them all out. Maria said the monsters disappeared into thin air because Eldo's hands did it, and the young man shot back an apology for how long it took. Eldo bragged that he'd wiped out the raid boss and ended the rampage, and Mary snapped back, "Did you really do it?" The young man pulled out a dragon fang and held it right in her face. Maria's eyes widened, and she blurted that the raid boss was an S-rank monster. Then he pressed the dragon fang into her hands and said, "This is my proof." The girl says these are the leftovers of an S-rank monster. Her first time seeing one too, yet they already screamed danger. And Eldo still fought one-on-one with an S-rank to stop the rampage, which is seriously jaw-dropping. The girl thanks the young man and tells him he saved her life again. Eldor says, "You should thank me," then blurts out he wants to ask her for something, and Miri promises she'll do everything she can. He demands that the girl admit she's the one who wiped out the raid boss and shut down the rampage, and Miria can't believe it. She shrieks that she'll never say that. "I didn't do a thing, so I can't report the S-rank monster's elimination." And the reward's so wild it basically screams one thing: she's telling that young man to go report it himself. Elder reminds her that the girl promised to do her absolute best, and then he admits he thinks Miria should report it herself, not him, and explains that the system right now only lets you climb up one rank at a time. If it came down to it, Miriam getting bumped from rank B to rank A would be way better than him pushing his rank from D to C. He tells her straight up, he wants her to rise into an aristocrat, and having an aristocrat on your side is pure gold. She shoots him a nervous look, shuts her eyes tight, and declares, "I get it all." Then she insists she has to become an aristocrat ASAP and crush her debts. Eldo smiles, certain she'll make it. She insists, "Of course, I already thanked him," then calls the young man wildly unusual, because a rookie standing on his own can't possibly take down an S-rank monster. The girl blurts out that Eldo feels completely unreal, like he's from another world. Then the young man goes wide-eyed and demands, "What do you mean?" Maria grins, winks, then laughs it off, saying she's just joking and none of that stuff ever happens. Eldo pushes back, telling her to just say it like they agreed. She swears he can trust her, but somehow Eldo starts to feel uneasy anyway. Meanwhile, warriors brace themselves at the city gates, ready to smash the monsters' attacks. Yet the monsters never showed up and they couldn't figure out why. The guy up on the observation tower was just as confused. Those monsters were supposed to show up hours ago, yet 1 second they were there, and the next they vanished out of nowhere. Everyone was totally lost. Then Miria burst out in front of them. The warriors instantly clocked her as the firepike, and they demanded to know what she was doing here. The girl stammers that she handled the S-rank dragon that burst out of the sealed pillar, and the second she took down the real threat, every last monster vanished. The men echoed the girl's claim, staring at her like, "You really beat him all by yourself." Miria snapped off a chunk of the dragon and declared it would be the proof. Even with his low rank, the men stared at the dragon's parts and swore they could feel that power roaring through it. They demanded proof, and Miria swore it was all true, then declared the riot was finally over. Everyone cheered like they'd been spared and practically cried, "We're safe." Out of nowhere, the guild leader strides up to Miria and praises the firepike for an absolutely incredible job. Turns out you could beat the monster trapped in that sealed pillar just like that. Even so, he had a gut feeling that taming the big monster could change everything. But this thing was so unstoppable that nobody had ever beaten it, so they just waited for the rampage to end before they dared to fight. When the mechanism finally died, the Adventurers Guild leader panicked, but Myria stepped in and pulled them all out of it. Then the man demanded news about Eldo, and the girl's whole body shuddered. She admits she let him go. Honestly, there's no way she could have taken him down when he's fighting like that and she's up against an S rank. The man shrugs and says, even if you're built like a monster, a rookie's still a rookie. He begs her to spill every detail because nobody has ever beaten an S-rank monster, and her story could be priceless, but she just stares back and says she remembers almost nothing. Elbow watched that girl from the corner of his eye, praying everything turned out okay for her, then shot her an apology in his head. The man asked if the girl was really targeting the horns, and Miria smirked. She said she clocked that they were his weak spot, so she kept hammering her powers straight at them. The man snapped in shock, saying that everyone knows the horns are the toughest part of a dragon, and they don't just break. But this girl still spotted their weak point, and that kind of courage and sharp insight is beyond words. The girl flashes a smile and says, it's not for nothing my name is on everyone's lips. The man promises, I'll absolutely report that Miria Fire Spear tore down a rank S monster. The girl nods and thanks him. The man explains that the reward will have to wait a few days since this never happened before. Then he leans in and asks if they can take the dragon's rock as proof that it's been pacified. He claims these merits might earn a jump past A rank and all the way to S rank. But he's clear he can't make that call alone. He has no authority to decide it by himself. He promises to push for her as hard as he can, but she'll have to sit tight until the Council of Higher Authorities makes the call, and she nods like, I get it. The man asks for permission to thank her one more time, then dips into a deep bow, right as the girl's face floods with embarrassment. After a bit, she slips out of the Adventurers Guild, and right there, Eldo is waiting. He tells Miria straight to her face that she did an amazing job. The girl admits she's still burning with embarrassment, and the young man rushes in with an apology. Then Miria smiles and says, thanks to you, I'm that much closer to my goal, even as she swears she won't stay in anyone's debt. Then the girl shoots Eldo a question, what's his next move? He grins and says he'll keep grinding quests and leveling up, but he can't help wishing there was a place packed with monsters just as tough. The girl snaps back that they don't usually talk about the Forest of Death, and the monsters there are only pretty tough. Then the young man presses, asking if she feels that way anymore. Marius grins and gives a smooth yes. Then she pivots to a new topic and tells her, all fired up, that she just heard something wild. An adventurer she knew filled her in, so she asks the girl whether she's heard about what's going down in the city of Arias. Not far from that spot in the massive forest of Arias, monsters suddenly swarm. Clearing quests pop up everywhere, and the man tells the girl to head there too, because with her powers, the problems would thin out fast. The girl says she'll stay in this city for a while, waiting on her answer. So tell me, why wouldn't the young man go too? Eldo snaps that she's right. If there are that many tasks on the table, then we should probably head out. They both feel it, their paths split right here. The girl snaps that ever since they met, she's only dragged the boy into one problem after another, so bad that she can barely even promise she'll have the chance to fully thank him. Even though it wasn't that long, she still thanked him with all her heart. Eldo snaps at the girl, telling her not to talk like she's saying goodbye, then leans in and asks, are there any other ways she can do him a huge favor without taking credit for his accomplishments? The girl seethes with guilt, blurts out that she's asking for forgiveness and swears it won't happen again, and Eldo just laughs it off like, relax, it's only a joke. The girl snaps at the young man to stop, confident he won't vanish, and then begs him to take care of himself. He tells her to wait and see him, and just like that, they part ways. Eldor strode out of the city, stared down the road ahead, and grinned as the boy said, it's time. He was heading for Arias, then a brutal downpour smashed the world open. In Aria's sprawling forest, a massive tiger with jagged, massive fangs thundered through the underbrush. Then it took an axe to the head, and a storm of arrows lit up the air as dozens of shots rained down. The gigantic horned monsters grinned at their helpless prey, crouched over the tiger's body, and ripped it into several savage pieces with their massive hands. The monster tore into the tiger's meat with a thunderous roar, then snapped its head toward the sky and screamed. Right then, its fellows surged in and ripped into the rest of the kill too. Eldo zoomed along, staring at the area map like it held the answers, insisting, if you trusted him, that the place was somewhere around here, but from above everything blurred, so he dove down. The boy dropped onto the grass, stared forward, and declared, all clear, no one can spot me from up above. Eldo looked out at the city ringed tight by a protective wall where a suffocating, oppressive dread hung over everything. He was striding across a suspension bridge that was shaking like crazy, with a roaring river raging far below. Eldo even told him to look around, because this meant he'd have to cross the whole bridge. A man barked at him to freeze, don't move a muscle, and Eldo stared, stunned, at the stranger posted at their village entrance. The man leaned in and told Eldo, you've got business in Arias, so tell me your rank and why you're here. Eldo tipped his chin up and snapped back, I'm a D rank. Aldo leaned in and told him he'd heard this place was packed with monster-killing quests, so that's why he'd showed up. while the man just sighed, worn out, like he'd already figured it would be that way. He told us he was sorry, but that excuse was already old news. Sure, monsters still roam and quests still stack up. Yet the real problem is the hungry ogres that have been tearing through here for days. Eldo stared in shock. Those starving ogres weren't just B-rank monsters, they were the toughest ones around, smart enough to think and skilled enough to take human weapons head-on. He kept insisting that monsters like this were the deadliest disaster he'd faced so far, especially since a whole crowd usually means one thing: a boss hiding in there, and chances are it's an ogre king, and yeah, this one's brutal. The lightning dragon hit with razor-precise strikes, so he kept winning by cranking up his power again and again, unless they plan to bring him down with sheer numbers and brute strength. He'll probably give in anyway, even though he knows exactly what he's supposed to do in that moment. Especially if the boss isn't the ogre king at all, but something even worse like a stronger ogre emperor. Eldos flashed a nervous smile and blurted that maybe he shouldn't have split from Miria in the first place, because now he knew, this time he had to move way more carefully. The man started telling us how the ogres used to stay trapped in the deepest parts of Aruz, never crossing into anyone's land, until they realized monsters were their food, and suddenly they started hunting, spreading, and taking more ground. The man said this was the reason the rest of the monsters scattered and swarmed into the area around Aruz, so once word hit, adventurers rushed in and tore through the monsters. He blurted in pure horror that right after it, hungry ogres came for them, scared and hungry enough to spare nothing, and they refused to sacrifice him only because they can't talk him out of it either. If he slips into the forest, he better stay razor careful at night. Eldo told the man it was all good and thanked him for the info. Then the guy charged into the city, prowling through the old houses as everyone around him looked drained, dull, and worn out. The guy nervously muttered that the place felt gloomy, like it was no shock at all, because the monsters were closing in on the far side. Eldo realized that the sheer swarm of ogres would crush any normal adventurer, and if they didn't stop them right now, those monsters would wipe out this place too. The kid marched up to the guild office, and Eldo pushed inside with a booming greeting, saying someone told him there were jobs here. Then he zeroed in on the task board. The guy said there were tons of tasks here, but before he could finish, the girl cut in and grilled him. Was he an adventurer and did he want to jump into any of them? Eldo stared at her and snapped, yes. He wanted something tougher and she pressed him, asking if he really trusted his own strength. Eldo just shrugged like more or less. She thrust the paper forward and barked out what he'd been thinking. This task wasn't about taming people at all, it was about hunting monsters, smiling like she already had victory. She kept going, saying the job was simple. Kill the creatures and bring back their remains as proof. Then the guy snatched the paper, gripping the task with both hands. Eldo snapped that this was a desperate job, and he'd even heard the other monsters got chased off by ogres. Sure, there were fewer, but they still kept showing up and ruining everything for them. She said they can't wipe them out, because a sudden run-in with the ogres would be deadly, so if he's really a tough adventurer, she's begging him to take down at least one monster. Eldo grinned and said sure. He'd take it on because he could cut down anyone, and that made it way more useful than his usual jobs, and the girl squealed how grateful she was. The boy bolted for the exit, saying he'd go hunting next, and the girl yelled after him to at least take care of himself. Then Eldo headed straight for the gate. The man gasped, wait you, and Eldo shot back, yeah, I'll take it because I'm the one who can slaughter any monsters. Then he said first I'm going to scour the forest. The man snapped at him to be careful. If anything felt off, turn back immediately, because once he died, it'd be way too late to fix a thing. Aldo told him it was okay, if it was dangerous, he'd head back there himself. The guy then marched over the suspension bridge and dove into the forest, swearing that whatever came next, he'd figure it out. The boy pushed deeper and deeper into the forest, palms sweating as he stammered that he didn't see a single monster. So had the ogres really gobbled them all up? Eldo stopped. He said he'd kick things off with magic invisibility and magic search, but right when he started, a furious growl ripped through the bushes behind him. An ogre burst into view, clutching a fox in his arms as she fought and writhed, refusing to go quietly. Then Eldo locked eyes with the monster and the guy just grinned like, wow, what a shock run-in. The ogre gulped the fox, then spat the blood right at the guy. Eldo's eyes shot wide as surprise hit, but he twisted out of the way and the monster charged straight at him to finish the job. Eldo snapped a magic circle into place and fired a defense spell, but the ogre crashed through his shield on the first hit and launched him flying across the distance. The boy gaped at the monster in pure shock, and the ogre bared his axe, swinging at Eldor, so the boy screamed for him to stop acting so cocky. Eldor rose off the ground and slammed the spell sticky bomb onto the monster. The ogre's fist was jammed into the tree, and Eldo snapped his staff toward it as the weapon erupted with bright light. Then the boy blared, I'm done playing, I'm taking it from you now. Elder hurled his spell, flame column ***, and the ogre got drowned in fire, so blazing that all he could make out was its burning outline. The ogre bellowed and crumpled to the ground and Eldo snapped, for starters, one. Then the monster jerked his eyes open and bolted straight for the forest, while the ogre charged after the guy on all fours. Eldos's jaw dropped as he realized he was sprinting off. Was he really chasing his fellows? The guy shot out his hand and unleashed a massive fireball that blasted the monster. This spell is called a fire sphere. Then the monster shrieked, snapped his eyes shut and crumpled onto the grass, never moving again while the guy just stared at his opponent. Eldo said, thinking hard, that the ogre was making scary sense for a monster. Calling his kin would have been the end of him. And the boy stared up at the clear sky. Eldos told Miria to stay away, so he'll be stuck waiting a long time for his magic to bounce back. And next time, he better hold it in when he unleashes those big powers. That's why he had to jump in, move fast, and crush them before they could regroup. Eldo stared at the defeated ogre and said, still. Eldo paused for a beat and said that the flaming column should have been more than enough for him, so why did it feel like there was something bigger going on? Did he really rank higher than the VVO, or was this about something else entirely? A brutal growl tore through the forest. Eldo snapped his eyes to the bushes just as 3 wolves burst out, sprinting right past him with heavy breaths, already worn out, yet they kept charging forward. Aldo stared at the wolves in shock, like they didn't even notice him, and the way they bolted told him one thing: something terrifying was chasing them. Just as the boy's thoughts were running wild, an axe shot into a tree right beside his head. Eldo jolted in horror, screaming that it was way too dangerous, then snapped his gaze toward where the weapon had come from. 5 towering ogres stood there, swinging all kinds of weapons, and Eldos managed a tired smile as he muttered that this was the absolute worst way they could have ever run into trouble. After Eldos left, this time the spotlight fell on an energetic secretary girl. She stretched, yawned, and muttered, dead tired, that this place was insanely boring. A tall girl with glasses burst into the room, shouting her point like it was a command, because the reception desk is the guild's face. And as the head of the area branch, she will absolutely not stand for this kind of nonsense. She tugged her glasses into place, then snapped to Teresa that if she kept showing up like this, she'd be handing over her resignation letter any day now. The girl leaned into the secretary and blurted that she wanted to know, was Eldo really the adventurer she'd teamed up with before she had to go back on duty? She kept going like, they even shoved tasks at him that didn't match his rank, and she said if the guild's rating dropped because of stuff like that, it would snowball into disaster. Teresa blurted, all anxious, what is this? Then went dead quiet, sure it was safer to stay silent, and stared hard at her boss. Teresa didn't even realize it yet, but she had a future eye power that let her spot who might level up next. She hadn't fully mastered it, so she judged the chances by the color she could see, yet somehow she still handed everyone tasks they could actually finish. Teresa figured no one would believe her even if she tried. Then the instructor walked into the building just as the girl started chewing Teresa out. The instructor said it wasn't that he couldn't understand why she was so calm, because once he'd met Eldo, every other adventurer suddenly looked like they were still just playing dress-up. The girl shrieked that the instructor had teamed up with Teresa. Then a guy burst into the building yelling that he was greeting everyone, grinning so hard he promised he'd be a big shot someday. The guy bragged that this proved they should hand him a job way above C rank. Then Teresa stared at him like, you've got no special parameters at all. She kept insisting the potential was just mediocre, like he'll never measure up to Eldo and they're nothing alike. And the instructor finally fixed his gaze on the guy who was way too sure of himself. The instructor told him he had to beat him first. This was the adventurer registration test. The guy grinned and asked if he was really sure because, hey, he was a warrior. The instructor gave a small smile and said, sorry, but your job doesn't decide your strength. And the guy snapped back, fine, I won't complain later. They stormed into the battle zone, and 5 minutes later the instructor walked out unscathed, while the other guy staggered behind, bruised to hell, scraped up, and sporting a battered head with ugly bumps and a cheek so swollen it barely looked real. The instructor told him to come back again and they marched him right out the door. Then the guy grinned and agreed, like it was all too true, and once he'd met Eldo, he couldn't believe how painfully boring this place felt. Teresa snapped her eyes to the man, shocked, because the instructor swore he was the strongest newcomer she'd ever seen, and now she couldn't stop thinking how she might never get a chance like this again. Teresa met her boss and instructor's eyes, spoke with rock-solid confidence and declared her decision. At the end of today's shift, she'd hand in a resignation letter. The boss shrieked in shock and the instructor asked Teresa if she was leaving to meet him. She grinned and said yes, because Eldo is always trouble, always fun to be around. The boss smirked and told her that when she ran into him, she'd better say they weren't sitting still. Then the boss froze, stunned, and snapped at everyone to wait. The boss bellowed at Teresa, demanding what she meant. She was really quitting. Teresa had already stuffed her backpack and stormed out of the guild to go find Eldo. Memories of the trading company's boss, Eldo burst out in shock, yelling that the staff costs 25 million gil, and Mina just smiled saying, you don't have to pay that in cash. She kept pressing, demanding his membership number scribbled on the back of his guild card, then promised she'd buy it for a whopping 30 million gil right this second. Mina flashed him a smile and said, if you want it that badly, go ahead, but before she could finish, Eldo cut in, fine, and gladly took her offer to grab the staff. The girl thrust a bag of money into his hands and said, here's your change, 5 million gil. Eldo blurted, all awkward, that she'd really be handing it to him too, like that was nothing at all for the head of a trading company. Eldo stormed out of the house to get on with his day, and Mina leaned in at the window with a small, knowing smile. Then the maid slipped into the room and asked if Mina was really sure about what she'd done. The girl blurted out that the lady was lying, and Mina just smiled sweetly, asking what she meant about the membership price. The girl's voice shook as she insisted that even an A-rank adventurer had to cough up 15 million gil for it. The girl insisted it was only half of what she'd handed over, and she did it on purpose. Mina stared at her and shot back, yeah, obviously, you did it on purpose. Mina leaned in and said she'd even toss him an extra reward for finishing her job, then paused, smirked, and admitted she was probably starting with about 1 billion. The assistant blared, do you really want to give me 1 billion? Is that too much? And Mina shot back, no, it's barely enough, way too little. Then he revealed the payoff was 10 times the money she put in. Mina grinned wide and declared it was totally worth the risk. Then the assistant stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Mina thought of what Mrs. Mina always said, when she told you to take a risk, she never missed. And that's why he made her say it. The girl swore she understood everything and would start right away. Myra shot back a thank you. Then she slid into a chair by the window and stared at the bottle of elixir. The girl swore it was ready, this pale green spiritual potion, the one meant for when Eldo shattered the dragon, and she promised without a doubt that he'd become the world's strongest adventurer. Mina nodded as the girl said, no, he's already here. Then she tipped her gaze to the sky and grinned like crazy, practically vibrating with anticipation for her next meeting with Eld. The ogres surged toward the boy, grinning like monsters and flashing razor-sharp teeth, and Eldo's stomach tightened as he realized they were moving way faster than anyone should have guessed. He kept reasoning in panic. If he hesitated, it was over for him, so he had to act, and then he spotted a narrow passage between the towering mountains. Eldo sprinted ahead, convinced he was herding everyone onto a narrow way through, and he bellowed at the ogres to back off so they wouldn't swarm closer. Anyone had to help him. The orcs grinned ear to ear, already daydreaming about crushing that man. Then the monsters surged after Eld, charging onto a skinny path and ripping through the air with a brutal roar. The guy blasted fire across their entrance and exit, trapping the orcs inside. Eldo's fury flared as he vowed he'd knock them all down with one blow, and he yelled at them to go for it. He blasted a 5 times amplified flame column, and the orcs shrieked as they clawed to push through the fire, while Eldo's roared at them to stop. He hurled a fireball at them, and the orcs crumpled to the ground, so the boy figured it was finally over, until a brutal ogre lunged from the smoke, and his heart nearly stopped realizing he was still alive. The ogre swung for him, but the boy drove his sword straight in, then the monster went still. He spun his head over the battlefield, scanning for any other ogre that might have slipped through and survived. Eldo let out a heavy breath and admitted he hadn't touched a sword in ages. But even so, that last ogre was stronger than every one of his kind. The guy kept insisting that in the VVO there's also a difference in how hard the body is, but it's not that dramatic. And with the Garden of Despair, it's the same mess, so he has to pull himself together again. Eldo planted himself before the forest and swore he'd start with magic search. Then the guy scanned the trees and reported nobody was around, so Eldo went straight for magic invisibility. Eldo blared, this is awesome, now I can go. Then boom, an explosion tore through the air as the guy hauled the ogres' bodies onto the magic circle, using it to send them straight to the guild. He said there were around 20 of them, and he figured he'd turn back while his magic was still intact. So Eldo marched into town, crossing that suspension bridge like he meant it. The man on watch roared at the boy that he'd really come back, and somehow he'd dodged those ogres like it was nothing. Eldo stared back at him. He roared that no, he'd filled the forest, already wiping out around 25 of them, and when the man blinked in shock, he admitted it. Those ogres were supposed to be impossible to beat. The girl in the guild burst out cheering that he'd wiped them all out, and honestly that was insanely cool, because nobody had ever pulled it off before. Then she stared at him up close like she was hunting for proof. She snapped that it looked like he didn't bring a single piece of proof of the elimination, and Eldo just awkwardly admitted she was right. He'd gathered it all with his own abilities. The girl demanded to know what he'd collected them for, and Eldo just said yes. Then a portal tore open and bodies of ogres started tumbling through. The girl shrieked, why are there ogres here? Eldo swore it was a magic collection, so she demanded what kind, and he answered 25 ogres. Her jaw dropped as she shot back, you killed all 25. She tried to walk out, saying she couldn't make sense of any of this anymore. Then she said she'd go straight to the head of the department. Eldo froze, wondering if he'd somehow drawn way too much attention. Eldo kept wrestling with that thought. No matter how Marius snapped at him not to do it, guilt didn't exactly keep you humble now, especially when you were fresh out of the newbie pile. Eldo still heard her saying, if you want to climb ranks, stand out, lend a hand, and then you might finally qualify. The girl burst back into the room, yelling that she was sorry for keeping him waiting, then panicked that there wasn't enough space and begged him to come with her to the warehouse. Elda shot back that it was perfect, and the two of them rolled up to a huge gate that stood wide open, while the warehouse loomed big inside the cave, so the girl grinned and said, we made it. They burst into the warehouse, and the guy swept the room with his eyes, grinning and saying it was huge, so the girl just smiled back and said, yeah, it's like this because monsters always come swarming in around here. When he spotted them, this man erupted into joyful shouts, you're here. And relief flooded his face as they finally came to him because he was the head of the Jikas branch, and he never once imagined anyone could actually beat the ogres. The man claimed he was Eldo the adventurer, and Jikas said they could finally start hauling the ogres over. Then Eldo just shrugged, okay, and waved it through. The girl whipped around to face the department head before he could even show up with whatever cool thing he had planned. Then she blurted, stunned, what are you about to show me? Eldo grinned, snapped his fingers, and a portal tore open, ogres tumbling out like they'd been waiting for the signal. He grinned and bragged that those were the hungry ogres he'd slaughtered today. Jikas blurted in shock, and the guy demanded, what is this? Eldo shot back that it was magic gathering, power to snatch objects and hurl them into another dimension. Then Jackas started flipping through his book. He said this was the first time he'd ever heard about it, and the guild database showed absolutely nothing on him. So Jekkies exploded with a loud shout that this was the discovery of the century because he'd just uncovered something truly incredible. He demanded to know if the boy could take it straight to the guild's headquarters, and Eldo leaned in, hanging on every word, asking the man what would happen if he actually did. Jacobus said that once the guild dissected the ability inside its own halls, they'd finally open it to the public. Sure, it'd take years of careful testing, but the payoff would be massive. Eldo figured Mina's help meant he didn't need to worry about money for now. But once this power spreads, adventurers will have a way easier time hunting. The boy insisted it really was great, and Eldo told Zekom, the department head, that it was a blessing he could handle it. Then Zekom lit up and said he was genuinely grateful. He figured that once this ability caught on, the guild wouldn't be able to stay shocked every time he pulled it off, especially after the adventurers in the guild started mastering it. Jikum said it would be way easier to handle places like the Garden of Despair, then admitted he owed Eldo big time. Eldo only smiled back, and Jikum told him they could finally drop that talk and get the ogres from him. He even flashed the guild card and Eldo nodded, saying it was all good. Zikum grinned and told him he'd just stunned him by actually taming ogres, something you'd only expect from a D-rank rookie. Then the guy froze in shock before bolting out, I'm a rookie. Zikum leaned in and demanded if this whole thing was some kind of mistake, and Eldo snapped back, nope, yeah, I'm a wizard. But since I'm judged by the ball profession, they treat me like a newbie, my real calling is sage. Zekum demanded to know why they were treating him like a rookie, then pointed at the profession ball like it should have lit up, right? Eldo said it did, and Zekum could only think, yeah, but I never even tried. Eldo begged for a chance to use a wizard's power, even asking if they could make him look like one. Then the man stared at his card with a heartbreaking sadness. He said the only way to register is with the profession ball, no other option exists, even though it used to be possible before. Eldo leaned in, hungry to know why it can't be done anymore. Jacob shot back, yeah, ever since Cardinal George took power, the rules have clamped down hard and professions like hero or saint. They're treated like second-rate trash now, but they weren't used to be a reason to discriminate. The man swore he was begging for forgiveness, but the truth was he had almost no power left. Elder shot back, don't worry about that, because what he was asking for was something no one could ever pull off. Aldo couldn't shake the name Cardinal George's. He swore he'd heard it somewhere before, and if this was the guy who dragged the former high powers down, then Aldo was hunting him down to talk face to face. The boy clenched his staff so hard his knuckles ached, praying it wouldn't come to using what he'd learned from the VVO for something far worse, while Jeckham studied the map so closely that his next move felt pre-written. And then he said, this is. He stared at Eldo and said, I can't help you with your profession, but I think I can get you up to rank C. Then he leaned in and asked, so what do you want me to recommend to get you promoted? Zakim shot back, yeah, I've got it. If he wanted to climb ranks, he needed nods from 3 branch heads, and he was already sitting on 2, with the first one coming from the Tizia branch leader. He then said the second one came straight from the head of the capital's department, and Aldo was like, wait, he hardly ever recommends anyone, so what did he do this time? Aldo chewed on it, then blurted out, what did he do? He nodded and told them he'd just finished a job for the Maxia Trading Company. Then Eldo immediately wondered if Mina had handled the recommendation. Zekum told him, look, once I finish this recommendation, Eldo can climb his rank, so yeah, thanks for the help, but I want to get it done ASAP. Zekum sighed, shaking his head in frustration. His current merits couldn't cut it for anything above rank C, and he was done with this unfair system that pushes rank up based on what you do for a living. The girl blurted a full-on alarm, telling him he couldn't say that out loud, and Jikum just stammered that he begged the guy not to repeat what he'd heard. Because if the higher-ups ever found out, Jikum was done for. Eldor nodded and said, "Yeah, that's good." Zekum shot back that even with that snobby attitude, the rank could still climb. If he had real merit, he could push his application to the main headquarters. Eldor froze in shock. He understood it all, clear as day, and with real curiosity he asked what would happen if he wiped every ogre out right here. The girl who led the department stared at him, stunned. Zikum blurted, "No way," with shock ripping through him. How could something like that even happen? Zikum grinned and told the boy they were grateful he even tried. And the girl burst out that if Elda could beat the ogres, then there was a very real chance he'd be allowed to stay here. The man nodded, agreeing she was right, and Eldo leaned in, dying to know if the ogres really were the ones tearing everything apart. Zikum said yes, they were causing damage, but then he took a breath and admitted the real disaster was coming from something else. Jekum said it was all about resettlement. Eldo snapped, "So what's the real issue?" And Jekum explained that the capital had already drafted a plan to abandon the city and relocate everyone elsewhere. He told them straight up there was an order. If the ogres couldn't be beaten, the whole plan would kick in. Nobody felt good about it, and the locals were the least of all. Aldo demanded what that meant, and Zekum snapped back. "Old people still live here. And even if they're gone, the ogres will hit the city all the same, and they'll finish everyone for sure." Jikum snapped that it'd probably be a whole lot easier for the higher-ups. And Eldo shot back, "Wait, doesn't the capital think it's saving us by doing this?" Jikum shot back that they didn't think that way at all. No matter how many times they asked the capital, the reply never changed. "You people will have to figure it out yourselves." The man snapped that the whole plan was just a fancy whim cooked up by the capital's aristocrats. Eldo froze, shocked, and demanded if that's really all it was. And Zekum answered, dead serious, that it was because Arius belonged to Count Megas. He said the people who hated the Count were plotting to smash this place by claiming they were just attacking monsters. And Eldo snapped, asking why Count Mages was hated. Zekum answered that the Count was a genuinely kind soul who even looked out for distant border areas like theirs, and the residents loved him, but the ruling aristocracy never treated him right. The man admitted, voice shaky, that Cardinal Georgis hated him more than anyone, so Eldo instantly thought, "Oh no, it's him again." And then he demanded to know why these aristocrats were tearing into each other like enemies. Zekum shot back that they were fighting back because they refused to let lower professions get trampled, and Count Mages jumped in to back the people at the bottom. He said that the Count pulled in the poor from every corner of the country, welcomed them onto his estates, and handed them real work. Eldo figured that part was obvious, because everyone else hated him for going against the laws they already had. The boy kept on pushing his logic, convinced he'd uncovered something useful, maybe even the spark for a real ally. He looked Zekamo in the eye and told him, "I get it." Even while insisting they'd never have to leave the city, he swore he'd do everything it took. Because Zikum barked that they owed him, and he started getting everything ready so Zikum would have a place to stay. The boy just nodded and said, "Okay, thank you so much." The night crashed in. Elda lay in bed, stared at the ceiling, and let out a heavy sigh, realizing this job demanded way more responsibility than he'd ever imagined. Eldor kept pushing the idea that he had to knock out and get a full night's sleep, because tomorrow he needed every ounce of magic back, especially since the ogre's fight was still burned into his memory. He said today was packed with ridiculous moments, and tomorrow he'd finally slow down and pay attention to life. Because you only get one, and up in the sky the moon was blazing bright. A long-haired man watched a cart roll into his territory, then another man rushed up and hailed him as Count Magus, saying they were back. He bowed to the Count and confessed he was sorry for the delay, then made it clear the supplies meant for the southeasternmost village had finally been delivered. I told him everything was clear and thanked him for his work, and then the man turned to the Count and said he wanted to speak with him, because some low-ranking adventurer had just pulled off the impossible, slaying a sea dragon. Megas grinned and said he was relieved to hear that. The man went even further, telling the Count that this adventurer was a brand new rank F rookie, and even though it sounded impossible, the Maxia Trading Company confirmed the whole story. Megas lit up and said it was just wonderful. He'd love to meet him at least once and maybe even pin their hopes on him too. Meanwhile, Eldo was sprawled in bed, completely clueless, not even realizing Count Megas was talking about him. Elda stepped outside, grabbed his staff, and announced that the magic power was back at last. Then Zekum and the guild secretary marched up, and the girls erupted in screams of pure joy. Jekum asked if Eldor had gotten a good rest, and Eldor nodded, thanking them back, then set off to hunt down where the ogres were gathering, sprouting into the air and flying straight up. Zekum and the girl froze, staring up at the sky in total shock, because they'd never seen anyone fly before, and the man just grinned and said he'd taken off and soared right there. They swore he'd really flown away. Then, while he was gone, Teresa set off alone to hunt for Eldo, and the girls spent the day trying to snag fish from a tiny lake. Eldor soared over the forest and yelled that they had to track down the enemy's lair first. Because the ogres weren't just roaming, they were spawned by their boss, and this time they'd have to cut down every single one. He snapped his head in surprise. 3 travelers were right there, and Eldo swore they were his own, sending reinforcements his way. Then the guy rocketed off to hunt ogres. He said he had to see it right away, because if he circled the area too long, he'd burn through every last bit of strength. Then the guy snapped his gaze downward and roared, "That's it." Elda dropped down, flung out magic to light up everything, and stared into the ravine right at the huge tree's roots. Then he heard footsteps, and the ogres came as a whole pack. A massive ogre loomed there, and even his normal-sized kin stood nearby. Then Eldos jerked in shock and yelled that this was the Ogre King, which meant if they were all gathered here, this had to be their lair. The guy started to walk away, swearing he'd found where it was. Maybe he'd better turn back and prep properly. Then Eldo stormed into the village and the screams hit him like a punch. Someone dared him to think he couldn't see through them, and before he could respond, the square was packed with people. He marched up to the guild's secretary standing right there and demanded to know what was going on. The girl jabbed a finger at the 3 guys, and the tallest one barked that they'd already spilled everything. People should leave Arias. Eldo blurted in shock, "Wait, what do you even mean by that?" Another guy shoved a paper in front of everyone and yelled that it was all right here, an order stamped by the main capital church, and that they weren't guessing, they were carrying it out. The paper even stated the execution method was up to the executors to decide. He roared that basically their orders were the same as the capital's, free Arias at any cost. Zekum gasped in horror, yelling that this was pure nonsense. People were screaming that the capital would never dare issue a cruel order like that because they couldn't leave right now. Outside, the whole world was packed with ogres. One man finally blurted out, "What are they even doing out there?" His friend grinned and shut him down, "No more nonsense." And yeah, they hadn't run into a single ogre on the way here. Eldo figured it was because he'd already wiped every ogre in the area clean. The man barked at them to shut up and stop spouting nonsense. Time to get ready right now. Close by, Jizikum kept ranting that it was all stupid, and the guy snapped back that it was just an ugly, unpleasant mess. The man stared at Eldo in shock. He never even saw him coming. Zekum said that if this truly was a capital order, they had no choice but to handle these men. Eldo warned that Count Meiji's mess could spiral even worse, while Jekyll dragged out a tired, low voice about what they should do next. Then one of the men yanked out his sword and demanded, "What are you doing here?" He bellowed for them to move. Then the man swung his sword and sliced straight through barrels and boxes packed with their food, while the woman shrieked at the top of her lungs that those were their precious supplies. He grinned like a villain and snapped, "What's wrong?" Because it was all over anyway. The woman crumpled to her knees and wailed, "It's a nightmare." Then she confessed it was a generous gift from Count Migas. Eldo snapped a brutal hanging spell. Magic flared in a circle beneath the man's feet, a rope surged up and choked him, and his head slammed hard into the rocks. The rope snapped loose and he dropped like a stone. Eldo threw up a landing spell, and the man hit the ground hard but walked away uninjured. His friends screamed, demanding to know what just happened, while the man lay knocked out on the ground. Eldo stepped in and admitted, "I did it," because he couldn't stand watching any longer. Jacob looked worried and said it wasn't needed, but Eldor snapped back that there was no way they'd meet their demands, then told him not to worry because he'd handle it. The man fumed and demanded, "Who do you think you are?" Elda snapped back, "I'm just a D-rank rookie." Then the man erupted in laughter and roared that no ordinary rookie would ever dare act like that. Elder nodded and said, "Yeah, it's true people with higher levels can't tap into the same abilities I pull off." Then he smirked like it was a secret punchline, "So that means I'm lower than some newbie." The man roared at the newbie to quit getting cocky, but Eldo just smiled and snapped back, "Truth, that's all it was," until the man flared with rage and screamed that Eldo should die. He lunged at him with a spear, but Eldo blasted him with the spell *power strike ***, and the attacker snarled, "What a problem." They claimed they were guards, yet they acted so. Eldo seethed, saying he didn't think they'd stand a chance protecting the villagers from the ogres. Then the boy snapped back, "You're not protecting them." The man stared in shock, "Wait, how do you know that?" And Eldo drove his staff into his face with everything he had. The man crumpled to the ground beside his friend, and Eldo barked that they were weaklings no matter what, now let it go, while also telling their client they didn't have to keep sending Arias away anymore. Eldo said it straight, a rank C rookie adventurer would wipe out every last ogre. Then the man yanked his friends and bolted, screaming like his life depended on it, telling them, "You'll remember us." Elder watched those bandits bolt out of the village, and he muttered that it was the first time he'd ever heard anyone throw out lines like that for real. Right then, Giacomo sprinted straight up to the guy. Eldo stared the man down and told him, "I'm sorry for the trouble. If anything goes wrong, blame it on some wandering adventurer." He couldn't believe it. He'd actually drawn attention like this, and maybe, Just maybe, steering the group's hatred onto him was the smartest play for the city. Jeckham's voice cracked as he said he'd apologize, if only he could fight back. Eldo shook his head and said there was nothing he could do, and he totally understood why Jeckham wouldn't resist orders from above. The boy blurted out that something felt horribly wrong, like this move was a trap from the start. And Zickham practically bounced with excitement, demanding what he meant by setup. Eldo leaned in and asked if the man knew about the artificially made monster called Devil's Poison, and Zickham stammered out that he didn't. Eldo said her power turns every monster in the area where she's buried into a raging beast, so they don't just get more violent, they grow stronger too. The boy admitted it had been gnawing at him since the very first fight. Our hunting grounds were wiped out. They were so overstuffed with bodies that they even started prowling near people, and the ogres would be gone soon. Eldo then added that while this was happening, a forced relocation plan was already unfolding, and he was sure it looked like everything had been staged. Zickham snapped in disbelief. Wait, the capital did this? Elder admitted that they claimed they were just following the capital's orders, but it smelled like a bluff meant to pump up their power. Eldo kept pushing, insisting this plan had to be haters of Count Meiji's, and whoever's behind it, Jeckham tried to argue, stammering that it just couldn't be. Eldo hesitated, but once he sized up this whole operation, he knew the organizers had to be pulling some serious strings. Maybe even Cardinal Georges had planned it. Zickham blurted, "Am I crazy? Even as their hatred for Count Magus burned hot, why would they go that far?" Eldo shot back, "I'm just guessing." He said that's exactly why he wanted this talk to stay between them, and Zickham shot back, "Yeah, you've got that right." Eldo just nodded because deep down it was all about opportunity. He kept arguing with himself that acting was smarter, because when you're dealing with terrible poison in the VVO, you plan for the worst or you're done. She was a monster only the Garden of Despair could birth, and if she was linked to George's, then this world was crumbling toward its final day, step by terrifying step. Eldo leaned in and told Zekamu, "After I finish this, you'll owe me a favor." Zekamu just smirked and said he'd give Eldo anything he wanted. Eldo swore he was just grateful. Really, it wasn't a request at all. He only wanted Zekamu to introduce him to Count Migas, and when Zekamu's eyes lit up, he grinned, of course. He told him he just knew the Count would be happy to meet him, and he was still locked in on his choice. Count Magus was in open conflict with Cardinal Georges, and befriending a man like that could be everything or ruin him. Eldo cut him off and snapped, "Yes," then said he'd join Count Migas because he wouldn't let Cardinal George run wild, and Jeckham's smile lit up the whole room. He said he'd be just as grateful if Count Meiji's would back him too. And once you count him in, every guild branch has plenty of employees who still can't stand Cardinal Georgius, blaming him for the way the whole profession system has crumbled. He said he'd get good friends to roll out the red carpet for him, and if he needed anything while he was here, he should let him know right away. Eldor just nodded, "That works." The boy straight up asked Jeckham to get him a huge stash of oil. Then Jeckham gasped, thinking, "If I scrape the whole village, I'll finally have enough for what you need." The man leaned in, curious, and demanded why he needed that much oil. And the guy stared straight into Zekamu's eyes, smiling as he swore he'd torch the entire forest, monsters and all. Zekamu shouted that he wanted to torch the forest, but Eldo slammed back, saying there was nothing to fear. He wasn't going to burn everything. The guy swore he'd only set their lair on fire, and Zekama snapped back, "That's it." The man bolted out fast so Eldo could catch up. He'd bring the oil next. Eldor said he truly thanked her for all the help with the preparations, then watched as a man rolled a cart piled with butter, while the guild secretary rode right along, jumping in to help him. Jacob said he was begging forgiveness for the wait, swearing this was the finest oil he could find. One drop would scorch the sky itself, and Eldo shot back, "I'm so grateful." The boy insisted on locking it in the magic vault, and Zekham shouted back that it was fine. Then Eldo tore open a portal, and they started pouring oil into it. The girl snapped in shock as oil gushed in, then shot a worried look, "Tell me it won't overflow." Eldo shrugged it off and said everything was under control, there'd be plenty of room. The guy insisted it was smarter not to lug it around in barrels. Why waste time when he could just pour it out the moment he needed to? Jekyll stared in awe and called it unbelievably convenient, and then Eldo tipped the barrel and declared it was the very last one. The boy met Secretary Enzakami's eyes, thanked her for everything, and turned to leave. Then the girl erupted, screaming for him to stop and wait. She pointed out that the sun was already dropping below the horizon, and it was way too risky to head out now. Then Elda shot back, "No problem." Turns out she had a skill that came in clutch after dark, and honestly it was even more useful at night. Zickham demanded, "You're sure?" And the kid nodded, saying ogre hunts usually happen in daylight. Zickham exploded, "Got it," and immediately set his sights on unleashing a surprise attack. Elder said he'd try to pull it off, but nerves were buzzing in his chest. Zeckham rubbed his head and told him he got it, then warned him to be careful. Eldo said it was fine and that it was time to move. Then the boy shot off and flew straight at the ogres. Zeckham admitted he was counting on the adventurer Eldo, while the girl started praying hard that everything would go right. Eldol stared down the ogre settlement, and the guy swore there were a few sentries here. So he'd slip in, scout the enemy's positions first, and blast a magic search spell to find them. He spotted where all the ogres had piled up. Eldo said there were dozens of regular ones, and the Ogre King was the only true boss, so if they stuck to the plan, he'd blow through the whole thing fast. He said it was time to go, and Aldo yanked open the storage where the oil was burning. Then the guy looped around the whole tree like a madman, making sure the oil spread perfectly, and once Aldo was done, the guy bolted off from the tree. Eldo shrieked that the only thing left to do was light it, then shot up to the ogre, swung the torch, and drove a kick straight into his face. The ogre crumpled, the torch clattered and lodged in a tree, and Eldo bolted away instantly before the monster could even strike back. Flames swallowed the entire tree as Eldo yelled, "It's burning perfectly!" And then they'd slip out through the passage he'd carved because the ogres started bursting out of the tree. Eldor grinned perfect, he'd smashed their lair with barely any mana, and he hurled a sticky bomb spell. The ogre lunged right into it and got stuck, unable to move a muscle. Eldo shot his staff up and roared that he was unleashing the attack field, ice field, then ice enchantment, before the other guy slammed down a massive rock and cast giant meteor. The rock smashed down on every ogre and crushed them flat. Eldo went, "That was awesome." Then the rock shoved the towering ogre aside and burst out of the tree, and the guy instantly declared boss fight time. The ogre stared at Eldo as he hovered in the sky, ripped off half a tree trunk and swung for his head. Eldo juked out of the hit at the last second. Then Eldo froze, staring at what one blow from the Ogre King could do. He figured the monster wouldn't fight the same way as World War II. Back in the game, it just barrels in with raw brute force, smashing you head-on with the arena itself. And then the ogre slammed into the rock and shattered it, flinging massive chunks straight at Eldo. He drew a magic circle to lock in safety, and Eldo seethed, no doubt this was trouble. The boy spun the spell back, snapping each stone away, and when the monster slammed the rock again, the shattered pieces exploded straight at the man. Eldo fired a fireball straight at him, and it slammed into the monster's face. Yet all it did was make him scratch his cheek like it had been a mosquito bite, and the guy snarled with pure anger. He seethed to himself that his own toughness wasn't the only thing carrying him. Demon worm poison had forged him stronger. Still, he could see an escape route, and the monster swung again, slamming for another blow. The monster slammed the rock again, and chunks blasted toward Eldo, but he swerved with a windrun spell, streaked across the ground, and then drove a full-force kick straight into the monster's face. The monster yawned open its mouth, and the boy blasted it with a spell explosion. Wham! The ogre's head popped like a firecracker, and it crumpled onto the burning tree. Eldo realized that even if his poison made him strong, he'd still be basically doomed if that fire chewed him up from the inside. He kept insisting it only worked because he was massive and slow, like Windrun was made for slipping past dodges and ambushes. But then he remembered the ugly truth. It's a dash, and dashes make your next move painfully easy to read. Elder gaped at the magic circle blazing above his head, then erupted in shock. This can't be real. Because right after he crushed the boss, another one spawned. He stared at the monster that had appeared, and declared it an ogre emperor. Then it sprang onto a massive stone, stamped fresh footprints into it, and the next second he tore the whole thing apart with his bare hands. Eldol couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how you spun it, he was a walking threat. Then he snatched a tree branch and dropped onto it. Across the way, the guy stared at the ogre, and rage flashed in his mind as he realized the so-called king wasn't just an ogre, he was an ogre emperor now. He kept pushing the logic, insisting this wasn't like the VVO at all. Could it really be their doing? If they could summon a boss monster, then there was no way he could ignore it anymore. Eldo realized he had to take this guy down first. Then the monster snapped a spell and boom, there he was, Eldo stuck up in a tall tree. The guy nearly choked on disbelief when the monster pulled out search magic. Then it barreled straight for Eldo and smashed its head through the tree he was hiding in, while Eldo somehow slipped into the ogre's main tree. The ogre smashed the tree to draw out Eldo, and right then the guy loosed a flaming arrow, thinking this one strike would burst into flames and swallow the enemy whole. He decided to test himself first, and the ogre just snatched the arrow out of the air with his bare palms. Eldo yelped in shock because the ogre was already reaching to use it first. The boy figured the Ogre King would finally feel that hit, because the demon worm's poison was pure nightmare fuel beyond anything he'd ever imagined. Now he couldn't afford to lose it, not when he still had the lessons he'd learned in the VVO. The boy kept insisting that the experience he'd earned in this world meant he could take it on. Then Eldo raised his bow and slammed another volley of fire arrows into the monster. The ogre wiped out everyone. Then Eldo's grinned and snapped a magic circle down right beside the monster, blasting it with a spellfire pillar so the ogre's whole head caught fire and it screamed at the top of its lungs. Eldo's grinned and said it was great, and he figured he hadn't hurt the monster too badly. Now he could finally breathe and think. Then the monster slapped its own face and stared at Eldo's. Eldo barked in furious rage that surely there had to be a way to stop him, even with that crazy high magic defense. Then the other guy lit up, remembered a trick, and cheered, yeah, that'll work for sure. Elda figured he could claw his way out alive. He'd need to make a move using the boss's material, because the moment he looked at that guy, the monster grinned with its head blazing in flames. The boy shut his heart to pity for the ogre. Eldo then cast a spell everyone swore was forbidden, and the boy snapped into a fighting stance, blasting out that he'd unleashed magical erosion. Eldor flicked a spell that burst out like shimmering dust. An ogre lunged to grab it, but the cloud slipped right through his hands, and the whole monster ended up coated in magic dust. The boy stared at the ogre's agony and realized the magical erosion wasn't just a hit. It was a spell that punched through the enemy's body, twisted his magic from the inside, and wiped him out. Eldo kept thinking it through. This spell is called forbidden for a reason. Anyone inside the attack radius gets hit, no matter who they are except the caster. So before you even cast it, you'd better sweep the area with a magic search and make sure nobody's lurking nearby, because once you use it, the boss's material gets snapped up and destroyed. And in World War II, forget raids, this spell was straight up banned. Yeah, it's got a pile of downsides, but right here there's no better move. This spell was made to smash the demon worm's poison dead on its true countermeasure. The ogre's arm turned rock hard, snapped right off the monster's body, and the creature stared at the limb in stunned disbelief. Eldo figured the poison supercharged every monster nearby, so their magic would soak into him easier, and those twisted, distorted magic powers would get swallowed too. The monster dropped to its knees and howled at the top of its lungs. Then Eldo hurled the forbidden spell again, and the boy stared at the burning tree, realizing the flames could leap to the next one. Eldo yelled that they had to choke out the flames fast. Then the ogre shot to its feet, glaring at the boy with pure fury, and Eldo roared, "That's it, end this," as he screamed and hurled the spell again. The ogre swung his fist at the boy with everything he had, but before it could connect, his other arm was ripped clean off and the monster crashed to the ground. Eldo had beaten the ogre emperor. Eldo panted like crazy, stared down the fallen monster and blurted out in disbelief, "Thank goodness he'd won," then turned to the fire and tossed the ogre straight into his magical warehouse. He said, "All right, now I'll handle the firefighting because the ogres are finally done." It was a real shame he couldn't squeeze anything out of the ogre emperor, but he figured the dead bodies of the normal ogres and even the ogre king would be more than enough. He spotted a crystal on the ground and blurted out, thrilled, that it was the Stone of Wisdom. Then immediately assumed the drop from a monster he'd beaten with magic erosion would almost certainly be ruined in quality. He kept telling himself he was lucky to snag a rare material, and Eldo snapped back that the job wasn't done yet. You still had to clean up. So he bolted through the forest and launched a spell to search. He spotted the vase's location and burst out laughing, yelling that this was exactly where the demon worm's poison was hiding. Then Elder slammed a pillar of ice into the ground to smash the curse. He blared, "This is awesome, now the monsters won't be so vicious." Then glared into the forest, seeing that no ogres remained anywhere in this area. Elbow couldn't stop spiraling over one question. Could you really predict when the ogre emperor would show up, even after the ogre king was already wiped out? And if that was possible, how hard could his VVO knowledge hit the enemies standing in this world right now? The guy shrugged and said there was no point in racking his brains, time to head back. Back at the guild, the girl lunged at Zekum, grabbed his shoulders, and shook him as hard as she could. The secretary shrieked that she was begging him to wake up, furious that Mr. Eldo was stuck battling alone, while he mumbled, dead tired, that he understood it all. Yet he still couldn't force himself to get up. Eldo stood beside the girl, grinning like the sun was already blazing overhead, and Zekum muttered, "Fine, I'm getting up now." Then the secretary and Zekum erupted in shock. Eldo was back. Zekum sprang out of his chair and barked that he felt wrecked, then pushed Eldo to say if he'd gotten hurt. Eldo answered that the battle spot was just plain lousy. The guy grinned and told them not to worry. He'd already wiped out every last enemy. And then the secretary and Zekum joyfully tackled Eldor, showering him with hugs. Eldo slumped and muttered that he was asking for forgiveness. Only this time his own body finally gave up. The guy crumpled straight to the floor, knocked out, and the girl erupted into a scream, bursting with excitement over what just happened. The sun dipped and Eldo snapped his eyes open, then blurted, "What happened? Where am I?" The other guy jolted upright, scanning the room like a cornered man, and Eldo mumbled that this was Elia's tavern. The whole world hit him hard because he looked totally wiped out. The girl burst into the room grinning and shouted, "He's awake." But the guy had been stuck like that for 2 whole days, and worry was already creeping into her chest as she decided, "I'm going to tell the boss everything." She told him, "If you're hungry, the food's ready, come on down." The second she finished, Elda's stomach let out a massive growl. He dressed in a rush and bolted out of the room. The girl beamed at him, waving like she'd just won. She yelled up to Zekum on the second floor, calling out that Eldor had finally arrived, and Zekum shouted back that he was feeling better now. Zekum blurted out how thankful he was for the way he handled the ogres, and his heart was still packed with words he needed to say, until one gentleman insisted he meet him. Eldo stared at the man in shock, then the Count suddenly blurted that Eldo's newest arrival was right here. The guy asked carefully and cautiously who Eldo really was, and the man headed down the stairs. Megas stepped up to Eldo with a grin and said, "Nice to finally meet you, I'm Megas." He was a humble Count from the borderlands, and yeah, he was a genuinely great man. Eldo's mumbled that the Count had traveled farther than anyone could have imagined, and Maki fired back, "I got a letter from the city's guild, so I came here to help." The Count grinned and said he'd been waiting forever to meet a guy like Eldo, the manager having already raved about him as the ultimate new face. Then he leaned in and told Eldo to come sit with him. Megas shot his hand out and blurted that Eldo's help was the one thing he needed right now. Because with them on the same side, they could smash the Georgie's era and finally make life better for everyone. Eldo's grinned, yanked the Count's hand up in his grip and blared that yes, he agreed. Because Jorga's was in his liver too, and the Count thanked him loudly for helping wipe Jorga's out. The Count leaned in and told them they had a lot to settle, so they should talk over food. Meg East shot a look at the secretary and the man and declared that a real feast was ready for him. He said it'd be a real shame if all that food ever went cold, and Eldo lit up and said, "Thank you." With a grin, he'd eat it in a heartbeat. Then the guy finally sat down at the table and stared at the entire spread in pure stunned surprise. He grinned and blurted, "Wow." And she laughed with a huge smile, telling him they'd made tons of food, no more shyness now, dig in and eat your fill. Jeckum told them he thought they should talk in private, then the men stepped out. The Count nodded, thanking him for understanding, and Medes and Eldo slid into their seats facing each other. The Count told the boy, "First, let me thank you, because those ogres are a real threat." And while he was already pulling together a squad to handle them, the boy showed up out of nowhere and just crushed the whole problem. Megas set a tiny chest right in front of the boy and declared the village was saved because of it, then insisted he take it as payment, even though Megas never asked for anything in return. Veldo yanked open the chest and blurted in shock that it was the Stone of Wisdom, and he immediately decided he wanted to give it away since he'd already got a whole stash of them. The Count shot back that he had no clue what it even was for. The Count leaned in and said he'd heard Eldo was sniffing around the Stones of Wisdom. Plus, this was his way of saying thanks for wiping George's people out, because now they'd finally talk about what really mattered. Megas told Eldo he had to know, Jorgas absolutely despises him, not just to keep his subordinates in line, but because Eldo stopped him to say it. Jorgas is working with the Lodge of Despair. The boy admitted he didn't have proof, but he was pretty sure something was off. Then the Count turned to Eldo, eyes wide because Eldo already knew a lot. Eldo just said he believed it could be true, even if he wasn't ready to swear it yet. The Count leaned in and told Eldo he just knew he was right. His own men had seen George's subordinates trade words with the Lodge of Despair. And then Georges turned around and swept his men away so nobody could ever grab the proof. Megas admits they're still pulling strings behind the scenes. Both sides are pushing to get stronger, but something has to happen fast before this whole thing spirals out of control. Eldo snapped a firm no, they shouldn't rush. The Count stared at him stunned and asked what he meant, and Eldo shot back that this time they'd brewed a special poison meant to lure the monsters in and bring them all together. Eldor leaned in and admitted it. He was behind why the monsters here were so brutal, and once they wiped out this town, they'd barrel to the next, then the next, until there was nothing left. The Count gasped, insisting it was the truth now. But the damage was already done, and it felt unbearable. Eldo shook his head and said, "No, that's not the worst of it, there's something far worse coming." He snapped in rage, saying they butcher people to turn their souls into magic, and warning about a spell that could unleash a massive disaster. Mickey stared at the boy in shock as Eldo shrugged and said George's followers kept climbing. Because once they join, the bed of despair will spark a magical catastrophe, and then the world ends. The Count roared that this couldn't possibly be real and demanded if magic like that even existed. Eldo snapped back that it was the absolute truth, so why would he ever lie? Mega snapped how in the world could that even happen? But when he pushed Eldo for his source, the answer hit hard. Eldo said he learned it back at the place he studied, and that place is gone now. Eldo said everything he'd heard so far lined up with what they were doing, so the worst was the safest guess, and Migos nodded, yeah, it made sense. But if the enemy was strong, it still didn't mean they'd throw in the towel. Eldo leaned in and begged the Count for even the smallest chance to win, because the bed of despair was already a nightmare, and with Georges in the picture, what hope did they really have? The Magus snapped back that he was right, so the first move wasn't to take them down. It was to crush their footing first, and he was already prepared to throw his life away. Eldo stared at him, shocked, because the Count just announced that Jorgas's cruelty toward the lower classes was getting challenged. Magus said this is exactly why they pushed Milia's flame spear up to Amma's rank. Then Eldo snapped in shock like, "Wait, you mean you actually attracted Milia?" The Count finally admitted that, for the first time, the mighty Georges couldn't take down an S-rank monster alone. And now he needed her help, so yeah, every adventurer is buzzing about it. Eldos flashed a grin and said, "All right, that's great news." He figured Storm Dragon's defeat really paid off, then the Count reminded him it didn't lock in his decision forever, he might still change his policy later. Manga snapped that a simple flaming spear wasn't enough, and that Eldo's win would be the spark. With Eldo and the newcomer both crushing it, everyone would start buzzing about changing the system for good. The Count said he'd start spreading rumors about his own achievements to poison the system, and Eldo snapped back, asking if he was really sure. It was basically like declaring war on Georgius. Then the guy swore he'd stop hiding behind work. He'd step out in the open and they could just kill him straight up, and Miggy shot back fine. He kept insisting this would prove George's malice was just overflowing with hostility again, and if his sacrifice could finally turn everyone against him, then honestly, he wouldn't mind dying. The Magus swore this chance had never come before, and now was the moment to flip everything upside down. Eldo figured that was the Count's real play, nodded along and said it sounded brilliant, but it had cracks in the plan. The Count studied him with sharp interest, and Eldo snapped back that luck was just too big a variable. His odds of pulling it off sat at roughly 30%. The boy blurted out, "Is the chance of winning so tiny we shouldn't risk the fate of the world?" And Magus shouted back, "I get it, but I don't have a choice because they're way stronger than us." Ello said with total confidence that hitting George's more directly was the way to go. Go after his weak spots and wipe them out with way less effort. The Count demanded to know why they hadn't acted sooner, because they already understood his weak spots. Then Eldo fumbled an apology asking for forgiveness, but the moment still fell flat. Magus said he believed that. Eldo shot back that he just hadn't uncovered his weaknesses yet. Because Eldo was a nobleman too, just like Georgius, and that meant he was about to fire off a few questions. The Count shot back, "Of course you can ask me anything." Eldo leaned in and demanded, "Then why does Georgius have so much power?" He pointed out the obvious. In a kingdom, the king should rule with the biggest clout, so why did Georgius' words hit harder than the king's? The boy said the cardinal's seat should rank right behind the top spot in the church, so why not? Magus snapped back that he was just a lowly aristocrat with no real power. He kept going, saying he'd grabbed that kind of power about 5 years ago, after one brutal incident. The king and a nobleman both got hit by a terrifying epidemic, and Georges stepped in with a panacea that saved them. Aldo leaned in and asked what kind of panacea this was, and Magus snapped back that it could cure any disease, straight up, no confusion. Then the boy nodded, saying it existed in the VVO, and grilled him. So that cure was ridiculously valuable, right? The Count nodded and said, yeah, the materials were nearly impossible to find. So Georges, the guy who brought the panacea, got stamped as an aristocrat by the royal court. Magus went on that Georges had climbed so high he was a top aristocrat, even recognized by the king himself. Now he's convinced he pulled it off with the Garden of Despair, but if you spill that secret to anyone, they'll just laugh you off. The Count kept insisting he'd spill the truth about you, that you were jealous of Georgie, while he poured more and more power into his hands, locking up medicines with a ruthless monopoly. And now even the royal family can't get them unless they play by his rules. Elder said it was obvious, no extra words. Then he pressed the Count like, so that's your weakness, right? And Migai snapped back, blasting loudly, what are you even saying now? Elbow claimed he could mass-produce healing potions and every kind of medicine, and the boy fired back. Then why don't we use your strength to turn George's weakness against him? Megas roared that he wasn't joking anymore. Now he'd finally land the rare Bradrana herb, and once he had it, he could crank out medicine for everyone. Eldo said probably, but Magus nearly choked on disbelief. Still, since it was Eldo saying it, Magus had to buy it, because this guy had already pulled off too many insane feats to doubt. Negus claimed he'd grasped it all, then swore he'd hold his hands for now, while he begged Eldo to let him make a panacea, and Eldo answered with full confidence that he could. Inside the castle, the king lounged on his throne while a servant dropped to one knee and announced, Georges wants an audience. The king snapped, bring him in. Then a towering man strode into the hall. Georges said, we haven't seen each other in ages. Then the man dropped to one knee in front of the king, snapped the order for him to stand, and straight up asked Georges why he'd come back. Georges asked to hand the soldiers their gear, and the king snapped, are you ready to throw it into battle? But the man shook his head, saying not yet because he didn't want any nasty surprises to blow up. The king said he wanted to beg for forgiveness, but he couldn't hand the kingdom's gear or soldiers over to any noble. Then Georgius snapped, so what did you forget? Because he was alive only because of him. The king paused, then nodded, yeah, that's fine. He declared the knights would fall under his command, and Georgius just waved it off. Don't stress, this is all to keep peace in the kingdom. Elda strode into a herbal shop and asked the shopkeeper if he carried Samenta Teyumame. When the man blinked in shock, he gasped, you want Teyumame? The man admitted he had some, but it was only fit for feeding cattle, and he demanded, why do you even need that? Eldo snapped back that it was just for the kingdom's bright future. Eldo and Migas started to scatter, and the Count pulled the boy aside to thank him again, because if that medicine could be mass-produced, it could keep many more people alive. Mega snapped that since Jorgus owned the only medicine supply, he was gouging everyone with insane prices. Then Eldo shot back, "Don't thank me for anything yet." The Count snapped that he was right, then apologized for being so damn happy, like, "First things first, we need a Bradonna grass plantation." But yeah, they still hadn't figured out how to pull that off. Eldo shot back that he didn't think he could, and the Count leaned in, all curiosity, asking what he'd do next. Then the man blurted out with blazing excitement that he truly, desperately wanted to take over his plantation. The boy shot back, "No way, that's way too dangerous." Eldo leaned in and asked if the Count could score seeds from the Burdana, and Magus answered coldly, "There's nothing already grown, but the seeds can be gotten." The Count promised, "If Eldon needs us, we'll be there," and the guy grinned like it was already solved. Then he said, "If there isn't a plantation, I'll build one, then I'll grow the plants myself." Eldo blasted up the waterfall using a flight spell, then set up a magical storage right where the water crashed down. When the guy saw it, he practically cheered that it was perfect and had everything he needed. Eldo said he had to spot the perfect spot. Then he rocketed high above the city and scanned the whole area until he found where everything would be better. Elda figured he'd better find a spot soaked in magic, and staying closer to Elias felt smarter than being stuck where the ogres lived. Then the boy spotted something and beamed, shouting that there was a path outside the city. He believed stable production meant one thing: work by the people. So first, he ordered a real road to be built, and he made sure they started with the fastest route. He shot down this path, and Eldo swore he'd be waiting right there, and the boy couldn't help thinking, "Alright, let's see if this really works asterisk." Because he had to prove to Count Magus that he could be trusted. The boy tossed the seeds down the road, promising, "First I plant the Teyumame seeds, then I'll water them." With a grin, he yanked open the storage and hurled the water cannon spell. The water he'd hauled from the waterfall spilled onto the path, and Eldo warned the seeds were barely scattered. The soil hadn't been tilled, and there just wasn't enough water to make them rot and sprout. The boy swore there'd be no trouble with the Teyumame, and Eldo shot his hands forward like, "First, those seeds have to sprout." Then he cast asterisk magical mockery asterisk. Wolves burst right in front of Eldo, and when he stared at them, he realized the taunt spell must have lured these monsters in. Then the wolves pounced straight onto the guy who'd thrown the ice block spell. All the wolf monsters lay dead, and the boy practically cheered, then begged for forgiveness, admitting he'd have to turn their bodies into fertilizer. Eldo, though, believed the Temame could swallow monsters whole. The guy said it would take time, but for now Eldo could head back to the city. Then 2 days later, boom, the plants sprouted like crazy, and Eldo blurted, stunned, "Already, so many." He added that they grow insanely fast. Eldo ripped out a patch of grass and swore the monsters would turn into fertilizer. Because this is exactly how Teyumame absorbs monsters. Eldo figured that when Teyumame swallowed those monsters, it also gulped up the animal's magical power. Then he bent down, cleared the grass, and scooped the grains into his handkerchief. He grinned and said, "Perfect, I got everything I need." Then Eldo shoved the fire ring into action, scorching the grass he no longer needed, and stared at the burning fire with heavy, exhausted eyes. Eldo believed every step had to be done for the Burdana herb to grow. Because the Teyumame roots soak up magical power, choke out every other plant, and when the Burdana seeds go in, their cover is gone in an instant as the roots devour them fast. The boy said that's why they had to torch the Teyumame roots with fire magic. So he slammed his sword into the dirt, and figured the Bradana grass just couldn't survive in normal soil. Eldo kept pushing his theory. Grass sprouts because it drinks in the magical power monsters leave behind, and once a monster dies, that magic spreads out and fades into the air around it. He said most of that magical power couldn't reach the Bradana grass in its natural form, so just dumping the monster's corpse beside it wouldn't do a thing, until the Teyumame stepped in. He crushed the seeds and scattered them on the ground. Eldo swore the Teyumame had drunk in the monster's magic power, and if he used it as fertilizer, the Bradana grass would finally sprout. Eldo kept flinging seeds into the ground, insisting that the only thing left was to plant the Bradana seeds and wait, because once they sprouted, he'd have them to brew medicine. Eldo grinned at the Burdana grass and said, "There's loads." Then he hustled back to the city and dumped it in front of the Count, while me blurted loud and furious, "Where on earth did all of this come from?" The Count sputtered in disbelief. There was no way this was possible, and yet Eldor had actually done it. Eldor laughed and said, "Yeah, turns out I grew it from the seeds you gave me." Then me guys chimed in, stunned, "So the rumors really were true about you." The Count scooped up the herb and declared, "With this amount, you could make at least 20 preparations. If we can lock in steady production, we're looking at a medicine revolution." Eldo said they'd need space and a whole crew to crank out mass production, and the Count nodded like, "All right." Then Eldo's added, "If you tell me how you did it, I'll give it my all." Jeckum burst into the room and Eldo snapped, "Is there really a road outside the city that leads to Elias?" The man nodded and said, "Yeah, back then it was just a field, so people would just walk that way." The man said nobody uses it anymore, and Eldo snapped, "What do you mean?" Jeckum admitted he figured they could, but he warned that everything over there is choked with weeds, and turning it back into a field would be a brutal fight. The owner kept insisting that a massive stone had landed there, and they'd barely be able to budge it. Eldo pulled out a box with the stone inside and shot back that he'd figure something out. Then just the other day, the Count had handed it to him. Magus blurted, "What is it?" Eldo cut him off and declared it was a wisdom stone, something that could supercharge your skills, while the Count scoffed and insisted it was just a plain old gem. Jackus grinned at Eldo and bragged that he was already strong, then promised he'd get even stronger, and Vigus said they'd ditch the clearing, leaving Eldo there while he hunted down his comrades. The Count stared at the boy and said they'd kick off production, then start selling in the market. Then Aldo shot back, "If we hit that monopoly, we'll crush their power." The boy snapped that if nothing worked, they'd die with their effort, no regrets. While Eldo grilled the Count, asking if he was truly sure he wouldn't back out, and Migos answered without a twitch, saying he was ready. The Count roared that he'd planned to throw his own life at success. Then he'd chosen to give Magus a chance to stay alive, and Eldo stared at him, eyes locked on Magus. He thought the question was dumb, but the Count, who'd burned for his people, couldn't be killed by Georgius, so Eldo and the secretary headed straight down to the city warehouse. Eldo flicked light magic to light the path, then told the girl it was perfectly clear, "From here you'll reach the back." She grinned and confirmed that's right. The secretary said humanitarian aid was already being shipped in from Mr. Maggie. Eldo snapped back in shock and asked if that was really true, and she insisted it was the only way through, perfect for running covert ops without raising alarms. The girl shoved the key into the lock, turned it, and blurted out exactly what she felt. Then remembered the owner had warned him everything there was choked with weeds, and making a field would be a nightmare. They stepped outside and there it was, a giant stone crushing the sun's light. Eldo blurted in shock that it was a real mountain, and the girl fumbled, admitting, "Yeah, this stone must have torn off the nearest peak during the disaster." She told him it was fine to give up even if they just settled down by the stone. Then Elder snapped back, "All good, I'll break it right now." The girl shrieked in shock. What did that mean? Eldo slammed the staff down and unleashed a steam blast, blasting the stone right in the center and blasting dust everywhere. The dust finally cleared and there it was, a stone with a tiny hole dead center. The girl stared at the guy, stunned, speechless. Eldo leaned in and said it was over. No matter how hard he fires, he still can't smash it. The secretary blared that using magic like that without a warning was dead wrong, and Aldo shot back with an awkward, "I'm sorry." He admitted he never thought that stone would actually stand, so he urged her to back away. Then Aldo grinned and promised her the attack would hit even harder now, while the girl dropped onto the grass just a short distance from him. She said it was the first time she'd ever seen one, and the girl pressed, "So what can it do that's even stronger?" Eldo nodded and said, "Yeah, he uses this." Then the guy yanked out a bottle of swirling liquid. The girl demanded to know what it was, and Elder grinned. He'd forged a potion of wisdom with the stone of wisdom and the herb of Bradana the Count had handed him, and once he drank it, his skills would explode higher than ever. The girl stared, stunned, as Eldo chugged that weird drink, and she blurted out that she had no idea you could drink stones. Eldo just shrugged and said they tasted awful. Eltho said the skill was Steam Explosion, now supercharged into Enhanced Steam Explosion, and the boy's hands flared white as he shouted that the prep was done. She'd better vanish fast. The girl shrieked that it felt amazing, then ducked behind a nearby boulder. Elda raised his staff toward the rock and told himself the boosted steam blast was just one notch stronger than the usual one. He kept reasoning that in VVO, it really came down to just one level 1, and that single step was already a massive leap, so he couldn't wait to see how much deadlier his spell had become. Eldo slammed the staff down and blasted a massive burst of steam, boom. So huge the explosion ripped the trees out by their roots and the girls shrieked in terror. Jacob and the Count were hunched at the table when the earth suddenly buckled beneath them, and the owner screamed that it was an earthquake. Elda stared at the massive hole in shock and whispered, "I thought so." Then everything jolted even harder. The girl gasped in pure terror and demanded, "What is that?" Eldor smirked and said the blast he unleashed at the very start wasn't real damage at all, it was just the magic of his first power level. She asked, "Is this magic?" But it sure didn't look like it looked like the earth just threw a tantrum. Eldor admitted he'd messed with that big rock after all, so he ordered them back to the guild. Jeckum stepped up and bragged, "I knew it, the earthquake was me." Eldo snapped back, "I'm sorry for the shock, but you needed the space I made." Zickum said, clearing out, that massive rock was exactly what they'd been expecting from him, and Eldor glanced at the Count and told him, "Don't worry, I'm backing you from here on out." Migas shot back, "Yeah, leave it with me," and promised he'd handle it on the biggest scale possible. Eldo leaned in and warned, "Just be careful about one thing," and the Count stared at him, stunned. Eldo's warned that breeding Bradana would lure monsters to that spot, and the Count leaned in, hooked. Then Eldo's added that Teyumame had its own nasty trick. When it drinks in magic, it summons more monsters right toward it. The Count demanded it, so yeah, that's the rule. It won't work without planting fighters there first. Eldo said, in general, it'll pull in the monsters close by, and the chance of a boss showing up there isn't zero. Eldo warned him that if anything went wrong, he'd need to hear about it right away now. The Count fired back, I'm so grateful, because they needed fighters, and he'd start hunting down the ones he already had in mind too. The owner promised he'd try raising people from the low ranks with the power of a fire spear. Those skills were so rare you could count the ones Eldo knew on your fingers, and even he stared in shock when he realized the name was Maria. The guy couldn't help but think, she remembered the skills and became a hero, that's insanely strong. If someone like her ever shows up at the Miji's camp, it'll be a huge help. He kept pressing his logic. Maria had to be hunting the aristocracy, and taking a stand against George's here was basically pointless, because he was the guild's biggest power and the whole country had his back. Eldo decided to keep his hopes on a leash. Megas reminded him that no matter what happened, they'd already locked in each other's duties. Eldo nodded, then shouted, all right, full speed ahead. After a while, they carved out a Bredana plantation, and at the same time, they lined up a water source for Teomame's fields. The crops are thriving and everything's going smoothly. Hunting grounds, now the monster hunt begins, drawn in by the Bredana. This is where medicinal plants are dragged in, crushed, processed, and turned into life-saving medicines. Eldo leaned in, chatting with a guy named Sabine, and when he heard what he had built, Eldo's eyes lit up. He couldn't stop praising the incredible devices. And seriously, whoever thought the Count could pull off something this big? He added that if they pulled off production on that scale, it might just crush the pressure onto George. Then Sabin grinned like, of course. He added that he finally understood this too. Only the people who'd given everything to answer Count Magus' call had made it here, and Eldo was convinced Sabin used to be a street-level, hand-to-hand fighter, the lowest of the low. Sabin swore he used to be an adventurer until his team met a monster too strong and left him behind. After that, he clung to survival, but something in his chest shattered. The boy kept insisting he'd totally lost his income, and he was minutes from dying. Then Count Migas swooped in out of nowhere, handed him a chunk of land, and rewrote his whole fate as a lowly peasant. Everyone's gathered here now, and deep down they all feel indebted to Count Migas. Because once again, he's trusted them too, and Eldo stepped up and told him he'd come here to meet Count Migas. The guy shot Sabine a question, did she know where the Count was? Sabine answered, yeah. And he immediately guessed he'd be at the processing site where he was holding a meeting about drug circulation, and Eldo rushed to thank him for the help. Eldo stormed into the building, spotted the Count, and fired off a question, was this a processing spot? Megas nodded and said yes, and then the guy started tearing into everything, inspecting it with ruthless care. He figured they had the Bradana covered, but these workers were grinding themselves to the bone and still couldn't kick production into gear, so he just knew they were burning through every last drop of the precious Bradana. Eldo kept pushing his logic, saying that if it really was that big, they should be able to brew as much Bradana as they wanted. Then he'd pitch a plan to swap their focus towards speed and work. Eldo stared at the stacked boxes of bottles when a man swooped in and announced that these were today's finished medicine portions. He bowed, smiled, and introduced himself as Ver. The man proudly said he'd been put in charge of managing and supervising the drug production here, and then his face lit up as he got to meet Eldo. Ver burst in and told them he'd heard about his wild energy from Mr. Mayig, then ordered both of them to follow. When they stepped into the room, they found Zickum standing there. That man greeted Eldo and the boy shot back, asking if he was from the guild. Then he admitted he owed Eldo for the fiesta, and he also took a stand against the nasty, job-based discrimination Lord Georgius had just rolled out. The man promised he'd join their case and slip in under Mega's group in the shadows, then Aldo snapped, so what are you really talking about? Veer grinned and said, all right, now I'll tell you everything about the cure. He started laying it out. With the current rollout, those medicines would land in every store, in every place, and the real key was that they'd be stocked in Maxia's trading company warehouses. They kept insisting that this setup means they can be sold anytime, so Eldo snapped, what does that even mean? Are we finally going to start getting medicines to residents at a cheap price? Elvis said that made sense, then asked if they wouldn't end up like George's. Because Vire snapped back that the moment you're dealing with people like that, George's is the kind of place that'll slap on unfair price hikes and call it business. Magus told everyone that yesterday some aristocrats' well-wisher slipped him advice, and he shut down any deal with Georgis. Then right after that, his wife suddenly fell ill. The Count told him they were back again, and this time they pushed even harder. Join Lord George's ranks, and only then would they sell him the medicine. I told Eldo that their medicine was ready and handed him one bottle, and he snapped that they'd been using coercive methods. Then the Count just nodded, saying yes. He added that they likely had no idea where they were headed, so they could strike first and smash them, though from George's side, it felt like they wouldn't even need to go that far. He kept pushing the logic forward. George's was probably clocking it, because those people decide who's meant to rise to the top. And if the best ranks keep leveling up, sharpening their skills and stacking experience, then they're going to be terrifyingly strong. That's why Maga's side has pulled in so many high-ranking allies, and everyone can't stop talking about him and Maria. Meanwhile, Georges is sweating over one thing. Any contracts those lower-rank forces try to make him sign under the Count's orders. Aldo caught the truth. Mega's life was about to be on the line. The boy pushed the Count, demanding whether they'd already handed over the terms for the replacement. Megas answered, "No, we can't go too far, we have to stay within our limits." Leo snapped that reasoning stops them, because politics and strategy are his job. He'll protect him and everyone else, and he's pushing to share what he's found about an opportunity. Eldo blared that Count Magus would get attacked any moment, and the ones who trained with Georges just called that place the Garden of Despair. Everyone stared at him in shock.